Chapter 151. Sitting cross-legged in the middle of the training grounds, Donna placed both of her hands on my back. Slowly, a purple hue pulsated from her body. Similarly closing my eyes, feeling her soft hands on my back, I exhaled as I tried my best to not get distracted by the soft feeling on my back. With her eyes closed, as she circulated her mana into my body, Donna softly said, "Focus and feel how my mana is circulating inside of your body. Make sure you remember the feeling, and try to envision it in your mind." Nodding my head, I did as Donna told me and focused on the mana that was entering my body through her hands. Shortly after, I could vividly feel Donna's mana smoothly entering my body through the channels of my body. It flowed much smoother and faster than what I was used to. It was a weird feeling. Shortly after, as I felt her mana circulate around my body, a frown appeared on my face. Although Donna was channeling her mana in my body, right now she was keeping her mana regulated at F rank, yet, I somehow felt stronger than before. This came as a shock to me as I was already E rank. It was a completely different feeling from usual. It felt as if I no longer needed to accumulate mana inside of my body before performing the first and second movements of the keiki style, as the mana inside of my body gathered at a much faster pace. How was that possible? Seeing that I noticed something, Donna softly said, "Do you feel it?" Nodding my head, I curiously asked, "Yes, but what is going on?" Knitting her brows, Donna did not respond immediately. Thereafter, as she thought of something, she said, "The way you channel your mana is way too crude and unrefined. From what I have observed so far, it does not even look like you know the proper channels to which you should be circulating your mana in, as the paths you use are not efficient at all. As of right now, the speed at which your mana is circulating is at 70% of what it should be, a big loss. As a result of this, it takes much longer for you to channel the mana inside of your body compared to other people." Pausing there for a second, Donna tried to word her words carefully as she softly said, "From what I am observing, it seems like no one properly taught you how to control your mana. Am I right about that?" Hearing Donna's question, a bitter smile appeared on my face. "Yes, you are not wrong." Seeing me nod in confirmation, the frown on Donna's face deepened as she softly mumbled, "Odd. Odd indeed. For someone to have been able to enter the lock, and yet still not know how to properly circulate their mana. This was indeed odd, however. That is how things were for me as of right now. This was what happened if you suddenly found yourself inside of your own novel coming from a world without mana. Perhaps the previous Ren knew how to circulate mana properly, but I never once learned how to properly control the mana inside of my body, nor which channels I should be using. With me entering the academy, and everyone already knowing how to properly channel their mana since young, I was not taught any of this. Every single time we were taught something regarding mana, I had to learn through experimenting with my body, and let us just say it was not the most pleasant experience. Although I tried searching the browser and watching videos online to get a better understanding of how to properly channel the mana inside of my body, it simply was not the same as Donna directly teaching me through her directly circulating her mana inside of my body. Don't lose focus and properly focus on my mana circulating in your body. Once again feeling Donna's mana circulating around my body, I lowered my head and softly mumbled, "I see, I am starting to understand now." After listening to Donna's explanation, everything was starting to make sense to me. The things that have been plaguing me since reincarnating here became much clearer to me. If I circulated the mana inside of my body, just like Donna was showing me, I could already envision myself, and my arts drastically improving. I could finally see a light at the end of the dark tunnel that I was stuck in for the past 2 months. Noticing the fluctuations in my emotions, Donna circulated the mana in her body even more as she softly said, "All right, focus and try to memorize the exact paths my mana is flowing inside of your body. This is the fastest and most efficient path that we humans have discovered after a lot of trial and error. I will not ask you about what type of arts you are practicing, as that is your business, but if you follow this path I am currently showing you, you will find that your mana will circulate faster, and that you can gather mana at a much faster pace than before when you are trying to use a skill or something that requires you to accumulate mana. If you can get a grasp of what I am teaching you, in the next month or so, your strength will see a considerable boost." Listening to Donna explain things for me, nodding my head seriously, I fully focused on the mana that was circulating inside of my body. Understood. Thus, for the next 2 hours, silence prevailed in the surroundings as Donna and I sat cross-legged in the middle of the room with her hands on my back. Slowly but surely, the mana inside of my body was starting to circulate at a much faster pace than before. I could vividly see myself improving at speeds that I could have only dreamt of in the past, causing my heart to beat in excitement. "All right, that is enough for today." At exactly 10 a.m., breaking the silence was Donna, who took her hands off my back and stood up. Stretching her neck, Donna looked at me and said, "Come back next week on Wednesday same time. We will resume your lessons then." Feeling Donna's hand leaving my back, I felt a slight tinge of regret before I exhaled and nodded my head. "Understood, thank you." Faintly smiling, while walking to the other side of the room and taking a towel, Donna threw it at me and said, "I am just holding on to my end of the deal. Since you held your end of the deal, it would not be right if I did not do it as well, no." Taking the towel that Donna threw at me, an awkward smile appeared on my face as I looked down at where I was sitting. My clothes were completely drenched in sweat at the moment, and a pool of sweat appeared in the area I was sitting. Because I was so focused on Donna's teachings, I did not notice how much I was sweating. Noticing my awkward face, Donna smiled as she shook her head. All right, you better get going. Lessons will start in a couple of hours, so take a shower and rest up until then. I will see you in class. Understood. Nodding my head, I quickly turned around and made my way out of the training grounds. Though I was tired, I could not suppress my excitement. Even though this was the first lesson, I could already see myself progress even further, especially in my understanding of how mana flowed. From today onwards, I would definitely see major improvements in the understanding of my arts. Thinking along those lines, wiping the sweat that had accumulated around my body, I happily left the training ground. After Ren left, Donna untied her ponytail as her hair gently scattered all the way down to her back. Looking back at the training session she just had with Ren, her mouth could not help but arc upwards. He was talented, all right. Although his talent was assessed at D rank, Donna did not think any less of him. After all, being a hero was not the only respected profession in the world. He could very well find himself becoming an agent in the future. Moreover, recalling her sparring session with him, Donna could not help but become more interested in him. The way he learned was simply very efficient. Although he was not as exceptional as some of the other students that she had seen before, like Kevin and some others, his thought process was what impressed her, especially at how he would always try to not commit the same mistake again. She could not say he was a quick learner, but the way he tried to not commit the same mistake again and learn from his previous mistakes was what thoroughly impressed her. Such a thought process was what enabled him to learn fast. Moreover, from what she heard from the others, apparently, he was the one that came up with the strategy for the tryouts. Although it was not the most perfect strategy, from the way he analyzed everyone's capabilities as well as the opponent's thought process, Donna believed that he could very well become someone of importance in the future. Though he may not become a ranked hero, he could very well get a position as a leading agent, which was just as prolific as being an S-ranked hero. Thinking thus far, Donna could not wait for what awaited her student in the future. Would he shine in this forsaken world? Or would he be buried alongside the other unpolished gems out there? Donna did not know, but she sure as heck was going to try her best to help him out. After all, that was her duty as a teacher. Chapter 152. Fuah. White steam rose in the air as I stepped out of a capsule. Kaha. Groaning out loud, I frowned and massaged my forehead. Squinting my eyes, I softly mumbled to myself. No wonder there is a time limit for using the virtual time regressor. The reason why I was massaging my forehead was because I was currently experiencing a mild migraine. I believe that the migraine I was experiencing was probably due to the fact that I had just used the time regressor machine that was accessible by everyone in the dorm. With the machine injecting neuron-enhancing substances into my body in order to slow down time, the neurons inside of my brain were being enhanced and stimulated in a way that everything would flow so fast inside of my brain that it would feel like time itself had slowed down. Still, it was not a pleasant experience. Honestly, the reason why I tested the time regressor machine today was because Leo and Ram were still in the middle of their lessons, and I had nothing to do. And wow, just wow. Only after using the time regressor machine for myself did I finally understand why it was so coveted by Gerard and the others. It was simply a cheat code. I only spent an hour there, but it felt as if I had stayed there for a whole day. Though it did not sound like much, on that one day I spent in the machine, I constantly practiced all of my arts without any distractions. One full day of training without getting tired nor losing focus. It was simply absurd. With it, not only did I improve my arts by a lot, but I also managed to consolidate most of the knowledge that I had learned this morning from Donna. As of right now, my Keiki style, Ring of Vindication, and drifting steps were one step closer to breaking through the greater realm of mastery. A huge step for me. Once I reached the greater realm of mastery for my sword arts, I would definitely see a massive boost in my strength. With just a few more lessons from Donna accompanied by the time regressor machine to consolidate my knowledge, reaching the greater realm of mastery within 2 months would not be a problem. Just in time for Imura. Thinking thus far, I calmed myself down. A frown appeared on my brows as I thought to myself, if I have 2 timestamps rather than 1, the rate of my progress would definitely drastically increase. It is too bad that I have to give one of my timestamps to Gerard each week. The more I was reminded of the fact that I had to give Gerard a timestamp, the deeper my frown became. After a bit more thinking, I shook my head. This will not do. Now that I had finally realized the importance of the time regressor machine, I brushed my hair to the side as I calmly walked back to my dorms. I softly and coldly said, I guess it is about time I set up my board. The next day, Northern District, CASA headquarters. Click. Opening the door to the warehouse main building, I was instantly greeted with a deathly silence. Frowning slightly, turning to the corner of the room leading to the main hall of the building, I raised my voice. Anybody here? Soon after, as I entered the main hall where a large squared wooden desk sat, I found 3 people sitting on it quietly staring at each other. Noticing my presence, turning their attention towards me, the first one to greet me was Small Snake. Ren, you are finally here. Thereafter, after Small Snake greeted me, the next one was Leopold, who had both of his legs on the table, followed by Angelica's cold voice. Welcome back, boss. Human, you are finally here. Staring at them for a brief moment, I nodded my head and greeted them back. Hello. Thereafter, sitting at the head of the large table, I interlocked my hands and supported my chin on them. I calmly looked at Small Snake and asked, so, what seems to be the issue? Please explain to me in detail. For the past few days, I have constantly been getting text messages from Small Snake regarding Angelica, although I mostly ignored them, as I would not be able to do anything while I was in the lock. Now that I was back here, it was about time I tackled the issue. I just hope it was not something annoying. Nodding his head, Small Snake immediately started complaining. It is Angelica. She has been trying to go out in the streets every day. It has gotten to the point where I have to rely on Leopold to restrain her. You understand what the consequences of her leaving this place are, don't? Shut up, stick like human. This matriarch signed the contract, not to be caged like a bird. Interrupting Small Snake mid-sentence, Angelica crossed her arms and glared at him. If this matriarch wants to go out, she will naturally go out. Pointing at her, Small Snake looked at me and exclaimed, you see what I am talking about? Nodding my head, I responded, I see you have a valid. However, before I could finish speaking, cutting me off, Small Snake continued. Also, because you have her core and she is too far away from you, her powers are significantly reduced. If not for that, I would not have minded letting her go, as she is simply too annoying at the moment. This is on you. With her powers significantly reduced because of the core problem, she cannot go out as her concealment abilities are currently drastically weakened. Moreover, if she was spotted leaving our building, do you want me to go on? Shaking my head, I stopped Small Snake from talking. No, I understand. What Small Snake said made sense. Because I had Angelica's core inside of my body, her strength was a far cry from what it was at her peak. Unless she stayed next to me, Angelica's strength would be cut by more than half. The reason for this was because the further demons were from their core, the weaker they became. The reason for this was obvious. If I made it so that demons could only die unless their core was destroyed, and if there were no repercussions in them not having their core, the demons could just hide their core and literally be invincible. However, God was fair me. In order to rebalance the demons, I decided to make demons weaker the longer they stayed away from their core. Also, tell her that I do not like being called stick like human. I have got a name, and it is Small Snake. Staring at Small Snake weirdly as my brow inadvertently raised, I shot back, you call Small Snake a name? Hearing my reply, Small Snake froze for a second before softly saying, it is a code name. Exactly, and to be honest, stick like human sounds better than Small Snake. It has got a nice tinge to it, no? What do you think, Leopold? Puff. With his legs on the table and puffing smoke in the air, Leopold nonchalantly looked at me before shaking his head. Don't look at me. I have no interest in joining this conversation. He really did not have any interest. After having dealt with Angelica for the whole week, Leopold was tired. Even though he still had not accomplished a single mission, he felt more tired now than back when he was tutoring in the Moonlight Mercenary Group. Still, though he complained, he was not dissatisfied with this place. After all, they at least treated him well here, unlike in the Moonlight Mercenary Group, where they did not even bother promoting him. Noticing Leopold's attitude, I shook my head. Thereafter, as I inhaled some of the smoke coming from his cigarette, I could not help but add, you should probably stop smoking. It is not good for you. Puff. Briefly glancing at me, patting onto his chest as he took another puff of his cigarette, Leopold reassured, it is fine, I have got lungs of steel. Smoke ain't gonna kill someone like me. Tell that to all the people that die of cancer. Never mind, I forgot that was not a thing anymore. Right. Cancer and all other diseases that plagued humanity back in my world were practically something that did not exist in this world anymore. No wonder Leopold smoked like crazy. Thinking of something and turning my attention back to Small Snake, I asked, so, regarding Ryan, did he contact you? Shaking his head, Small Snake responded, no, not directly. What about indirectly? Placing his hand on his chin, Small Snake nodded his head, indirectly, yes. Surprised by this news, I raised my brow and eagerly asked, oh, how did he do that? Seeing my excited face, Small Snake's face twitched for a second, before he softly recounted what had happened these past few days. Yes, but it seems like he has tried to hack into our main computer system. If not for the fact that I was awake at the time he tried to hack us, he would have most likely succeeded. I also want to add that he tried to hack a lot of things, from computers to the cameras and security systems added in the building. Hearing Small Snake's recount of what had happened a few days ago, leaning on my chair, a faint smile appeared on my lips. So he tried to hack this place. Nodding his head, looking at me, Small Snake doubtfully asked, yes, that is why I want to ask. Do you think he is trustworthy? Was Ryan trustworthy? No, not in the least bit. Especially since I knew nothing about his real character, as he dies in the novel like an extra. As of right now, he was untrustworthy. Still, that did not matter. In a relationship where all that mattered was our self-interest, signing a monocontract with him would be the most ideal option. The rest of the things like loyalty and companionship could be developed later. Thus, as my thoughts reached there, without answering Small Snake's question, a small chuckle escaped from my mouth as I softly said, ha ha ha, what a cute little boy. Don't mind his little hacking game. Opening his eyes wide, Small Snake's voice grew louder. What? He just hacked into our system, and you are letting him go scot-free. Smiling at Small Snake, I replied with a question of my own. Small Snake, do you really think he hacked us with the intent of not being noticed? Impossible. With how smart Ryan was, there was no way he would make such an obvious and blatant attempt at hacking us. He was definitely just trying to test the waters. What do you mean? Smiling at Small Snake's confusion, I started explaining. It is obvious that he hacked us fully knowing that he might get discovered. It was sort of a test from him to us. A test to determine whether or not we were not all talk. Glancing at me by the side, Small Snake curiously asked, did we pass? Hearing Small Snake's question, I shrugged my shoulders. Who knows? I really was not sure. Maybe or maybe not. Who knows? Only time will tell. But what I did know for sure was that we had caught his interest. Had he not had any interest in us, he would have never hacked us. With a frown on his face, Small Snake asked, so what do we do now? Briefly glancing at Small Snake, I leisurely said, so we wait. It is obvious that right now he is observing us. More than Ryan wanting to hack us, because he wanted to find out about our operations, this was most likely an attempt from him to let us know that he was watching us. He was telling us that depending on our performance in the future, he would decide on whether or not he would sign the contract. How interesting. Crossing my legs as I tapped on the table, the corner of my lips curved slightly as I amusingly said, what a cautious and cute little boy. The more I get to know about him, the more I am starting to like him. I especially like the confidence he has in himself. Though I do not know if this was forced on his end to look stronger for his mom, it does not matter. He will for sure make for a great piece. Chapter 153. So, staring at me for a couple of seconds and recalling something, Small Snake asked, anything on your end? As I was still thinking about Ryan and his little tricks, I heard Small Snake's voice. I turned around and questioningly looked at him. My end. What was he on about? Seeing that I did not understand, Small Snake elaborated, didn't you say that you wanted to recruit that girl called Ava? Clapping my hand in understanding, I exclaimed, that. Right, I almost forgot about that. Well, rather than me forgetting about it, it was more like there was not an opportunity for me to interact with her yet, especially considering the situation in the dorm complex. Staring at Small Snake, I vaguely said, unfortunately, an unfortunate situation arose. It was truly an unfortunate situation. Who would have expected 5 annoying kids to take control of the dorm complex? It completely threw me off, and it sort of made it harder for me to approach her. Moreover, I also could not think of a way to approach her naturally. After all, she was an extremely introverted individual, and we did not share any topics in common, making any interaction with her difficult. Still, that did not mean I did not have anything planned. It is just that I did not have enough time to execute my plans, as I was quite busy this past week. Noticing my reaction, Small Snake curiously asked, an unfortunate situation? What happened? Shrugging my shoulders, I waved my hand as I brushed past the topic, and looked at him seriously. Nothing much, it should be handled soon. In fact, I might need your help with that. My help? Taken aback and hearing about the fact that I would soon require his help, Small Snake felt an ominous premonition. Recalling his past experiences with me, every time a situation happened where I would be requiring his help, Small Snake remembered always finding himself swamped with work. Smiling, I nodded my head. Yup. Cautiously looking at me, Small Snake weakly said, do I have any say in this? Nope, moreover this is for the benefit of the group. I was not lying. Since I was planning on removing those 5 little bastards from the dorm, I needed all the help I could get. Yes, I could do it without his help, but I wanted to squeeze as much as I possibly could from them. If not, then it would truly be a pity. After all, there was a lot to gain from this operation. Staring at me, Small Snake did not say anything. Sigh. Thereafter, after a couple of seconds of silence, an extended sigh escaped from Small Snake's mouth. Eventually, he nodded his head. Fine. What other choice did he have? Since he was now working for me, Small Snake could only comply. However, before he fully agreed, he pointed towards Angelica, who was coldly sitting on the seat opposite to him. Then what about her? If you want my help, at least do something about her. Hearing Small Snake's remark, Angelica coldly snorted at him. Humph, shut up you little twig. Staring at Angelica, a bitter smile appeared on my face as I looked at Small Snake. Haven't really thought about it. Why does she want to go out anyways? Shaking his head, Small Snake helplessly said as he raised his voice, how would I know? Ask her. I too want to know. Turning my head towards Angelica, I repeated, Angelica, why do you want to go out so much? Wouldn't you be safer here? Considering the fact that I had her core, she was in no state to go out. If she really went out in her current state, she could easily be identified as a demon. Going out in her present state was just like asking for her to be killed. Frowning, Angelica coldly said, why? Why must I be stuck here in this place with them? This matriarch can do whatever she wants and, shaking his head, Small Snake interjected, because you're a demon. Frowning, Angelica glared at Small Snake and said, what's the problem with that? Had I had my core with me, I would not have had a problem moving around unobstructed in your territory. Yes, but right now you do not have your core, so going out is just like asking for yourself to be killed. Humph, what does it matter to you what I do? You stick like human. How many times did I tell you that that is not my name? Listening to Angelica and Small Snake bickering, a frown appeared on my face. What Angelica said was not wrong. If she was at full strength, she would not have had a problem roaming around the streets unobstructed. But now that she was weakened, this no longer applied to her. The reason why demons were able to enter the human domain so easily was because of their great camouflage techniques. Unless they were trying to break into the Union or the central government, demons could pretty much go anywhere they pleased. Well, either way, the human domain was so big. Even without the techniques, sneaking in was not something that hard to do. Unless they wanted to sneak in places that were highly secured, demons could pretty much roam everywhere they pleased. The same went with humans in the demon domain. As long as they were not trying to enter a highly secured place, sneaking in with special techniques was not hard at all. After a moment of silence, and thinking of something, Small Snake turned his head in my direction, and carefully suggested, Ren, since she can camouflage herself and move unnoticed, why don't you let her follow you back to the academy? Since you have the core, as long as she sticks close to you, she can camouflage herself without any problem. What? Are you Kraz? Hearing Small Snake's suggestion, I immediately tried to reject it. Why would I want to bring her back to the lock with me? If she was caught, I could get into serious trouble. However, abruptly stopping myself, I placed my finger on my chin as I pondered. Thereafter, as I thought about the issue more calmly, a faint smile appeared on my lips. Actually, this was not a bad idea. With Angelica staying next to me, I would essentially have a C+ rank bodyguard with me at all times. Although I was generally safe in the lock, what about in situations where I went out of the lock? Wouldn't her aid potentially save me? Glancing at Angelica, who was coldly looking back at me, I squinted my eyes and carefully asked, Angelica, how well can you camouflage yourself? I could not get too excited yet. I first needed to know the full extent of her abilities. Snorting disdainfully as she stared at me, Angelica coldly said, this matriarch can turn into anything she wants. Moreover, my technique also enables me to fully hide my aura from anyone. As long as someone does not directly inspect this one's body, they would never be able to find out about my true identity. Surprised by her answer, I could not help but ask again as I tried to make sure I did not hear wrongly. Angelica, you can turn into anything you want? With her arms crossed, Angelica nodded her head. Yes. Thinking of something and suppressing my excitement, I quickly rummaged through my pocket. Here, turn into this. Thereafter, taking out a phone from my pocket, I quickly typed something and showed Angelica a photo of a black cat. It was a common household pet. Frowning, Angelica questioningly said, a cat. Nodding my head, I excitedly said, yes, turn into this. Pets were not forbidden in the lock, therefore, if Angelica disguised herself as a cat, there should not be any issues with me bringing her back into my dorm. Thinking along those lines, I could not help but be excited. This was perfect. Had I known that she could have done this beforehand, I would have asked her to do this long ago. Not only would I now have a bodyguard of C+ rank, but I could also make good use of her, especially considering that I could use her for sneaking in and doing things that I was incapable of before. Yes, the more I thought about it, the larger the smile on my face became. To make things even better, I now had a common topic to talk about with Ava. How perfect was that? This was like 3 birds with 1 stone. Staring at the cat in the picture, a trace of disgust appeared on Angelica's face as she flatly refused. I refuse. As if cold water was poured on my head, I raised my brow and asked, didn't you say you wanted to go out? I did, but why must I turn myself into a cat? She was a proud matriarch. The fact that her core was taken away was already humiliating enough, and now he was asking her to be his pet. No way could she stand that. You really will not change into a cat? No way. Frowning, I stared at Angelica's eyes for a couple of seconds. Shortly after, shaking my head disappointedly, I put my phone away and said, oh well, suit yourself. Since you asked me to bring you out, this was the only method I could think of. If not, you can just remain here and hang out with Stick Like Human. Hearing the word Stick Like Human coming out of my mouth, Small Snake, who had remained quiet for quite a while, glared at me. Hey. Ignoring Small Snake, I deeply stared at Angelica. Are you sure about your decision? Frowning, Angelica did not answer immediately. Thinking back at what she had done for the past 2 weeks here, Angelica could not help but recall how she felt like a caged bird unable to get out. She really hated that feeling. She felt like a prisoner that could not escape no matter how hard she tried. To make things worse, her strength continuously decreased with each passing day. She hated the feeling with all of her heart. But going as low as becoming his pet. Frowning hard, Angelica was currently facing a dilemma. On one end, she could be trapped like a prisoner with no hopes of going out unless she wanted to die, or on the other end, be able to get her freedom back, but in the process becoming a pet. Clenching her fist underneath the desk, Angelica looked at me and carefully said, you won't make me do weird things, right? Tilting my head, I repeated, weird things? Like feed me cat food and degrade me by treating me like a real cat. Hearing her words, I instantly understood what her problem was. Her pride. I see, her reaction now made sense. Her pride would not allow for her to be treated like a common household animal. It was just too humiliating for her. Understanding this, I nodded my head and reassured her. I understand. Sure, just tell me whatever you do not want me to do, and I will comply. Well, as long as it isn't too unreasonable. Hearing my response, after a couple of seconds, biting her lips, Angelica reluctantly nodded her head. Fine. She had no choice. If she wanted to go out, she could only do so on my terms. After thinking about the pros and cons, she could only reluctantly accept my conditions. Great. Smiling brightly, I quickly turned on my phone, and once again showed her the photo of the black cat, and excitedly said, perfect, all right, now turn into a cat. Give me. Snatching my phone from my hand, Angelica deeply stared at the picture of the cat. Thereafter, she closed her eyes. Staring at Angelica, who was about to turn into a cat, I could not help but secretly sigh in relief. Fortunately, I had chosen a cat instead of another animal. Had it been a dog, high chance she would have never agreed. Phew. Frowning slightly and channeling the mana inside of her body, a red hue shrouded Angelica's body. Subsequently, at a speed visible to the naked eye, her body shrunk. Thereafter, as Angelica's body became smaller, black fur suddenly started appearing all over her body, accompanied by her eyes and structure changing alongside it. Shortly after standing with 4 legs on the ground, a black cat appeared before me. Opening her eyes, revealing 2 yellow eyes with thin oval pupils, Angelica, who was now a black cat, coldly said, "Is this good enough?" Staring at Angelica, who was now a cat, I could not help but gape in amazement. Oh my god. This is perfect. She looked no different from a black cat. Moreover, I felt no energy fluctuation coming from her. No matter how I tried, I could not tell the difference between her and a real cat. The more I looked at her, the larger the smile on my face became. Now this was what you called a game changer. Chapter 154. Walking along the streets of Ashton City, in the area next to the lock, with my hands inside of the pockets of my newly purchased black hoodie, I calmly looked at the stores around me. As I observed the stores around me, glancing towards my right where a black cat was lazily resting on my shoulder, I helplessly shook my head. Since I could not let her stay in the lock by herself, I naturally could only bring her alongside with me on my little trip out. Currently, there were quite a lot of people walking down the busy streets as shops with large signs and posters appeared everywhere. Moreover, large billboards with handsome and beautiful girls could be seen everywhere, as every 100 meters a new billboard could be seen. Wah, look at how cute that cat is. Do you want to go pet it? Look at its fur, it is so beautiful. However, if there was one thing that was currently bothering me, it would be the continuous whispers coming from the people around me as everyone stared at the black cat, who was quietly resting on my shoulder. The culprit for such commotion was obviously Angelica, who was currently in disguise. Fortunately, the reason why they were looking at her was not because they had found out her true identity. No, rather, it was because she was too cute. Despite currently being in the form of a cat, because of how naturally charming Angelica was, her charm was naturally preserved even in her cat form, causing anyone that saw her to involuntarily want to pet her. Fortunately, it looked like no one noticed that she was a demon, else things could have gotten quite burdensome. Please do not touch her. From time to time though, I had to stop people from approaching her and touching her. This was for both my good and their good. Considering the fact that Angelica was a bloodthirsty demon, there was a possibility of her suddenly killing anyone without notice. Moreover, if they suddenly injected mana inside of her body, there was a chance that her identity would be exposed. Thus, I stopped anyone that tried to approach her. Lazily resting on my shoulder, gently licking one of her paws, Angelica asked, "Where are we going?" Wearing my earbuds without playing any music, I calmly replied, "Not sure, I am just taking a casual look around." It is true. Since I had nothing else to do, I decided to take a stroll in the city that was next to the lock. Moreover, since I did not trust Angelica being by herself in the lock, I brought her with me. Actually, I did have one goal in mind from this casual trip. Buy a new sword. Recalling my sword that was resting inside of my dorm, I could not help but sigh. Having spent a lot of time with me, I was naturally attached to it. However, now that I had gotten stronger, it was about time I switched weapons. Hiding inside of my hoodie because of the constant pestering, Angelica softly said, "Casual look?" Yeah. Honestly, this was not part of the original plan. I had originally thought of visiting my family since my headquarters were not too far from where they lived, but after a bit of thinking, I chose not to. I did not want to alert Matthew of my appearance. If my appearance alerted him or altered his plans like before, there was a possibility of something unpleasant happening. Thus, after a bit of thinking, I decided to not interact with my family face to face until I returned from Imara. Of course, I would also make sure to voice call them from time to time. However, that was not really a problem, as they would always make sure to call me at the end of each day. I guess this was the consequence of having a doting family, which was another reason as to why I had to get rid of the curse from their body. And on that note, I also needed to make preparations for the future after the curse that plagued my parents was dissolved. Once I broke the curse, the first thing Matthew and his contracted demon would do would obviously be to try to attack my parents in hopes of taking revenge against me. This was obviously not ideal. No, rather, this was not good at all. Although my dad was a D-rank hero, the enemy he was facing at that time was unknown. I could not afford to take any risk. Therefore, I had to figure out what to do after I broke the curse. Feeling Angelica's small body hiding inside of the hood of my hoodie, I secretly thought to myself, should I send her? If I sent her to protect them, perhaps Matthew would not make a move. Yeah, that idea sounded indeed quite plausible. Moreover, I was sure Nola was going to love Angelica in cat form. Either way, that was something for another time. Stopping in front of a pedestrian lane as I waited for the streetlight to turn green, looking ahead, I calmly spoke to the air. "Angelica, are you sure they will not be able to spot you once we get in the lock? You know that the lock is filled with S-rank heroes, right? I find it hard to believe that you can hide from their prying eyes." This was the thing I was most worried about. With the fact that the whole academy was filled with superhuman teachers who could crush buildings with just the flick of their fingers, my concerns were understandable. After all, with how strong they were, they could probably discover her secret. No. With her body curled together and eyes closed, hearing my question, Angelica lazily responded, "Do not worry, human. As long as I retain my form and do not channel any of my energy, it is impossible for anyone to notice my presence unless they are touching me or are using an extremely special skill. I have already tested this before. Hearing this, I secretly sighed in relief. She was probably not lying. Still, it was better to be safe rather than sorry. After I returned back to the lock, it was better that I set some rules for Angelica. Like for example never go out whenever I was not with her or other boring stuff like that. Though I sounded like a mom, this was in fact for my own benefit after all. Her actions directly reflected me, therefore, she had to be obedient. As my thoughts paused there, I soon found myself in front of a large shop with the word Remedy Bookstore written on it. Might as well. Staring at the sign for a couple of seconds, I decided to open the door and go in. I had suddenly recalled the fact that I needed to buy some books for some of the courses. The sword could wait for after this. Ding dong. Entering the building, the bells at the front door lightly chimed indicating that a customer had come in. Thereafter, as soon as I stepped in, I instantly smelled the scent of books and paper enter the nostrils of my nose, prompting me to savor the new smell. Welcome. Greeting me at the front desk was an elegant young man that wore a brown apron. Pointing towards the different rows of bookshelves in the distance, he calmly explained, "If you are looking for books, on your right you can find the fiction area. In the middle materials you can find the materials for academy studies. Lastly, on your left, there is the research materials section, where different unproven hypotheses are posted. Everything that you desire you can find it here. So please take your time and enjoy reading the books till then. Thank you very much." Nodding my head towards the clerk, I quickly headed towards the middle area. Taking out my phone, I quickly scrolled down and checked which book I needed to buy and proceeded to pick them one by one. Principles of Monocombustion, Law and Integration of Modern Society, Decomposition of Molecular. After a while, holding on to a stack of books whilst making sure I took everything that I needed, I directly headed back towards where the clerk was. However, abruptly stopping, my eyesight soon paused on a certain book that was being displayed in the open. 48 Laws of Power. Staring at the book for a couple of seconds, a frown appeared on my face as I softly mumbled, 48 Laws of Power? I think I have heard of this book back in my previous world. Out of curiosity, walking over to where the book was, putting the books in my hand down, I casually flipped through some of the pages of the book. However, after 10 minutes, I soon found myself unable to stop reading. My mind was completely engrossed. After a while, exhaling out loud, I could not help but look at the book in front of me with a bit of excitement. Though it was a quick skim, my mind was currently blown away by the insights contained within the book. It was literally a walking cheat code for any transmigration protagonist. It was insane. Plaque. I am buying this. Without hesitation, closing the book, I quickly decided to buy this book. As I thought about all of the possibilities I could achieve after I read and referenced this book, a faint smile appeared on my lips. Ren. However, just as I was basking in my own delusions, snapping me out of my thoughts, was the sound of a soft and cold voice coming not so far from where I was. Frowning and turning around, I soon found to my surprise, a beautiful young girl with glossy black hair staring in my direction. "Who are you?" Taking a better look at the young girl that had just called my name. At first I did not recognize who it was as they were wearing a pair of sunglasses and a baseball hat. However, lowering her glasses, I was soon able to identify who it was, resulting in my pupils constricting slightly. Amanda? Chapter 155. Amanda? Staring at me, Amanda nodded her head and politely greeted me. Hello. Glancing at her from the side as I was still holding on to a stack of books, I lightly said, "What a coincidence. What brings you here?" As I spoke, frowning slightly, I took a good look around me and suddenly realized what the problem with my sentence was. Right, how could I forget? This was a bookstore. Moreover, it was close to the academy. Taking into account Amanda's personality and the fact that she loved reading books, chances of meeting her here were not that low. Lifting her left hand, Amanda flashed a blue book in front of me and said, "I am here to buy books." Nodding my head in understanding, I softly mumbled, "Right, you do like books after all." Tilting her head to the side, allowing for her hair to gently brush past her shoulders, Amanda's brows furrowed slightly as she asked, "How do you know?" Hearing her question, I froze for a split second. Fortunately, this only lasted for a short moment as I was able to quickly recompose myself before calmly responding. "It is because whenever I see you in the morning, you are always reading a book." I see. Hearing my explanation, Amanda's frown lessened, and thereafter she nodded in understanding. It was true, she was always reading books in the morning. I guess it was not strange for someone to know that she liked reading books. Yeah. Seeing that Amanda had bought my explanation, I secretly sighed in relief. Fortunately, I did not panic due to my slip-up as I was somehow able to retain my composure. Though I do have to say that my composure has been getting better and better with each passing day that I was in this world. Now I did not panic as much as I used to, and even when I panicked, my brain would not suddenly turn blank like before. Staring at the large pile of books in my hand, and looking at some of the titles printed on the sides, Amanda softly said, "Are you buying school materials?" Hearing her question, I calmly nodded my head. Yes, I am. With the new semester starting, I naturally need to buy the corresponding books for the upcoming classes. As you probably know, I am not very good at studying. I understand. Nodding her head in understanding, Amanda soon noticed a strange book on top of the piles of books in my hands and curiously asked, "What is that book?" Staring in the direction of where she was looking at, I soon saw that it was the book I was just looking at moments before. 48 Laws of Power. This one? Just a book I casually picked up after buying the school materials. Meow. As I was speaking, cutting me mid-sentence was a meowing sound that came from the back of my hoodie. Hearing Angelica's meow, staring at Amanda, my mouth slightly twitched. Thereafter, peeking from my hoodie, Angelica appeared before Amanda. Ignoring Amanda and licking her right paw, Angelica's voice entered my mind. Human, hurry up. Suddenly hearing Angelica's voice inside of my mind, I could not help but be stunned as I involuntarily gasped out loud. Ha! Noticing my strange reaction, Amanda looked at me in confusion. Ren. Raising my hand, I reassured Amanda I was fine as I glared at Angelica, who was on my shoulder. Ah, it is nothing. My cat just scratched the back of my neck by accident. Ah, I see. Seeing that Amanda had bought my excuse, I stared at Angelica and softly whispered, "What the hell was that for? And how did you suddenly speak inside of my head?" Whilst still licking her paws, a trace of disdain appeared in Angelica's eyes as she said, "Idiot, I am communicating with you through your mind. This is a common technique that you humans should be able to do, and yet you do not know it. Just think and I will be able to communicate with you." Frowning slightly, heeding Angelica's instructions, I quickly spoke inside of my mind. "Can you hear me?" "Yes, I can. Now hurry up, I am getting bored of this place." Staring intently at Angelica, who was communicating with me through my mind, Amanda pointed at her and curiously asked, "Is that your cat?" Hearing Amanda's voice, turning my head in her direction, I nodded my head. "Oh, yes she is. Is it a male or a female?" "Female." "Female, I see." Staring at Angelica, who was resting on my shoulder, hesitating for a couple of seconds, Amanda asked, "What is her name?" Hearing her question, I froze for a second. "Name, Ang." Just as I was about to call her Angelica, noticing a piercing glare coming from my right, I quickly realized that naming her Angelica was not the best idea, and thus out of the spur of the moment said the first thing that came into my mind, pudding. However, as soon as those words came out of my mouth, I instantly regretted it as I noticed Angelica's body stiffen on my shoulder. Unaware of my current predicament, placing her hand on her chin, Amanda softly repeated, "Pudding." Weakly turning my head to the right and staring at Angelica, who was still in shock, I gritted my teeth. Fuck it. Since I already said it, there was no going back. Yes, her name is Padao. However, abruptly stopping me mid-sentence, I soon found a sharp cat claw slap my face from the side. Thereafter I noticed Angelica's yellow eyes menacingly glaring in my direction. Not long after I heard her angry voice echo inside of my ears. "Human, how dare you call me something as humiliating as pudding? I demand you correct yourself immediately, or this matriarch will let you taste the consequences." Hearing Angelica's angry words, the first thought that came into my mind was, how do you know what a pudding is in the first place? Do demons eat pudding? Speechless, for a moment Angelica forgot about her anger as she responded, "Your stupidity knows no bounds. How long do you think we have been in this world? We know everything about you humans as we have spied and studied your behavior for decades. Of course, I know what a pudding is." That made sense. Same went for humans. We too have studied demons for a long time, and thus know about most of the stuff they do to pass time. I see, I guess it does make sense now. Humph, since you know you better. Unaware of the conversation between me and Angelica, Amanda nodded her head as she looked at Angelica, who was resting on my shoulder. "Pudding, I see. That is a very suitable name." Hesitating for a moment and pursing her lips, Amanda lightly glanced at Angelica, who was glaring daggers at me from my shoulder, and after mustering her courage, she carefully said, "Can I pet it?" Taken aback, turning my attention back towards Amanda, I tried to make sure I heard correctly. "Can you what?" "Pet it. I mean, pet pudding." Staring at Amanda's serious gaze, the gears of my mind halted for a second before I finally realized what was going on, and a faint smile appeared on my lips. "Ah, I see. I guess it is true when they say girls love cute things." Even Amanda, who seemed to have a heart made out of ice, could not help but love cute things. Staring at Angelica, who was on my shoulder, I helplessly shook my head. I would not mind, but as you can see, Pudding is not really the friendliest cat in the world. You see, she is a bit of a feisty one now." Just as I was trying to come up with an excuse to refuse Amanda's request, stopping me mid-sentence was Angelica's paw slapping my left cheek. "Hey, watch it. How dare you still call me that? You are seeking death." Swooshaw. Cocking my head to the side, I dodged another one of her paws that was headed in my direction. Thereafter, I dodged another 4 attacks coming from her. "Hey, stop it. How dare you humiliate me like this?" Swooshaw. Thus for the next few seconds, I dodged Angelica's feisty paws, as she continuously aimed for my face. Only after holding both of her paws with my hands that I managed to stop her from going on a rampage. "I see." Hearing my response, lowering her head, a trace of disappointment flashed across Amanda's eyes. Seeing the disappointment in Amanda's eyes, I could only pretend to not have seen it. Since Angelica's identity could be exposed if she touched her, I could only feign ignorance much to her disappointment. Thus, in order to help her quickly forget about her disappointment, I quickly tried to change the topic. "Right, Amanda, do you know a place where I can buy weapon now?" However, before I had the chance to finish speaking, taking advantage of the small window of opportunity of the moment I was distracted, Angelica once again assaulted me. "Smack-ah, damn it, Putta now. How dare you call me such a humiliating name again?" Swooshaw, swooshaw. Trying to grab both of her claws, I tried to stop her from attacking me as I quickly screamed inside of my mind. "I am sorry, I will make it up to you later, stop attacking me." "Shut up, you scum." Ignoring my pleas, Angelica continued to attack me with her paws. Helpless, I could only try to catch both of her hands like before. Fortunately, because she was currently in cat mode, her strength was significantly reduced. As I dodged her attacks, I could not help but curse to myself. Damn it, if not for the fact that channeling my mana towards her core could expose her identity, I would not have been in this stupid situation. PFFF. As I was trying to stop Angelica from attacking me, I suddenly heard faint giggling sounds coming from my right, distracting me for a second. Seeing me get distracted, taking advantage of the moment, Angelica tried to attack me, but before her paw could hit my face, I quickly grabbed them with both of my hands. Seeing that both of her paws were currently restrained, Angelica angrily shouted, "Let go, human." Ignoring Angelica's angry screams, I turned my head towards where the giggling sound came from. Thereafter, as I turned around, I was stunned by what I saw. Covering her mouth with her delicate hand, as if the glaciers had melted and spring had arrived, Amanda's blossoming smile appeared in my vision, causing me to fall into a daze for a split second. Fortunately, this only lasted for a split second, as I was quickly able to recompose myself. However, although I was able to quickly recover, that did not mean that I did not take any damage. Because of what happened, my heart had almost skipped a beat. That one short moment where Amanda smiled just now had almost caused my heart, which was usually indifferent to girls, to skip a beat. Looking up at me, whilst still covering her mouth with her delicate hand, Amanda tried to switch the topic as she recalled the words that I was trying to say before. "You are looking for a weapon?" Secretly, as she tried to change the topic, Amanda was embarrassed, as this was the first time since young that she had lost her composure like that. She did not know what had gotten into her. Yeah. Taking a deep breath to calm myself down, I nodded my head. Similarly, taking a deep breath and returning to her usual stoic expression, placing her hand on her chin and pondering for a couple of seconds, Amanda seriously looked at me. Thereafter, thinking for a couple of seconds and seemingly having come up with a decision, she suggested, "I was also going to a weapon shop, so why don't you come with me? I know a place." Surprised by her suggestion, I questioningly asked, "You know a place? Are you sure it is fine to bring me there?" "Yeah, I can invite another person." Pondering for a moment, I thought to myself, considering the fact that Amanda was part of the largest guild in the human domain where she could get anything she desired, and yet was still going to a weapon shop, it suggested to me that whatever the place she was going to was anything but ordinary, and the fact that it needed an invitation made it even more mysterious in my eyes. Thus, thinking along those lines and weighing my options, I nodded my head. "Sure, but let me pay for the books first." "Okay." Smiling and nodding at Amanda, I quickly excused myself and headed to the cashier to check my books out. As I walked towards the cashier, I could not help but thank my luck. Now that Amanda was with me, I could finally replace my sword with a new one. With this, my strength would once again increase a bit. Thinking along those lines, my mood brightened up. Meanwhile, as Ren was checking his books out, not so far from where he was and staring at his back from a few blocks away, Amanda could not help but be reminded of the scene where Angelica ruthlessly slapped him in the face continuously. As she was reminded of the scene, Amanda's lips inadvertently pulled upwards. Shortly after, a small giggle escaped from her mouth. He. Covering her mouth with her hand again, Amanda once again tried to hold her laugh back. As she laughed, as if a heavy block had been lifted from her, Amanda could not help but feel refreshed. For the first time in a while, Amanda had smiled and laughed from the bottom of her heart. She did not dislike the feeling. Chapter 156. After leaving the bookstore, I followed Amanda into the busy streets of the area we were in. We soon took a couple of turns and entered a few alleyways. As we moved into the alleyways, I noticed that with every step I took, there were fewer and fewer people present. Frowning, I glanced at Amanda, who was walking ahead of me. "Are you sure we're going in the right direction?" I asked. Staring at my surroundings, I could not help but think that we were headed in the wrong direction. Everything around me started becoming dirtier and more worn out. Graffiti appeared all over the walls of the buildings next to me. More and more litter could be found on the ground. This place seemed to resemble the slums, rather than a high-end place that sold powerful artifacts. Without glancing at me, Amanda nodded her head as she moved around some of the alleys. Observing her from behind, it became apparent to me that this was not her first time going here. All right. Thus, seeing Amanda nod her head, I shrugged my shoulders and followed her. There was no point in regretting this now. Fortunately, I did not have to worry about our safety. Although I had no idea of what place we were going to, I was pretty sure that we were currently being followed by a couple of Amanda's bodyguards in the shadows. Though I could not sense nor see them, I was naturally aware of their presence due to Amanda's identity as the princess of the Demon Hunter Guild. Since she was not at the academy, she naturally had bodyguards following her at all times. This was especially so after what had happened to her a couple of months back with Elisha. Back then, because she was at the lock, she did not have bodyguards tailing her. But now, after what had happened, bodyguards stuck to her like glue, even if she was at the lock. Although her father was not there for her very often, that did not mean that she was not precious to him. In fact, he loved her quite a lot, but with everything going on at the guild, he rarely had time to spend with her. She naturally understood this, as his every move and decision could affect the lives of tens of thousands of people. Being a guildmaster had both its perks and cons. We're here. After a while, we arrived in front of a large metallic door. Moving in front of the large metallic door, Amanda raised her hand and knocked on the door 2 times. Knock, knock. After knocking, silence prevailed in the surroundings. Shortly after, a couple of minutes after she knocked, a hoarse voice resounded from the other side of the door. What day is it today? Without batting an eye, Amanda indifferently said, It's the day where the moonlight shines and the dust sweeps. Tilting my head as I listened to their conversation, I thought to myself, was this some sort of password? It made no sense. This sort of reminded me of the black market, where I would similarly have to tell them a password in order to enter. Well, that was before. Now that I had the VIP card, I could naturally go in without needing to tell them the password. Clank. After Amanda recited the password, a small compartment appeared on the side, and the hoarse voice resounded again. Identification card. Nodding her head, Amanda placed a small purple card inside of the compartment. Thereafter, a couple of seconds after placing the card in the compartment lit up and a red hue enveloped the card. Ding. Moments after the red hue enveloped the card, a green one replaced it, and a loud ringing resounded across the area. Clank. Shortly after the light turned green, the metallic doors slowly opened, revealing a long and dark corridor. Come in. With his back hunched down, an elderly figure with fading hair, holding onto a wooden stick to support himself, casually greeted us at the entrance of the place. Thereafter, turning around, he walked deeper into the tunnel. Briefly glancing at me from the corner of her eyes, Amanda nodded at me and followed the old man in. Rubbing my nose, I followed her in. This honestly looked really sketchy. But well, I probably should not judge a book by its cover. After all, even if the building was ugly on the outside, that did not mean the interior was ugly too, no? Well, I was quickly proven wrong. After walking down the long dark corridor, we soon arrived inside of an old room that had a musty odor, evocative of grandparents' houses. It was the type that made you feel safe and cozy, yet at the same time stuffy. In the corner of the room stood an old lamp that dimly lit the room. At the center of the room, there were 2 white sofas next to each other with a squared wooden table in the middle. The walls were draped in light green wallpaper. On the right-hand side of the room were wooden stairs that led towards the upper floor. Seeing the state of the room before me, I frowned and could not help but stare at Amanda. Was this really a weapon shop? I had honestly expected this place to be extremely luxurious on the inside. However, it seems like this place was both ugly on the inside and the outside. Please sit down. Gesturing for us to sit down, the elderly man glanced towards his right where the stairs were and shouted, Richard, we have 2 customers. Please bring down 2 catalogs. Coming, give me a minute. Following the old man's voice, a youthful one filled with vigor could be heard from the 2nd floor of the apartment. Be quick. As I sat down, I glanced towards Amanda. With a hint of doubt in my voice, I softly whispered, This is the weapon store. Yes. Nodding her head, Amanda's eyes drifted towards Angelica, who had calmed down and was now resting on my shoulder. As she looked at her, a look of longing appeared in her eyes. It seems like she really wanted to pet her. Seeing this, whilst still staring at the front, I thought inside of my mind, Hey Angelica, if she pets you will you be discovered? Raising her head and staring at the side of my head, Angelica's voice transmitted inside of my mind. Not unless they channel their mana inside of my body to inspect me. Why do you ask? Hesitating, I briefly glanced at Amanda next to me and said, Do you think you can let her pet you? Human, do not test my limit. Not even once? Raising her paw in a threatening manner, Angelica angrily said, Human, do you want to get clawed again? Seeing Angelica raise her paw once again, I instantly shut up and waited for the catalogs to arrive as I inwardly cursed. When I get back at the lock, I will definitely set things straight. If not for the fact that me retaliating would lead to me being seen as an animal abuser, I would have already shown Angelica her place. 2 catalogs coming right up. After a couple of minutes, walking down the stairs was a young man with brown hair and brown eyes. His face was relatively handsome, and if not for the lazy look on his face as well as his unkempt hair, he would have looked like a rich 2nd-generation heir. As he walked down the stairs, his eyes turned towards the sofa area. Thereafter, spotting Amanda quietly resting on one of the sofas, Richard's eyes lit up. He straightened his posture and proceeded to fix his hair and clothes. Walking towards Amanda with a bright smile, he handed her a tablet and politely greeted her. Why, if it isn't Miss Stern, what do I owe the pleasure of having you come here? Glancing at Richard for not even a second, Amanda took a tablet and indifferently said, I'm here to buy a weapon. Not minding her attitude, Richard smiled. However, his smile soon froze after he spotted me sitting next to her. Warily looking at me, he asked Amanda, May I ask who this gentleman is? Still looking at her tablet, Amanda indifferently said, He is a fellow classmate. Hearing the word classmate, Richard secretly sighed in relief as he could not help but ask again, Just classmate? Frowning and putting the tablet down, Amanda just stared at Richard. Instantly the room froze. Realizing his mistake, Richard lowered his head and apologized. I apologize for the slip of the tongue. Thereafter, taking out another tablet, Richard coldly looked at me as he handed it to me. Here, take the tablet and choose whatever weapon you want. After you are done choosing, tell me, and I will place your order down. Taking the tablet and ignoring the obvious difference in treatment, I inwardly shook my head. With how beautiful Amanda was, such a scenario was bound to happen. Still, I did not think much of it and looked through the catalog. Soon, I was presented with a long catalogue of weapons that ranged from swords to axes, and all other types of weapons. There were even some weapons that I had never thought of as practical, such as a string-type weapon and boomerangs. Staring at the long catalogue of weapons, I soon realized why Amanda was adamant on coming here. The weapons here were not branded, nor were they mass-produced. There was only a single one of each weapon, thus making me realize something. This was not a weapon store, but rather a smithy where the weapons were directly made. Realizing this, I scrolled through the table. Using the filter function, I narrowed down my search to swords and set a price cap. Since the weapons were not mass-produced, they were bound to be much higher in quality than what could be bought in regular stores. Thus, thinking along those lines, shortly after, 3 swords that matched my criteria appeared before me. Artifact name: Roaming Star. Rank: D rank. Price: 11,999,999 U. Description: a long, thin, and slightly curved blade, sharp-edged on both sides, with one end pointed and the other fixed in a hilt. The Roaming Star is a sword that is extremely light and durable, which is great for users that specialize in speed. Effect: none. Artifact name: Death Kiss. Rank: D rank. Price: 16,999,999 U. Description: a sleek and thin blade. The basket handle is comprised of a mix of special metals that are specifically selected and molten together after a rough analysis of their properties. The sword is a magnificent masterpiece created with the intent of reaping the lives of those who are against it. Effect: Light of Dawn. By utilizing light scions, the sword can illuminate the surroundings for a split second, blinding the opponent, and thus creating an opening. Artifact name: Bleak Star. Rank: D rank. Price: 19,999,999 U. Description: a slick black sword made out of an alloy between tristar metal and colec metal. Upon molding together, it created a tough and light metal alloy that is tougher and sharper than titanium, or any metal that was known to mankind prior to the second cataclysm. Crafted by a skillful blacksmith. Effect: Scion coating. Allow for the sword to be coated with scions, and thus enable the sword to gain an elemental attribute, enhancing the power of the sword. Looking at the swords presented before me, I could not help but mumble to myself, oh, some of the swords have effects too. What set artifacts apart from each other was not only their rank. There were other criteria that could determine the worth of an artifact, and that was whether they had any effect or not. Effects were like skills, but only appeared in artifacts. Moreover, they were permanent and could not be changed. When forging a new artifact, there was a small percentage of a weapon gaining an effect. Once it did gain an effect, its value would drastically increase. Naturally, in order for an effect to appear, the blacksmith had to be skilled. Seeing that there were 2 swords with an effect, I could instantly understand that whoever the blacksmith of this place was, they were definitely incredibly skilled. Roaming Star, Death Kiss, and Bleak Star. Those were the names of the 3 swords that I was presented with after setting my criteria. Honestly, if I waited a bit more I could have definitely gotten a better sword. I did have one sword in mind that I wanted to get at all costs, but unfortunately, the time to collect it was not ripe yet. It was a sword that originally belonged to one of the villains in the novels, who eventually loses to Kevin. During the fight, the sword gets destroyed as a result of the fight with Kevin, and thus never truly got the recognition it deserved. Thinking about that sword, if I had to estimate its approximate rank, it would be around B rank. However, although its rank was not the highest, swords could easily be upgraded by going to a good blacksmith. Moreover, the real reason why I was interested in the sword was not because of the sword itself, but rather its effect, one that would really help me in the future. Hiwa. Taking a deep breath, I stopped thinking about that sword. I should not get ahead of myself, as that was something that would happen later on in the future. Right now, I needed to focus on the swords before me. Looking at the price tag of the swords before me, I instantly felt a pang in my heart. Thinking about my trip to Amura in 2 months' time, I could only helplessly firm myself and buy one of the swords. I guess I will choose this one. In the end, after a bit of thought, I chose Bleak Star. Although it was the most expensive of the lot, it was also the most powerful of the 3, as its skill was quite good. Moreover, considering the fact that I needed to increase my strength as much as possible, I could only firm myself and empty my wallet. Thus, as I made up my mind, I turned my attention back towards Richard, pointed at the tablet and said, I will buy this one. Chapter 157. Thank you for your purchase. Your order will be delivered to you in a week's time. Coldly looking at me, Richard handed me a receipt and proceeded to ignore me. Rolling my eyes at his obvious display of jealousy, I headed back towards the sofas. Honestly, though annoying, Richard's behavior was quite amusing. Although he acted like a typical arrogant young master, he wasn't looking down on me nor saying things like, how dare you touch my Amanda? You're courting death. It was sort of refreshing. I guess he was just a very frank person. Either way, once again sitting on the sofa as a light sigh escaped from my mouth, I looked at the receipt in my hand and fell into deep thought. 20 million U. I spent a total of 20 million U on a sword today. That was just about all of the money I had saved up, excluding the budget for the mercenary group, which was pretty much off limits. I was now once again poor. Still, I didn't regret my decision. If this decision proved instrumental in keeping myself safer in the future, then it was a worthy investment. After all, my life was more important than money. Plus, I could very well make the money back in the future. Especially so since I now had a clear direction with regards to earning money. Suddenly recalling something, I smacked my fist on the palm of my hand. Right. I guess now that Amanda is with me, I may as well bring the topic of the company project to her. I had originally planned on doing this a long time ago, but since I didn't have a concrete product at the time, I didn't do it. However, now that a bit of time had passed since I gave the outline of the project to Melissa, the initial phases of the product were now completed. From what Melissa showed me, it was now presentable for investments. Thinking along those lines, my eyes quickly drifted towards the sofa next to me where Amanda was sitting. However, just as I was about to bring the topic up, I stopped myself as what I saw and heard made me speechless. With his elbow on the handrail of the stairs, leaning backward, Richard stared at Amanda, who was sitting on the sofa next to me and casually said, "So, Amanda, how long has it been since we've last seen each other?" Ignoring Richard as she looked through the tablet, Amanda bluntly said, "I forgot." Not minding Amanda's cold tone, Richard chuckled. "Ha ha, but I didn't forget. It's been a total of 1 month and 3 days since I've last seen you. Not once did I forget the moment you walked through the door and stole my heart. Ever since that day, I've..." Completely unfazed by Richard's long love confession, pointing towards the screen of the tablet, Amanda said, "I want to purchase this and this." Seeing Amanda point towards the tablet, taking his elbow off of the handrail of the stairs, Richard enthusiastically moved to where she was and said, "Oh, you're buying this one? A very wise choice." Watching Richard continuously try to flirt with Amanda, I was left speechless. What sort of failed attempt at flirting was this? Wasn't Amanda making it obvious that she wasn't interested? Even I, who was terrible at dealing with girls, could see this. Facepalming as I cringed at Richard from where I was sitting, I thought to myself, this guy is a total simp. In the end, much to Richard's disappointment, Amanda only spoke a few words to him as she placed her orders down. Regardless of how much Richard tried to shift the conversation, Amanda would just coldly ignore him. After purchasing everything that she wanted, much to Richard's distraught, Amanda stood up and looked at me. "Let's go." "All right." Nodding my head, supporting my body with my hands, I stood up and followed Amanda out of the worn-down apartment. According to what I've been told, our orders would be automatically delivered to our dorms in a couple of days. Thus, after we placed the orders, we were pretty much done. Seeing Amanda leave, a trace of disappointment flashed in Richard's eyes. Thereafter, looking at me for a couple of seconds, he raised his voice and said, "Miss Stern, thank you for your patronage. I hope to see you again in the future, preferably alone." Hearing the last part of his sentence, shaking my head, I followed Amanda out. How petty. Waiting at the entrance of the building was the same old man, with a hunchback from before. Opening the door, the old man said, "Ignore that lad. Thank you for the patronage, I hope to see you again." Nodding her head towards the old man, Amanda left the building. Following Amanda's example, I too thanked the old man, and left the building. Yes, thank you. Clank. Shortly after, as the large metal door behind us closed, we soon found ourselves back outside the streets. Turning towards Amanda, I softly said, "Amanda, there is something I want to talk to you about." Glancing at me, Amanda tilted her head and said, "Something to talk about? Yeah, do you have time?" Pondering for a couple of seconds, Amanda eventually nodded her head. "Yes, I do." Since today was her day off, she naturally had free time. Moreover, glancing at the black cat resting on my shoulder, Amanda bit her lips as she swore to herself that she would one day pet her. Though she tried to hide it from everyone, Amanda had a weak spot for animals, and after seeing Ren's cat, Amanda couldn't stop herself from wanting to pet it. Fortunately, having seen how aggressive Pudding was, Amanda refrained from doing anything. She didn't want to get slapped like Ren. Unaware of Amanda's inner thoughts, glancing towards my surroundings, I quickly said, "Let's go somewhere else. This isn't really the most ideal place." Snapping out of her thoughts, Amanda nodded her head. "Okay." However, just as we were about to move, recalling something, I glanced at Amanda and asked, "Also, preferably, do you know any place that is secluded? Like where there aren't many people?" Tilting her head to the side, a confused look appeared on Amanda's face as she asked, "Why?" Seeing the look of confusion on Amanda's face, I didn't respond immediately. Why? Was she not even aware of her looks? Sigh. As a sigh escaped from my mouth, I made up a random excuse. Because I don't like crowds. After a bit of thought, Amanda eventually nodded her head and turned right to one of the alleyways. Okay. Usually, Amanda would have immediately refused such a proposition, as she wasn't comfortable with going to secluded spaces alone with a boy. However, strangely, she didn't feel that way with Ren. Oddly enough, she wasn't repulsed by the idea. In fact, this was probably the first time in her life that she felt this way. Was it perhaps because of Pudding? Or was it because Ren gave her an odd sense of security? Amanda didn't know. Although she knew her feelings weren't that of love, at the moment, she didn't dislike Ren. Unaware of Amanda's thoughts about me, I smiled brightly and said, "Great, lead the way." Nodding her head, after thinking for a bit, Amanda decided to go towards a certain cafe that she liked to frequent with Emma. "Follow me." Thus, following Amanda around. After walking out of the alleys and heading towards the main street, we walked for a couple of minutes before soon arriving at a rather secluded area that had little to no people around. Noticing a small shop that looked quite modern and had a transparent retractable door at the entrance of the store, glancing at Amanda I asked, "Is that the place?" Nodding her head, Amanda headed towards the cafe. "Yes." As we made our way through the transparent glass door of the cafe, a blanket of warm air brushed past my skin, warming my body immediately. Subsequently, the rich aroma of the coffee invaded my nostrils, prompting me to directly stare at the blackboard on top of the cashier. Displayed on it were different types of coffees. Welcoming Amanda, and I at the register was a moderately beautiful young girl. Greeting the young girl back, Amanda and I quickly placed our orders. Shortly after, as Amanda ordered an Americano, and I took an espresso, we soon found a table in the corner of the shop, and decided to go there. Squeak, squeak. As Amanda and I were walking towards the table in the corner of the shop, the aged wooden floor creaked beneath our feet, creating a subtle squeaking sound. Ignoring this, arriving at the table, I made myself comfortable, and sat on a bulky wooden chair that had a small cushion on top. Sitting on the opposite side of me, Amanda calmly took a sip of her coffee, and looked at me. After a short pause she said, "So, what did you want to talk about?" Putting my espresso down, taking out my phone, and turning on the holographic function of my phone, I quickly played a video to Amanda. "Here, have a look at this." In order to convince Amanda, I had asked Melissa beforehand to send me a video of the current progress of her research. And the video I was currently going to show Amanda was a prototype of a magic card. Staring at the holographic image before her, Amanda curiously asked, "What is this?" "Just watch." As the video loaded up, pressing the play button, the scenery changed to that of a white room. In the middle of the room stood a red card that was about the size of a tarot card. Two metallic pincers held onto the card from the top and bottom. Subsequently, a crisp voice echoed from the speaker of the phone as the pincers holding onto the card glowed a red hue, initializing Flamesian injection. Thereafter, as the voice faded, the pincers became brighter as they soon injected mana into the card. Buum. Shortly after the card was injected with mana, a scorching red flame erupted from the card, burning everything that was before it. This lasted for a couple of seconds before the flame soon disappeared, and the card returned to its regular appearance. After a brief moment of silence, a crisp voice once again echoed through the speaker of the phone. Test subject 749. Prototype seems to now be able to successfully cast simple tier 1 spell Fireball. Referencing back with data analysis, efficiency loss is 42%, power loss. Plaque. Ignoring the last bit and turning off the phone, a faint smile appeared on my lips as I looked at Amanda before me. "So, what do you think?" Staring at the phone in my hand, Amanda's eyes were wide open as a look of shock appeared on her delicate face. Seeing Amanda's reaction, I smiled. Honestly, when I first saw the video, I had a similar reaction to her. Because I wasn't as talented in the field of magic as I was in swordsmanship, I could only look at mages in envy. Although I could learn magic, because I wasn't talented for it, it would probably take me a long time to learn the most simple spell. Simply put, a waste of time. Thus, I could only give up on my initial dream of casting fireballs. However, now that Melissa was developing the magic card, people would now be able to cast spells. The idea was groundbreaking. It was only after a couple of seconds had passed that Amanda was able to finally recover from her shock. Shortly after, staring at me, she asked, "What was that?" Smiling at Amanda, I proudly said, "A new product that I'm developing alongside Melissa, the magic card." Taken aback, Amanda tried to make sure she heard correctly. "Magic card? Melissa? Which Melissa? Melissa Hall?" Nodding my head, I confirmed, "Yes, our classmate Melissa." Seeing me confirm that it was indeed Melissa that I was working with, Amanda softly mumbled, "Her? How can it be her?" Amanda was currently extremely confused. She had known Melissa for quite a bit, and from what she observed, she had never seen Melissa get along with anyone nor even interact with them. Just finding out that she was working with someone else on a project shocked Amanda. Melissa was definitely not the type of person that would work with just anyone, especially if it was something as big as this. Halting her thoughts there, Amanda looked at Ren before her. Currently, a faint smile appeared on his lips as an air of confidence exuded from his body. Right, Melissa would definitely not be working with someone else unless the idea wasn't hers. So this meant that the one that came up with the idea was Ren. Thinking along those lines, everything started to make sense. If he was the one that came up with the idea, and had asked Melissa to develop the product, then it was understandable as to why she was working with him. Moreover, thinking back at the incident that had happened at the very beginning of the year, with regards to the mana poisoning theory, Amanda found the possibility of him being the one that came up with the idea more and more probable. In the end, as Amanda thought along those lines, calming down and taking a deep breath, Amanda deeply looked into my eyes as she seriously said, "So why did you show me the video?" Smiling and interlocking my hands together as I leaned forward a bit, I slowly said, "Simple really, it's because I want to make a deal with you." Chapter 158. Frowning slightly, Amanda thought she had heard wrongly as she said, "A deal?" What kind of deal did he want to make with her? Did he perhaps want to purchase a skill? An artifact? A partnership? Many questions emerged in Amanda's head as she tried to understand the current situation. Seeing the confusion written on Amanda's face, I spoke up. "Yeah, I am trying to set up a company, and I am currently looking for a backer." Hearing the latter part of my sentence, as if some of her doubts were cleared, Amanda's brows knit in a frown as she looked at me and asked, "So you want a backer? In what sort of way?" Nodding my head, I elaborated. "Yes. One that would deter others from trying to blackmail my company, or try to use their influence to try to shut us down, or force us into giving them the framework of the project." Taking a sip of her coffee, Amanda nodded her head. "I see. That indeed made sense. If he decided to start up a company, having a large corporation supporting them was a good idea. That way there would be fewer people that would dare touch them. Unless they were targeted by a large power whose strength was equivalent or greater to the backers they chose, the company would be able to develop smoothly and unobstructed. It was a great idea for those who were planning on increasing their market share quickly. Nodding her head in understanding, after a short pause, Amanda's eyes narrowed as she understood something. She then proceeded to look at me and say, "And you want the Demon Hunter Guild to back you?" Seeing that she understood, I nodded my head as I smiled. Pretty much. What better backer was there than the current #1 guild in the human domain? Diamond Grade Guild. Demon Hunter. With them backing my company, its development would be smooth and fast. Exactly what I wanted. Seeing me nod my head in confirmation, Amanda fell into deep thought as the frown on her face deepened. I see. Seeing Amanda's frown deepen, afraid that she would misunderstand, I tried to elaborate. Do not worry, I am not asking you this as a favor but rather a deal on fair terms. As you have seen from the video, the product that I have developed is called a magic card. Raising her head, Amanda thought back at the video I had shown her. Remembering the red card that shot fire after mana was injected in it, Amanda's interest peaked. So that thing was a magic card? Yes. Nodding my head and turning on my phone, I turned on the holographic function and showed Amanda the image of a red card that had fine golden patterns on its side. I then proceeded to explain to her how the card functioned. To summarize what it does, it is basically a card that can cast spells, sort of like an external medium or an artifact. Pausing and pointing towards the golden patterns on the card, I continued. By engraving a simple magic circle on the card, and by using a specific mixture of materials to create the frame of the card, the magic card can be created. It is essentially an item that upon injecting mana into the card, activates the magic circle engraved on it, and thus from there allows for users to cast spells like mages. Moreover, it can be used more than once. Hearing my explanation, Amanda did not respond immediately. Placing her hand on her chin as she fell into deep thought, after a couple of seconds, she looked at me and questioningly asked, "Are you sure?" From what she listened to, the so-called magic card sounded too good to be true to her. A multi-use card that allowed for non-mages to cast spells that would without doubt be an instant hit in the market if it appeared. It was that good. However, knowing just how good this product was, Amanda did not agree immediately. Although she had seen the card in the video, that was only in a video. Unless she had concrete proof regarding the magic card item, she could not irrationally agree on a deal. After all, this decision was something that could affect the reputation of her guild. If they agreed on supporting the idea, and when the card actually came out for commercial use, and it was not as good as it was made out to be, the one suffering from the backlash would be them, not Ren. Regardless of the goodwill she had for Ren, Amanda had to think rationally. Nodding my head and turning off my phone, I looked at Amanda in the eyes and said, "I can reassure you that the prototype works. Didn't you see the video? As of right now, that is the current development of the card. Although it is not finished, we will soon be able to provide you with a proper commercial usable one to present to investors. Moreover, you can just ask Melissa regarding the details. She is the one that is developing it." As I spoke, I tried to emphasize the fact that Melissa was the one behind the development of the card. Since Melissa was the one developing the card, it sounded more trustworthy. After all, she was a renowned scientist. She had a lot more credibility than an unknown like me. Thinking about Melissa, now that I thought about it, although I was the one that presented the idea to Melissa, in actuality, I barely contributed. After all, I only had a rough understanding of how magic cards worked. All I did was remember the materials required to make the card, and using the internet to understand a couple of small concepts, I came up with the framework of the card. My idea was only theoretical. To actually put it to practice was much harder, as a lot of factors needed to be taken into consideration. Honestly, it was already beyond me how Melissa was able to take my crappy framework and actually do something with it. After all, what I told her was only the vague explanation of what I had put inside of the novel. There were definitely parts that I had not included in my writing. Thus, as I thought along those lines, I could not help but inwardly praise Melissa's genius. She really was worthy of winning the equivalent of a Nobel Prize at a very young age. Placing her hand on the side of her hair as she brushed it backward, Amanda pursed her lips tightly before she softly said, "Let me think about it." After listening to what I had to say, Amanda was more or less convinced, especially since she remembered that Melissa was the one developing the card. If Melissa was indeed the one that was developing the product, then there was a high chance that this was really a thing. Moreover, it would also sound more convincing to the board members, as Melissa's fame was not for nothing. Seeing that I had almost convinced Amanda, smiling, I leisurely sat back on the wooden chair and downed my espresso. "Sure, take your time. Once you have made up your mind, you can go to Melissa and retrieve a prototype of the card to show to investors." Hesitating, Amanda said, "If I do agree, what do you think the terms should be?" Rubbing my nose as I thought for a couple of seconds, I proposed 15% on all profits, no shares. Frowning, Amanda asked, 15% on all profits, no shares? Yes. I think this was a fair evaluation. Although they would not really help much apart from investing and using their name, giving them 15% was fair. Unlike Melissa, I was not giving them shares, but just a 15% percentage on all of the profits made from the sales. Unless they planned on heavily investing in the company, I would not sell them any of its shares as I wanted to keep relative control over the company. Still, although 15% on all profits did not sound like a lot, considering the possibilities of magic cards, it was a very good deal. After all, I was only borrowing their name. Aside from that, all they had to do is sit back and watch as money entered their pockets. Knowing this, Amanda did not immediately respond. After a bit of thinking, pursing her lips, she said, 20%. Shaking my head, I firmly rejected. Too much. How about 15% and a discount for all guild members that wish to purchase a card? This was my current limit. Any more than this, and it would not be worth it. Seeing the firmness in my tone, and noticing that this was the last offer, after a bit of thinking, Amanda nodded her head. Okay, I will get back at you later. I will not make any promises, but I will consider the offer. Hearing Amanda's response, I smiled and said, perfect. As long as she considered it, all was good. I was confident that as long as the prototype of the card came out, Amanda would without a doubt present it to the board of members of the guild, who would agree, after a bit of thought. The offer was just that good. Human, let us go. As we had come up with an agreement, feeling Angelica's claws scratch my trousers from below the chair, I sighed and stood up. All right, I think I have said all I wanted to say. Huh. Remaining seated as she calmly drank her coffee, Amanda nodded her head. Picking Angelica up and putting her on my shoulder, I waved goodbye at Amanda as I prepared to leave the store. All right, I will see you around. Call me if you have made up your mind. Ren. Yes. Just as I was about to leave, Amanda called out for me and said, what is your number? Realizing that I did not have her number, I facepalmed and took out my phone. All right, I forgot that you did not have my number. Here. Taking my phone, Amanda lightly tapped my phone against hers and gave it back to me. Thank you. No problem. Contact me when you have made up your mind. All right, I have got to go. I will see you at the academy. Thus, after I took back my phone from Amanda, I waved goodbye and left the store with Angelica on my shoulder, much to Amanda's disappointment. As I left the shop, my lips curled slightly as I thought, finally, my company is starting to take shape. Half an hour after parting ways with Ren, in a rather secluded area, Amanda halted her footsteps. Looking in front of her where there was no one, Amanda spoke up. Samantha, Rebecca. Shortly after Amanda's words echoed across the area, two shadows materialized before her as they kneeled on one knee and simultaneously said, Young Miss. Young Miss. Coldly looking at them, Amanda indifferently spoke. Do not let my father know of what happened today. Make sure that the conversation I just had with that boy does not reach his ears. Hearing Amanda's command, Samantha, one of the two bodyguards who had fiery red hair and yellow eyes, tried to speak up. However, before she could finish her sentence, she was cut off by Amanda. But young, do not investigate him. That is an order. Seeing the firmness in Amanda's voice, lowering her head, Samantha proceeded to nod her head. Understood. Turning her attention towards the other bodyguard, who had short brown hair and a small piercing on her nose, Amanda spoke. Rebecca. Lowering her head, Rebecca too nodded her head and said, understood. Seeing that the both of them had heeded her order, nodding her head, Amanda dismissed them. Good, you may leave. Swoosh, swoosh. Thereafter, as soon as Amanda finished speaking, the two bodyguards melted into the darkness and disappeared. Staring at the area where her two bodyguards were moments before, Amanda lightly sighed as she thought of her father. The reason why she had done this was because she did not want her father to investigate Ren. Knowing her father's personality well, if he got word of what happened today, he would without a doubt do a thorough background check on Ren. Considering that Ren had his fair share of secrets, Amanda knew that if her father caught onto something, Ren would find himself in a troublesome situation. To make matters worse, from what Amanda managed to observe from Ren so far, it was that he was the type of person that seemed to dislike trouble and attention. Thus, knowing this, Amanda knew that it was better if her father was not made aware of what happened today. Perhaps in the future, but now was still not the time. She did not want Ren to get a bad impression of her guild, and as a result start hating it, because of what her father had done. Moreover, since Ren had saved her life twice, Amanda knew that he was not trying to harm her. This was enough for her to not ask any more about his background. If she wanted to know about his background, she would have preferred to hear it from the said person, rather than digging it up against their knowledge, especially since they were not enemies. Some may say she was naive for this, but to Amanda, this was her moral line. Thus, thinking thus far, turning around, Amanda walked back to the academy. Chapter 159. Laying down on the floor panting, I turned my head to the right where Donna's figure could be seen holding onto a large metal staff. Seeing this, I pleaded. Huff, huff, huff. Miss Longburn, please let me rest. Hearing my plea, Donna ignored me. She proceeded to lightly sway the metal staff on her shoulder as she shook her head and said, Nope, we still have got 1 hour left before the session ends, so hurry up and get up. Ugh, damn it. Helpless, I could only lift my tired body up. I once again prepared myself to be subjected to Donna's merciless beating. Clank, kaha. As soon as I stood up, without giving me a chance to recover, Donna appeared before me. She horizontally swung the staff in her hand. As she swung her staff, hurtling in my direction, its metal body split the air apart. Who up? Seeing the staff move, without hesitation, I ducked my body down. I avoided it within a hairbreadth. Not bad, but not good enough. Seeing me dodge her attack, a faint smile appeared on Donna's lips. She suddenly halted her movement mid-swing and swung the staff downwards. Seeing this, I helplessly mumbled, That is cheating. Bang. The last thing I heard was the sound of the staff splitting the air. A tremendous force hit my back, causing me to fall face first on the ground. Dank. Gah. Hitting the ground, a painful groan escaped from my mouth as I clenched my fists. I tried my best to withhold the pain. It hurt like hell. The pain was something that could not be described in words, excruciating. On the bright side, fortunately, she held back. Otherwise, I would have found myself without a spine. Not bad. You've improved quite a bit since your first lesson. Leisurely putting the metal staff on her shoulder, Donna walked around me as she nodded her head in appreciation. Ever since the first day that Donna had started training Ren, she realized that he was indeed talented. With every lesson they had, she would see him improve quickly. When she asked him how he was able to learn so quickly, the response Donna got was, "I just repeat what we have learned in the previous lesson, until I memorize what I could have done better, and where I went wrong. This way I do not make the same mistake again." Hearing this response, Donna was incredibly pleased. This was exactly what every teacher wanted to hear from her students. It was fine for someone to be talented, but unless you put in the work and actively sought to improve yourself, rather than remaining complacent, only then that you will set yourself apart from the average. Only those that actively sought to be better regardless of their talent were people worthy of her admiration. Thinking along those lines, Donna's impression of Ren increased. Very good. From the way you reacted and from the way that you were moving and positioning yourself, I can see that you've improved a lot. I'm very happy with your progress. Weakly looking up at Donna, who had just spoken, a small groan escaped from my mouth as I softly said, "Kaha. The reason I was able to improve so much is because of your amazing teaching ability, Miss Longburn. Without you, I would have never gotten this far." Though true, half of it was just me being sarcastic. Ever since my first lesson with Donna, I have been continuously beaten black and blue by her. There was not a single day where I would come out unscathed. The most annoying part of the training was that whenever I managed to somewhat adjust to Donna's rhythm, she would once again increase her intensity, resulting in the same thing repeating all over again. This had persisted for 1.5 months. Yes, though short, a month and a half had passed since I started training with Donna, and my strength had seen a considerable boost since that time. With my understanding of Xian's improving day by day thanks to Donna's tutelage, I have finally managed to get a better understanding of Wind Xian's. This resulted in my sword art seeing an improvement as a result. As of right now, apart from Ring of Vindication, which was on the verge of breaking through, both the Keiki style and drifting steps were now at the greater realm of mastery. This resulted in a significant boost in my strength as I was now finally able to perform the third movement of the Keiki style Void Step, an incredibly overpowered move that resembled the first movement of the Keiki style Quick Flash. However, unlike that move, what set this move apart was that it allowed me to teleport anywhere within a 10-meter radius of myself. Still, although it was strong, it wasn't perfect as it required far more mana to use and took more time to charge up. Either way, with me being able to perform the third movement, I was now significantly stronger than what I was back a month prior. Moreover, my battle awareness and experience had also seen a significant improvement due to all of the beatings that I took from Donna. Simply put, if the current me fought against the me from a month prior, I would beat myself black and blue as Donna did to me every training lesson. Staring at Ren's beaten figure and hearing his sarcastic remark, Donna shook her head as she faintly smiled. "Oh, you've started to learn the art of flattery?" Shaking my head, I firmed my tone and seriously looked at Donna. "Me? No way, how is that possible?" Every word that I just said came from the bottom of my ear. However, before I could finish speaking, with her purple eyes shining slightly, I suddenly lost control of my mouth. "All right, stop it with the sarcasm, I can see through you." Lazily nodding my head, I once again sarcastically said, "Yes, yes. I shall diligently and wholeheartedly follow the wise words of Professor Longburn." Raising her brow and lifting the metal staff in the air, Donna threatened. "You want another beating?" Seeing Donna raise the staff, smiling kindly, I shook my head and proceeded to say, It seems like I have to go. Goodbye, Miss Longburn. See you on Friday during our next class." Though it looked like I was running away, in fact, I wasn't. Even though I said all of that, I wasn't really worried about Donna hitting me. After having spent a month and a half with Donna, we had gotten a little bit more comfortable with each other. Although I still did not refer to her as Donna, and just called her Miss Longburn, our relationship had gotten to the point where we would occasionally share a bit of banter with each other just like now. She wasn't actually serious about beating me, I hope. Right, I almost forgot. Just as I was about to leave, Donna's crisp voice entered my ears. "Ren, before you leave I have something I want to tell you." Turning around, I raised my brow. "Yes, what do you need?" Putting the staff down, Donna took out her tablet from her dimensional space. Thereafter, scrolling through the tablet in her hand, Donna briefly said, "Exchange students will be coming in a couple of days, so you better get ready." Suddenly an ominous feeling arose in my heart. Squinting my eyes I wearily asked, "Ready for what?" With the palm of her hand on top of the staff, Donna twirled the staff on the ground and softly said, "Congratulations. You have been selected as one of the people that will orient the exchange students around the academy on the first day. Do not worry, you will not be alone as you will have another classmate aiding you in the process." Hearing this piece of news, after a short pause, I couldn't help but groan out loud. "You're kidding." Scrolling through the tablet, Donna shook her head. "I'm not kidding at all. I personally recommended you for this job. She wasn't lying about the recommending part. Donna was indeed the one that had recommended Ren to be part of the students that will be in charge of helping the exchange students. There was no spite in her action. In fact, she had done this for Ren. Taking into consideration his low talent, Donna wanted to broaden his options. Since being an agent was an option, Donna decided to expose Ren to as many people as possible, as agents thrived on connections. Thus, as she heard Ren's unenthusiastic reply, Donna sighed as she said, "Oh, shut it, you ungrateful kid. Take this as an opportunity to create connections with students from other schools. You will need it for the future." Nodding my head, with my back hunched, I gloomily left the training area. Your wish is my command. Great. Just what I needed. I now was in charge of babysitting a bunch of exchange students whom I didn't know. Brushing my damp and sweaty hair to the side, I couldn't help but think, I just hoped that nothing annoying was going to happen. Either way, since it had come to this, I could only accept and adapt to the situation. The first thing I was to do as soon as I got back to the dorm would be to investigate every single exchange student that was coming. Recalling the incident with the Manticore building, I realized how important it was to gather information beforehand. Therefore, before the students arrived, I will study each and every profile of the students that were coming in a couple of days, and from there separate the profiles into two piles, who to avoid and who to interact with. Staring at Ren's depressed figure leaving the training hall, Donna couldn't help but smile as she shook her head. What an amusing kid. Normally, if it were any other student, they would have been jumping up and down with joy at the chance of hosting and helping the exchange students. That was because they were all elites that came from different cities. They were people that had connections and could aid their career in the future. Yet it seemed as though it was the end of the world for him. Lightly chuckling, Donna tidied up the training room. She proceeded to sit down cross-legged in the middle of the room as a purple hue started emanating from her body. Shua. As the purple hue around her body expanded covering the whole room, Donna's brows relaxed as she thought to herself, I wonder what surprises he will show me in the future. The more she trained with him, the higher the expectations of him became. She really wanted to know what future awaited him. Chapter 160. Carrying my tired body out of Section B, feeling the nice spring breeze brush past my skin as I walked around the academy campus, I decided to enjoy the fresh air and the scenery as I slowed down my footsteps. Staring at the students walking along the academy road, I fell into deep thought as I looked back at what happened the past month and a half. Honestly, nothing much happened. It was a fairly uneventful month and a half. This was considering the fact that ever since arriving in this world, I have never had a proper day where nothing happened. Be it demons or conflicts with the professors or arrogant young masters, nothing of the sort happened during this month and a half. Shocking, if I had to be honest. Perhaps it was because at this point in time in the novel there was a time skip, or because of the inter-academy exchange that was about to happen. No trouble came my way. And thanks to that, I was able to finally take a proper breather and focus on myself. A lot of the stress that I had built up during the first 5 months that I had arrived here had significantly diminished as I was now feeling better, both physically and mentally. If I had to be honest, I really needed that. Perhaps because I was too focused on keeping myself alive and improving my strength, I never really bothered taking care of myself. It was only after things slowed down that I realized how fatigued and tired I was. Had I not taken the rest and things had gone at the same pace as before, it would not be long before I would have broken down mentally. Fortunately, I realized this before it was too late. Either way, if there was a notable change that happened during this past month and a half, it would be that my strength has seen a noticeable boost. With me reaching the greater realm of mastery for almost every art I practiced, I had now almost caught up with most of the top first-year students. If I had to evaluate my strength now, it would definitely be within the top 10 of the first years. Considering the fact that I had only been in this world for around 7 months, that was nothing short of outstanding. Still, although I was now within the top 10, that did not mean I had caught up with Kevin. No, I was still quite far from him. But it was understandable. It had to be noted that Kevin had a system with him. There was no way I was going to catch up to him in that short period of time. Especially not when he had a system aiding him at all times. Moreover, just because I was getting stronger did not mean that the others were not also getting stronger. In fact, everyone apart from Melissa found themselves breaking through a rank. Amanda and Emma had both reached E rank, whilst Jin reached E+ rank. Once news of their progress was made known, the academy was in a small uproar, as such strength at this age was almost unheard of. Regarding Kevin, he was still D- rank. Though he had unparalleled talent and a system with him, he still needed a couple of more months before breaking through again. Anyhow, strength aside, there was another development that took place this past month, and it was the fact that Melissa had almost finished the first prototype of the magic card. According to what Melissa told me, via text, as she specifically told me that she did not want to see my face, was that currently, although fully functioning, the efficiency loss of the card was still too high, meaning that it was still not commercially viable as a product. At the moment, it could only be used for investment purposes, as the first proper card would still take her quite a bit of time to fully develop. But that was enough. The prototype was enough for me. Once I got my hand on it, I would immediately give it to Amanda, who would then present it to her father and the board members of the guild. After that, everything was up to fate. If they chose to not agree to the terms that I had proposed, I would be left with no choice but to contact someone else. Although the Demon Hunter Guild was the best guild in the human domain, there were still alternatives out there. If they chose to not accept the deal, I could very easily go knock on someone else's door. Still, there was no need to be that pessimistic. From the way I saw things, the chances of that happening were low. After all, I myself knew just how influential this product would be in the future. Thinking along those lines, my lips curled upwards as I felt my mood brighten. Everything is progressing smoothly. Pudding. After walking around the campus for 10 minutes, snapping me out of my thoughts as I arrived at my dorm was a high-pitched voice coming from the distance. Turning my head towards where the voice originated, I soon spotted a rather young-looking girl staring at a tall tree before her. On top of the tree, a black cat quietly rested. Holding onto a treat, the young girl once again called out, "Pudding, come here, I have got a special treat for you." Hearing the young girl's voice from below, the black cat that was on top of the tree lazily opened its eyes for a brief moment before closing them again and going back to sleep. It looked like it was not interested in the treat. Seeing that she had been ignored, the young girl's expression became crestfallen as she softly mumbled, "Another failure. No use trying, she is a shy one." Just as the girl was about to leave in defeat, she heard a male voice coming from behind her. As a result of this, caught off guard, the young girl ended up screaming as she jumped up in fright. "Hieka. Oops, sorry." Seeing that I had scared the girl, scratching the back of my head, I apologized to her. Placing her hand on her chest, the young girl, Ava Leafs, took a few breaths before glaring at me and saying, "Ren, you almost scared me to death." Seeing that she was mad, I once again apologized as my lips faintly curved upwards. Sorry, I did not mean to." Seeing my lips curl upwards, Ava glared at me even more fiercely as she said, "You think it is funny? Sort of." However, just as I was about to finish my sentence, noticing her glare becoming more intense, I could only helplessly raise my hands up as I relented. "All right, I will stop. Humph, you better." Snorting, Ava crossed her arms and looked away. Although she looked angry, in reality, she was not. If not for the fact that her ears were slightly red from embarrassment, one could have easily thought that she was angry. It was a pretty amusing sight. If I had to be honest, I did not mean to scare her like that. Who would have thought that she would be that frightened from just hearing my voice? Was my voice that scary? I knew it was not my face that scared her, as my G+ charm could topple countries, so I guess it really might have been my voice. Jokes aside, another thing that has changed this past month was that my relationship with Ava improved. Using Angelica's cat form as an excuse to interact with her, I was able to get closer to her. With her being a monster tamer, she was naturally attracted to animals. Therefore, whenever she saw Angelica, she would immediately come over and try to interact with her. Thanks to this, I now had more things to talk about with her. Although we could not be considered close friends, we could be considered close acquaintances, borderline friends, as I would see her at least twice a week, as she tried to interact with Angelica, albeit unsuccessfully. During that time, I would make small talk with her, and as time passed, we were now no longer uncomfortable with each other, as we would occasionally joke around like now. "Human, you are back." Noticing my arrival, swiftly jumping down the tree she was on, Angelica slowly walked in my direction before jumping onto my shoulder. Staring at Angelica, who made herself comfortable on my shoulder, I inwardly shook my head as I thanked her. "Thanks." Lazily licking her paw, Angelica snorted and said, "Humph, I am not doing this for you, human. I am merely doing this because of the deal we have made." Yeah. Hearing Angelica's voice, I helplessly nodded my head. It was true. In order to get to know Ava, I had made a deal in advance with Angelica, and the deal was that if she interacted with Ava more, I would cut off a month from the 5-year contract. Although it did not sound like much, considering the fact that she did not have to do much, the deal was fair. Angelica did not need to be petted by her. All she had to do was get her interest. After that, I would use that chance to strike up a conversation with her and get to know her better. The plan was that simple. At first, Angelica refused the deal as she thought 1 month was too short, but after a bit of thinking, she realized that all she had to do was just get closer to her, nothing else. Thus, after she weighed in her options, Angelica could only do as I said, as she occasionally played with Ava. After Angelica got on my shoulder, I soon saw Ava staring at me with a tinge of envy on her face. Noticing this, a faint smile appeared on my lips as I knew that the plan had worked. Honestly, it was well worth the investment, as now I could comfortably talk to Ava without any problems. Thanks to Angelica, I was now one step closer to recruiting her to my mercenary group. And once she was in, I would then legally be able to perform missions with my team. "Thanks for taking care of her, Ava." After making sure that Angelica was on my shoulder, I thanked Ava. "You are leaving?" "Yeah, I am busy today, so I have to leave early." As I was tired from my lesson with Donna, I decided to go back to the dorm. Seeing me leave, whilst still looking at Angelica, who was on my shoulder, Ava waved her hand and said goodbye. Goodbye Ren, goodbye Pudding. Yup, goodbye." Waving back to Ava, I slowly walked back into my dorm. I was honestly in a bit of a rush. Aside from the fact that I was tired, there was another reason as to why I wanted to quickly go back to the dorm, and that was because I needed to make preparations for next week. After 1 month and a half of peace and quiet, the peace that I had enjoyed would soon once again be broken. And the reason for this was because a week from now, I was finally going to go to Imura. Although I had been preparing for this for the past 2 months, just thinking of what was to come in a week's time, I became slightly nervous, yet that was not the only thing I felt, as a part of me was also feeling very excited about the trip. Although the main goal of my trip to Imura was to find a cure for the Mindbreaker curse, that did not mean that it was the only thing I was after. No, just because that was the main goal did not mean that it was the only thing that the planet had to offer. No, rather, that was just the tip of the iceberg. If things played out how I wanted them to play, I might get to see a very interesting show very soon. One that would make me reap a lot of benefits. Chapter 161. Turn off the shower valve, put on some clothes, and dry my wet hair with a towel. I head back to my room and jump on my bed. PIMF. As I feel my body sink into the white mattress, I exhale and relax my body. I am honestly quite tired. Training for 4 hours with Donna really takes a toll on me. But if I have to be honest, I do not dislike the feeling. Even though after every session it feels as though all my bones have been broken, the feeling of continuously finding my strength, improving overwrites all of the pain and suffering I feel. It is honestly addicting. Staring at the white ceiling of my room for a couple of seconds, I lift my head up. I stare towards the corner of the room, where a black cat quietly rests on the seat of a chair. After hesitating for a second, I speak up. Hey Angelica, can you turn into something other than a cat? Turning her head in my direction, Angelica warily asks. Why are you asking? No, I am just curious. Squinting her eyes suspiciously, Angelica nods her head. Yes, but I will not be able to turn back for a week. A week? That long? Yes, the skill has a cooldown period. I see. That makes sense. With how strong her skill is, it is understandable that it has a cooldown period. If she could change into whatever she wanted without a cooldown period, I would not be surprised if she told me that her skill was an S-rank 1. It would honestly be that strong. Seeing my reaction, Angelica becomes even more suspicious as she asks, why are you asking me this? Turning my attention back to Angelica, I casually reply, oh, it is because I might need you to change into something else. To put it bluntly, I want to bring Angelica to Imura with me. No, I need her to come to Imura with me. With her being a demon, it is only natural that I bring her along with me. Although I am not sure about whether she has ever been to Imura, I need her for a specific task. One that involves her demonic powers. In fact, if Angelica does not come with me, the plans that I have been preparing for the past 2 months will go down the drain. That is how important her participation is. Therefore, I need her to change into something else other than a cat, as it would not really be ideal for the environment we are going to be in. Hearing my answer, Angelica shakes her head and firmly denies. No, it is already humiliating enough for her to be a cat. Now I want her to change into something else? No, Angelica will not stand for this. No what? No, I will not turn into something else. Do not push your luck, human. Frowning, I protest. But you didn't even hear what I wanted to say. Human, being a cat is already. Before Angelica can finish speaking, I cut her off and tell her about my plans. Next week, I am going to Imura. Opening her eyes wide, Angelica's voice rises a few pitches. You what? Imura? That Imura that I am thinking of. Yes, that Imura. Angelica's outburst is understandable. With Angelica being a demon, she naturally knows where Imura is. In fact, although she has never been there, she knows just how much of a strategic asset it is for the demons. Just the fact that the Demon King has not devoured the planet yet goes to show how important of a place it is. Nodding my head, I repeat. You heard me right. Next week, I am going to Imura. With her eyes wide open, Angelica looks at me as if I am crazy. As she speaks, her voice shakes. How? Are you trying to kill yourself? Moreover, how can you even travel all the way there? Do not ask how. Just know that you are coming with me, and you being in a cat form is not ideal. Shaking her head, Angelica immediately refuses. Are you crazy? We demons can tell each other's presences apart. If I go, I will just be dead weight as well as a target. Deeply staring at Angelica, after a short pause I say, not if you transform. What Angelica said is true. If Angelica were in her normal form, demons would more or less be able to tell her presence, as they share the same source of power. However, if she transforms, they would not be able to, as her power would be directly cut off. Frowning, Angelica angrily says, are you stupid, human? What is the point of me going if I cannot even use my powers? Smiling, I reassure her. Do not worry about that. I have already thought things through. Yes, I have already thought things through beforehand. Otherwise, I would not have been asking. Although I know about the fact that demons can tell if a demon is in the vicinity due to them sharing the same source of power, I also know that if Angelica is using her skill, she would not be found out. Still, it honestly does not matter if she is going to be found out or not. That is because my plan, in fact, requires her to be found out. As long as everything works out in the way that I want, the trip to Imura will be a fruitful one. After a short pause, Angelica still shakes her head as she refuses. No. Regardless, she still does not want to go. Knowing how dangerous the place is, there is a high chance she could die. He could die for all she cares, but she still does not want to die. Seeing Angelica once again refuse my offer, I firmly say, I will not take no for an answer. Don't forget I still have your core in me. If I die, you die. You have got no other choice. Noticing that I have already set my mind to bringing her to Imura, Angelica is left speechless. She does not know what to say. What he said is true. Just now, she was reminded of the fact that her life is no longer in her control. Since her core is with him, Angelica really does not have an option. If he dies, she would die alongside him. Her fate is no longer in her hands. Her life is now tied to the human before her. As Angelica thinks along those lines, a sense of helplessness washes over her body as she lowers her head in defeat. Is this what my fate is now? From the matriarch of a clan to a demon that is forced to hide in the form of a cat and do the bidding of a human. Was this how low she had fallen? Seeing Angelica's crestfallen expression, I sigh and reassure her. Don't worry, I won't be doing this for free. There is something in it for you too. To be honest, I understand Angelica's feelings. I mean, who would want to be treated like a slave? I, for sure, would not. Knowing this, there is no way I am going to force Angelica to do something against her will without giving her an appropriate reward. Especially since I want her to be a part of my mercenary group. Not forcefully, but in a way that she wants to be a part of it. That is not the type of relationship I am looking for. It should be one of mutual trust rather than a forced one. If I force her to do my bidding without rewarding her, what makes me think that she would stay after the 5-year time period ends? That would just be stupid and naive of me. In fact, I would not be surprised if she decided to hunt me down for the rest of her life after she got her core back. Lifting her head upwards, Angelica softly says, "Like what?" Smiling at Angelica, after a short pause I say, "I can help you break through to the Viscount rank." Abruptly opening her eyes, Angelica looks at me in shock as her voice increases a few pitches. What? Yeah. I am not lying. As I mentioned before, Imra is a land filled with treasures. Although I do not know every single treasure that is there, I know a couple of them. And one of them is specifically made for demons, as it is something that could help her break to the next rank. The Viscount rank. A rank that a lot of demons long for. Suppressing her shock, Angelica's sharp eyes land on me, as she warily says, "How should I trust you?" Taking out the mana contract from my dimensional space, I smile and flash the contract before her eyes. Easy. Just added in the mana contract. If I write down that by the time she comes back to Imra she is going to have something that would help her break through the Viscount rank, Angelica would not have to be worried about me scamming her. After all, if I do not hold my end of the contract, I would die. Seeing the contract, after a short pause, Angelica nods her head. She does not even need to think twice about agreeing. It is either signing the contract and going to Imra, or not signing the contract and potentially dying, because the human that has her core dies in Imra. It is not a hard decision. Moreover, Angelica has longed to reach the Viscount rank ever since a long time ago. If he really does as he promises, and helps her break through to the Viscount rank, Angelica would not mind risking her life for it. Thus, staring at Ren for a couple of seconds, Angelica says, "Fine, but you better keep your promise, human." Seeing Angelica agree to the deal, a trace of a smile appears on my face as I think to myself, as long as she comes with me, everything will be set. With her joining me, everything should go as I had planned and envisioned. At least that is what I hope. However, considering my previous track record, I am not too sure about whether or not I am going to succeed, but I have to at least give it a shot. For my sake, and the people that are relying on me, I have to succeed no matter what. The next day, Class A25, Lock. Sitting in my usual seat on the left-hand side of the classroom, today, an odd atmosphere envelopes the room. Many different emotions are displayed on the faces of some of the students present. Some of the students are wary, some are excited, and some are nervous. However, if there is one thing that is noticeable, it is that everyone is acting strange. The most notable thing that can be observed from the students in the classroom is that almost everyone is staring at the entrance of the classroom with extra apprehension, almost as if an enemy is about to come through that door and fight them. Noticing their odd behavior, I do not think too much of it. That is because I understand where they are coming from. Today is the day that the exchange students from the 4 grade academies are going to arrive. Clank. Entering the classroom, unbothered by the strange atmosphere shrouding the classroom, Donna lowers her hand as she tries to get everyone's attention. "All right, everyone, please be seated and pay attention to me." Seconds after her hand lowers, the classroom quiets down, and Donna resumes speaking. "As most of you already know, today we will be having exchange students coming into our classroom. So I would like for you all to be at your best behavior." Pausing and looking at the students in the classroom, Donna's tone becomes firmer. For the next 2 months, before the Inter-Academy tournament starts, students from the 4 grade academies will come to our class and study alongside us. They will participate in many things such as electives, activities, and much, much more. In short, what I am trying to say is that you guys will be seeing them a lot. Once again pausing, Donna's tone becomes incomparably serious as her pitch increases. Therefore, you better be at your best behavior for the time period they are here, as you are all representing the Lock. Your behavior will be the thing that will set an impression on the other academies. Looking at the students in the classroom, Donna threatens as she finishes her speech. "If you do anything stupid that will affect the school's prestige, prepare yourself to face the consequences." As Donna's words drift towards the ears of every student, a stifling silence envelopes the classroom. After a while, finished with what she wants to say, she takes out her tablet and scrolls through some files. Donna clears her throat and speaks. "All right, enough with that. I will now call the name of the pairs of students that will be in charge of bringing the new students around the campus and familiarizing them with the academy." Pointing towards 2 individuals sitting on the right side of the classroom, Donna says, "All right, the first pair will be Jin Horton and Troy Dirks. You two will be the first group. Following them, the next group will be comprised of Kevin and Emma, Amanda and Arnold, Donald and. As Donna is stating the name of the pairs of students that would orient some of the exchange students, my eyes cannot help but shift towards where Jin and Troy are sitting. The first pair that Donna mentioned. Sitting in his usual seat, Jin is staring intently at the board with an indifferent expression. As his name is called out, his expression does not change once. He just sits there indifferently, completely unfazed by the fact that he will soon be meeting students from other schools. Next to him, a relatively handsome boy with black hair and yellow pupils smiles amiably as he similarly stares at the front of the classroom. Squinting my eyes, a frown involuntarily appears on my face. If I do not remember wrongly, this is the event that would cause the relationship between Jin and Troy to completely fall apart, resulting in Troy becoming a villain. At least that was what was supposed to happen in the novel. However, I am no longer sure about this outcome. With Jin's personality suddenly changing, I am aware that this might not happen. Did their relationship get better, or did it worsen? That is the question in my mind. I really do not know. However, what I do know is that if after this Troy is still not approached by Professor Thabot, it means that he will no longer turn into a villain. Or at least not yet. Squinting my eyes, I am not too sure how to feel about this. I already acknowledge the fact that things are going to change, and that the story is no longer going the way that it was before. But still, it feels somewhat odd. However, perhaps this is for the best. And last but not least, the last group will be that of Melissa and Ren. Snapping me out of my thoughts, hearing the name of my group, I lower my head and grab my hair. I cannot help but curse. Are you kidding me? Chapter 162. The sun slowly rose from the horizon, and Ashton City, more specifically, the Lock, basked in the warmth of the sun. Standing at the entrance of the academy, enjoying the warmth that came from the sun, I glanced towards my right where a beautiful young girl stood. Currently, Melissa and I were waiting at the northern entrance of the academy. According to Donna's instructions, we would soon meet students coming from one of the 4 grade academies. Our job was to greet them and bring them around the campus to familiarize themselves with the place. Although I was not sure about which academy they were from or who they were, that did not really matter. During the past month, I did not stand idle. Having learned my lesson from the situation at the Manticore building, after being made aware of the student exchange, I immediately memorized every single profile of the students that were coming to the Lock. Regardless of the academy, be it big or small characters, I memorized everyone's profiles. Took me a while, but I forced myself to do it. I was not going to let something similar to the Manticore building situation happen again. From that point on, I learned that I needed to be prepared for everything. Instead of being unaware of what was to come in the future, it was better to proactively seek information beforehand to avoid being caught off guard, and thus lose composure. On the topic of the dorm situation, for the past month and a half, all I did was observe. Having learned a lot of lessons with regards to scheming and planning, I knew that haste made waste. Therefore, I chose to observe them carefully. From their routines, behavioral patterns, everything. I made sure to engrave and memorize every little detail of their lives without missing a beat. With the aid of Angelica's cat form, I was able to acquire a lot of information. And thanks to her, I could now finally say that they could be eliminated anytime I wished. With my plans now completed, all that I needed to do was execute them. But now was still not the right time. After a bit of thought, I had decided to set the pieces in motion after I came back from Imura. Since I was going to go there in a week's time, there was no need to overburden myself right now to get rid of them. They were not going anywhere anytime soon. They were merely sitting ducks from my perspective. All I needed to do was pull the trigger and everything would come toppling down. They were no longer a priority for me. Either way, those problems aside, I was now presented with another more annoying problem. Glancing at Melissa, who was standing next to me, trying to break the awkward silence that was between us, I asked, "So, how's your day going, Melissa?" Hearing my question, without hesitation Melissa responded, "Shit." "Why is that?" Looking at me as if I was an idiot, Melissa rhetorically said, "Do you even need to ask why?" Frowning, I placed my hand on my chin as I pretended to fall into deep thought. Is it perhaps because it is too sunny outside? Understandable. Girls like you want to. Shut up. Being told to shut up, I pretended to be offended as I once again reminded her about the fact that I was now her business partner. Rude, do not forget that you are now talking to your business partner. If before I was scared of Melissa because of her influence and sadistic personality, I no longer had a reason to be scared. Why? Because of the magic card business. Now that we were partners, if anything happened to me, all of the efforts we put in the project would go down the drain. After all, we were bound by a contract now. Thinking along those lines, I inwardly chuckled. There was no longer a need for me to fear Melissa. Thus, I could pretty much do and say all I wanted without caring about the repercussions. Well, that was unless I pushed her too far. If that happened, well, let us just say that things would not go well for me. Tisk tisk. Glancing at my smirking face from the side of her eyes, Melissa clicked her tongue as she said, "Speak one more word and I will skin your throat and feed it to the homeless people outside of the academy." I say, are you not a little bit too graphic with your threats? Either way, there is no way you are going to hurt your business partner, right? Hearing my taunts, with her chest moving up and down at a faster pace, Melissa slowly spat. it seems that you are really asking for it. Ignoring Melissa's threats, I proudly flaunted the fact that I was her partner over and over again. Given how much value this project was worth, Melissa knew full well that she could not do anything to me. Therefore, no matter what she said, it was all ignored by me. This was revenge for all the previous abuse. Don't tell me you are salty you cannot do anything to me anymore. Hugh. Taking a deep breath, Melissa tried her best to suppress her rage. She was now starting to regret making a deal with Ren. The limits of her patience were being tested with each passing second. If not for her rationality still taking over her mind, she would have already done something about him. What? I didn't. Just as I was about to tease Melissa again, I suddenly stopped and looked towards the distance. After noticing something, with a tinge of regret I said, as much as I would love to continue our conversation, it seems like our guests have arrived. Turning her head around, Melissa asked where? There. Pointing towards the distance, a group of 5 students appeared on the other side of the street. Squinting my eyes to get a better look at them from the distance, the first thing I noticed was their uniforms, which were dyed in white with the lapel of their blazers striped in blue. They must be from Ludwig Academy from Park City. Noticing the color of their uniform, I was immediately able to guess the identity of the students that were coming in our direction. Ludwig Academy from Park City, the city that defended the east side of the human domain, and that directly faced the sea. Because they directly faced the sea and hence sea beasts, they specialized in water warfare rather than land warfare. With them constantly fighting against sea beasts rather than demons, they fully adapted themselves to the water, and from there they had made a name for themselves as the East Guardians. Still, just because they specialized in water warfare, did not mean that they were weak in land warfare. No, rather, they were just as terrifying on land as they were on the water. As the figures of the students became clearer, my line of sight was immediately drawn towards 2 members of the group, a male and a female. The male had a large stature and short platinum-colored hair with curly sideburns. Both his eyes were bright, and his entire body was emitting a boundless power that reminded me of Jin's. Next to him was a young girl who, similarly to the boy, had platinum blonde hair that gently fell all the way to her back. She had big deep sea blue eyes and clean white skin devoid of any imperfections. With a silver reaper hanging on her waist, the girl had a rather cold and unapproachable demeanor, almost like Amanda. However, differently from Amanda, who seemed as though she had walls preventing people from getting near her, the girl before me had an aura of repulsion, almost like as if she was saying, "Do not you dare come near me or I will kill you." Similar yet different. Hello, nice to meet you. My name is Nicholas Leanfall, and I come from Ludwig Academy from Park City. Arriving before us, the male extended his hands towards Melissa and I as he introduced himself. As he spoke his voice was calm and composed, neither arrogant nor overbearing. Pausing, Nicholas took a step to the side and started introducing the others. These here are Joshua Claymore, who here is also a first-year student. As Nicholas started introducing everyone present, I did not pay close attention as I already knew the names of everyone present. Nicholas Leanfall, Joshua Claymore, Ivan Dragovic, Lawrence Smith, and Erin Leanfall, Nicholas's twin sister. Although they were all each pretty strong individuals that could rank within the top 200 in our academy first-year students, the 2 that I had to pay close attention to were the Leanfall twins, also known as the Silvermoon twins, a formidable first-year student duo that respectively took the first and second place in their first-year rankings. Although individually they were both strong, only when the duo worked together would they become extremely scary. Erin with her reaper and Nicholas with his twin short swords. When the 2 worked together, even Kevin would find it extremely difficult to beat them. In fact, there was a chance he could lose too. That was because of their sword art. They both each practiced a 4-star sword art, however. What made that art special was that it was made specifically for twins, and most terrifying of all was that, when the 2 worked together, their sword art's might could even rival that of a 5-star sword art. Frightening. And last but not least, this is my twin sister Erin Leanfall. Snapping me out of my thoughts was Nicholas's calm voice as he finished introducing everyone. Overall, as I observed everyone before me, I had a good impression of them. Just like Nicholas, everyone was neither arrogant nor overbearing. Even though Erin was cold, she did not look down on everyone, and it could be seen that her coldness was just her natural demeanor. They were somewhat quiet, but honestly, compared to young masters, I would take them any time of the day. Clearing my throat, and just when I was about to introduce myself, to my bewilderment, I found Melissa approaching them with an amiable and gentle smile on her face as she introduced herself. "It is a pleasure to meet you. My name is Melissa Hall, and he is Ren Dover. I just wanted to say that we are glad you guys came all the way here to this academy, and hope that you will enjoy your stay here." Smiling at Melissa, Nicholas shook her hand. Likewise, blinking a couple of times to make sure I was seeing correctly, I glanced at Melissa as the gears of my mind stopped working for a second. What was going on? Was this the Melissa I knew? Where did the Melissa that abused people with words go? Was she okay? Did I perhaps tease her a bit too much? As millions of questions emerged in my mind, I suddenly felt everyone staring in my direction. Noticing this, with an awkward smile on my face, I waved at them. "Yeah, nice to meet you." Staring at me from the corner of my eyes, I soon noticed Melissa's lips curl upwards as she smirked. Noticing this, my eyes shot wide open as the veins on my head bulged. This bitch did it on purpose. She deliberately did this to confuse me, and used this as an opportunity to make me look stupid. I see, no wonder she acted so differently. crossing my arms as I secretly clenched my teeth. I secretly swore to myself to get back at her. All right, please follow me, Ren, and I will introduce you to the campus, so that you can familiarize yourselves with this place, and thus not get lost in the future. Taking pleasure in my expression, with a faint smile on her face, Melissa triumphantly turned around, and led the way towards the entrance of the academy. Smiling, Nicholas looked at his group, and nodded his head at Melissa. That would be great. And thus, following Melissa, we took the tour of the campus. As we walked, Melissa did most of the talking as she went through the rules and the layout of the academy. On small occasions, I would add a few things here and there just to get myself involved in the conversation, but most of the stuff I said went to deaf ears as it was not really important information. We explained about the different sections in the academy, and also told them in detail about the rules of the academy, such as no fighting and stuff like that. Not that people actually followed the rules, but that was what was written, so we just mentioned it. After a while, as we were walking and had pretty much toured most of the campus, recalling something, I proposed, how about we go to the arena grounds in Section G? Raising her brow, Melissa looked at me as she skeptically said, Section G? Glancing at my watch, I proceeded to nod my head as I said, yeah, if I am not wrong, a good show is about to happen. Turning his attention to me, Nicholas curiously asked, what good show? Still staring at my watch, and trying my best to recall something, my eyes soon lit up as I nodded my head repeatedly. Yup, there is definitely a show that we should not miss. I was not lying when I saw a good show was awaiting us. With the time skip ending around here, from what I remembered writing in the novel, at around this moment in time, Kevin should be at the arena ground fighting against one of the top students from Theodora Academy. The academy that was filled with arrogant young masters. I did not need to explain what happened, did I? It was pretty obvious. With the people from Theodora Academy being famous for their arrogance, it was not strange for Kevin to get into an altercation with one of them. And thus, a really good show where Kevin was going to pummel his opponent was going to happen. Glancing at my watch, I urged everyone to follow me. If we hurry up we can make it in time. There was no way I was going to miss such a good show. Chapter 163. Hua. Entering the arena grounds of Section G, loud cheering reverberated across the place's students could be seen leaning on the handrails of the arena grounds excitedly talking to one another. They all had their eyes glued towards a certain platform below them. Glancing towards the direction where most people were looking, I soon sighed in relief when I saw Kevin's figure standing on one of the platforms. I guess we are not too late. I would have truly been disappointed if I did not get to see Kevin pummel some people. Although from what I remembered the match lasted for less than a minute, it was still better than going around the academy with strangers and explaining to them the layout of the academy, as well as the rules. Arriving a couple of seconds after me, and hearing what I said, Melissa curiously looked around and asked, too late for what? Pointing towards a certain platform below, I said. For the show. Squinting her eyes to get a better look at where I was pointing, Melissa soon spotted Kevin's figure on one of the platforms. Taken aback, she asked, isn't that Kevin? Nodding my head, I replied, yup. How did he end up there? He was challenged. Who challenged him? Before I could answer, glancing towards the youth that was standing opposite to Kevin, Nicholas spoke. From what I know he should be Theodora Academy's 5th rank, Robert Wilson. Frowning, Melissa took a brief look at Nicholas, who was standing next to his sister and his 3 other classmates. Currently, all of them were looking at Kevin with incomparably solemn faces. Having heard of Kevin's name, they naturally knew that he was the #1 ranked student in the lock. Naturally, as competitors, Nicholas and his sister paid special, close attention to him. Kevin was after all someone to watch out for. Unaware of their thoughts, staring at the youth below, Melissa repeated, Robert Wilson? Nodding my head, I followed up. Yeah, 16 years of age, E- rank, main weapon hammer. Hearing my response, Melissa was at first surprised. However, shortly after, looking at me weirdly, Melissa said, the fact that you know this much creeps me out. Rolling my eyes, I ignored Melissa. She would not understand. Having memorized the profiles of most of the exchange students, I of course memorized the profile of the student that Kevin was currently up against. Wearing a pale green uniform, the youth was currently arrogantly looking down on Kevin as he insulted him from below the stage. Although I was not sure of what he was saying, from the way he talked and behaved, I could already pretty much deduce the content of the conversation. Grovel beneath my feet, blah, 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 you are nothing. Just the typical stuff. However, I knew that the opponent's arrogance and behavior were merely a facade. Turning my head right towards one of the private chambers of the spectating arena, I knew that this was merely an act that Theodora Academy did in order to get a better read on Kevin's abilities. Since Kevin was ranked #1 within the first years, it was only natural that Theodora Academy would want to know about his abilities. With the upcoming inter-academy exchange, in order to win, the academies needed to have a better understanding of their opponents. With Kevin's fame, he was obviously one of the main targets to spectate. And rightfully so, as all of the spectators' eyes were focused on Kevin's figure. Excluding the fact that he was very handsome, everyone here had one thought. How strong is the #1 youth in the world's best academy? Were the rumors about him exaggerated, or was he really as talented and unparalleled as people made him out to be? Snapping me out of my thoughts, I soon saw a referee calmly walk down towards the arena grounds. Seeing the referee that was in charge of the match arriving, I could not help but excitedly say, oh, the match is starting. As soon as my words died down, the arena grounds quieted down as a referee came up on the stage. Staring at Kevin and the youth opposite to him, the referee warned, "Let me be clear, this is a friendly match." Pausing to make sure that both Kevin and the other youth were paying attention, the referee solemnly said, "Both parties can use whatever means possible to defeat their opponent, be it skill, artifact, or anything that you have with you is allowed. However, if one party admits defeat during the course of the fight, the other party cannot continue attacking. If I feel even the slightest killing intent by any one of you, I will be stopping the match. Do you understand?" "Understood." Kevin calmly took the initiative to respond. The representative from the Theodora Academy team, Robert Wilson, was a rather muscular youth who looked around 20, despite being the same age as Kevin. As he looked at Kevin before him, his expression remained stoic and unmoving. Following Kevin's example, Robert responded, "Understood." Seeing that both Kevin and Robert had understood the rules, the referee raised his hand and immediately lowered it as he shouted, "Begin." As soon as the referee's hand slashed down, without skipping a beat, taking a step forward, Robert ran towards Kevin's direction. Bam, bam. With every step he took, the arena platform shook. Staring at Robert headed his way with the enormous hammer in his hand, Kevin's face remained indifferent as his red eyes calmly looked at him from the distance. Seconds after, Robert arrived before Kevin. Raising his hammer, Robert smirked as he shouted, "Why are you not moving? Are you that scared of me that you froze in shock?" Without hesitation, he aimed for Kevin's head. However, just as the hammer was about to land on top of Kevin's hand, the spectators only saw a flash, and Kevin's body disappeared. The hammer fell on the ground and the arena shook. Bam! Ha! As his hammer hit the ground, feeling the cold tip of a blade next to his neck, Robert heard a cold voice from behind him. "You lost." As Kevin's cold words fell, the arena was enveloped in silence. Waking up from his stupor, raising his hand, the referee announced, "Kevin Voss wins." Subsequently, as the referee's words traveled through the ears of everyone present, the arena was in an uproar once again as everyone shouted or cheered. "Wah! What was that? Did you see what he did?" The match did not even last a full minute before it was over. It was Kevin's total victory. In the direction where Ren was previously looking, inside of a private booth, two instructors wearing a similar pale green uniform to the youth on the stage sat at the head of a conference table within the private room that overlooked the arena grounds from below. Currently, there were a total of 15 students sitting by their sides, and they were all solemnly looking at Kevin's figure displayed on the monitor before them. The students seated on the left were evidently older, and the students seated on the right were slightly younger, as their faces had signs of immaturity. The people here were the other members of the Theodora Academy. The elder who sat on the left had a slightly crooked nose with eye bags beneath his eyes. His facial features were solemn and serious. As he sat there with his wide shoulders, he gave off an extremely sturdy feeling. He spoke in a low voice. "According to our investigations, Kevin's abilities should be within the E- to D range, however, judging from how he managed to defeat Wilson so easily, I am afraid his rank has already reached at least E+ rank." Hearing the elder's evaluation of Kevin, the 15 students were all somewhat doubtful as they started whispering amongst each other. Continuing, the elder said, "Unfortunately, because the battle ended too fast, we were not able to get a better understanding of his sword art nor his skill, as he seems to be concealing his true abilities. Instructor Thompson, do not be anxious. I do not think things are that complicated." Sitting in front of the instructor was a certain youth with long black hair. He was around 16 years of age, and had a refined and elegant demeanor with looks that matched his demeanor. He had big bright blue eyes and a tall and slender build. His hands, which were now placed on the table, were twirling a black fountain pen that had golden engravings on the side. The youth's name was Aaron Rhinestone, and he was the current rank 1 for the first years in Theodora Academy. Because of his talent, he was extremely well respected amongst his peers. Naturally, because of the environment he was exposed to, Aaron developed an arrogant behavior that made him think that he was number 1 amongst the younger generation. That was until Kevin's name started to become more famous than his. It was from there that Aaron had started to learn of Kevin's talent and exploit. The more Aaron read, the more excited he grew. Given his fame and talent, if he managed to defeat him, would he not be hailed as the greatest of the younger generation? Just the thought made Aaron smile as he thought to himself. He was someone worthy of being his stepping stone. After a while, Aaron Rhinestone finally raised his head and smiled. This smile was just like that of a venomous viper in search of a prey. Staring at the monitors in the middle of the room for a couple of seconds, the youth smiled as he said, "Instructor Thompson, leave that Kevin guy to me." Just as Instructor Thompson was about to protest Aaron's decision, a cold and overbearing voice cut him off. "Let him." As his voice faded, everyone's attention turned towards the person that had just spoken. The person who spoke was the instructor seated by the right. He had a curly gray beard and had a fairly large stature. His short white hair resembled steel needles, and the hairs on his temples, along with his curly beard, made him seem impressively terrifying, as he looked like a war general that had just come back from a long battle. Chapter 164. Manticore Building. Friday. Fwaya. As black smoke rose in the air and enveloped my room, I stared at my right hand where a slick black ring rested on my index finger. Its design was rather dull, as it looked like any regular ring that could be found on the market. However, if one looked closely, one would be able to see a red hue pulsating from it. Staring at the ring on my finger, I softly mumbled, "Nice. Human, you better keep your promise." Yes. Nodding my head, I once again looked at the ring on my finger as I curiously asked, how does it feel being a ring? Humph. If not for your deal, I would have never done this. How humiliating. Yes, the ring on my finger was, in fact, Angelica. Since I could not bring Angelica with me in her cat form, I decided to make her turn into a ring. The reason I asked her to be a ring was because her cat form would be a burden to me. If a situation arose where I had to run away, Angelica would not be able to catch up to me and Kevin, as she could not use her powers lest she wanted to let the demons around us know of her presence. And considering the fact that she had no core in her body, the situation would not be good for both her and me. That aside, the primary reason why I did not want her to be exposed was because it would ruin my plans, as well as give away my location, as demons had a way to tell if another demon was near them. Until the part of my plan that required her to expose herself played out, she had to hide as a ring. Only with her would everything that I had planned for the past 2 months come to fruition. Therefore, I could not stress enough how important it was for her to remain as a ring. If even a little detail of my plan went wrong, the chances of me surviving were slim to none. To be honest, I still preferred her cat form. However, this would do for now. Prior to now, I had thought about turning her into a ring before, but after a bit of thinking, I decided against this idea, as that would mean I would have to carry her with me at all times, including class, which would just be annoying, especially considering the fact that she tended to nag all the time. Please, no. I know you hate it, but please bear with it for a bit. I promise I will hold my end of the deal. You better. Since we have signed the Mana contract, you must naturally hold on to the end of your deal, lest you wanted to die. I guess that is true. As I conversed with Angelica for a couple of minutes, after I explained everything that I wanted to tell her, I then proceeded to touch my waist where a thin black sword quietly rested. Bleak Star, the new sword that I had ordered a month and a half ago with Amanda. Because it was freshly crafted, it only arrived a week ago, and so I did not have much time to play with it. But as soon as I laid my hands on the sword, I knew that it was a cut above the other swords that I had used before, especially with how it felt on the grip of my hand. The sword was neither too thin nor too thick, and only weighed around 2 kilograms. To me, this was practically nothing, as I could curl 100 kilograms of dumbbells without any problems now. From the weight to its design, the sword was perfect. Moreover, I especially liked its effect, Cyan coating, that allowed me to coat the sword with elemental cyans. As I have said before, I did not have much time to experiment with the sword, but after learning about cyans from Donna for the past few months, I found a really interesting trick. By mixing fire cyans with wind cyans, I could create electricity, and thus in doing so, I found out that by coating my sword with those 2 cyans, I could have lightning coating my sword. This trick, coupled with the keiki style, would prove devastating, as lightning was both strong and fast, which was exactly what the keiki style was about. A fast and devastating attack that focused on killing the opponent in one single move. Clank. As I was in the middle of admiring my sword, entering my room was Kevin's tired figure. Currently, his condition did not look the best, as he looked extremely tired and worn out. This was especially made apparent from the glaring black circles beneath his eyes. Noticing his condition, I could not help but say, "You look a bit tired." Staring at me, Kevin haggardly said, "I have constantly been challenged every day by the exchange students. Of course I would be tired." Shaking my head, I gloated at his misfortune. This is what happens when you show off too much. True, but it had to be done. I guess that was also true. Since he was publicly challenged, Kevin had no other option but to accept their challenge, or the people from the other academies would think he was a coward. After he beat his opponent a couple of days ago, almost all of the academies have been trying to challenge him to try to gauge his true skills. It was an annoying cycle that Kevin had to go through as the protagonist. To be honest, if it were me, I would not have minded being called a coward if it saved me from the trouble of constantly getting challenged. But since Kevin had his own pride, he would not stand for it, and thus why he was constantly accepting all challenges that came to him. Also, it is not like he did not benefit from this. In fact, Kevin benefited a lot, because he managed to get a lot of sparring partners during this time. The only problem was that most of them were weak, as the truly strong people refused to challenge him. In the end, the only thing I could offer Kevin was my pity and sympathy. Taking a seat on the couch of my room, I asked, "Did anyone see you when you came into the building?" Shaking his head, Kevin flatly said, "No, I made sure that no one noticed me, cameras and instructors included." Good. So, does that mean you are ready? Staring at me, Kevin sighed and nodded his head. Extending his hand in my direction, he said, "Yeah." "Give it to me." Squinting my eyes, I pretended to be confused as I said, "Give what?" Rolling his eyes, in an annoyed tone, Kevin said, "Do not pretend you do not know. I already told you beforehand. Give me the D rank core." Tisk, clicking my tongue, I took out a spherical object that pulsated a purple hue from my dimensional bracelet. "Must I really give you my C?" "Give it." As I took out the orb, staring at it for a couple of seconds, I tried to protest, but after being cut off by Kevin's cold voice, I could only reluctantly give it to him. "Goodbye 50 million U. Thanks." Grabbing the core with his hand, Kevin thanked me. Observing the core in his hand for a couple of seconds, as he made sure that everything was sorted, turning his attention back to me, Kevin solemnly asked, "Are you ready?" "Yeah." Standing up and staring at Kevin in the eyes, I nodded my head. Nodding his head back, Just as Kevin was about to open the portal, recalling something, he asked, right, before we leave, do you have at least a year's worth of supplies? Yes, I do. Hearing Kevin's question, I nodded my head and showed him my dimensional bracelet. In fact, I had 2 years worth of supplies with me. With food not getting spoiled inside of dimensional storages, I could pretty much store all the food that I wanted without worrying about it rotting. Ever since the first dungeon fiasco, I made sure to always keep with me at least a couple of months' worth of food supplies inside of my storage space. In order to store that much food, I had bought an extremely expensive dimensional bracelet that could hold 10 times more than my previous bracelet. With my now expanded storage place, I pretty much filled it with anything I could possibly think of. Drones, tents, food, water, books, clothes, basically anything that could prove to be useful. Of course, apart from those, I made sure to bring the red book with me as it was the best cheat I could have when traveling with Kevin. Just the book alone could increase the chances of my success to increase by a large factor. It was that important that I brought it with me. In the middle of my thoughts, remembering something, staring at Kevin, I asked, what is the conversion rate? 1 to 10. Frowning, I carefully asked, so, for every 10 days we spend there, a day passes here? Yes. Placing my hand on my chin, the frown on my face deepened. After a bit of thinking, I nodded my head and said, all right. Considering that today is a Friday, it means that we have about 2 days and a half to 3 days and a half to spend. Moreover, we can probably skip a day, buying us another 10 days. I am sure Miss Longburn would not mind our absence too much, so that means we will have at most a month's time. Would that be enough time? Honestly, I was not too sure. According to my calculations, yes, but you never knew what could go wrong. Frowning as I brushed the bangs of my hair to the side, I mumbled, oh well, even if we spend more time, what is the worst Donna could do? Kill us? Well, it did not matter. I had already typed out a message to Donna that would be sent to her in 3 days' time explaining our absence. Unless I returned before then, the message would be directly sent to her, helping me avoid a troubling situation where a long search for Kevin and I would happen. Pretending to not have heard my muttering, Kevin asked something that he had wanted to ask for a while. By the way, you still have not told me why we are going to Imura. Moreover, what are your plans once we arrive? He had wanted to ask this question before, but he never got the chance to ask. Now that they were in this together and were about to go to Imura, it was only appropriate that he knew what he was signing up for. Hearing Kevin's question, I nodded my head and said, well, let us go there first, and I will explain to you my plans. It will take a while to explain, so it is better if we talk about it there rather than here where time flows faster. All right, that makes sense. Hearing my explanation, Kevin nodded his head. Since time flowed faster here, every minute they wasted here was like 10 minutes there. Might as well go there first before talking about the plans. Hooah. Thus, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath, Kevin extended his hand forward. Ryan IP. As Kevin's hand touched the air, as if grabbing matter in space itself, Kevin tore the air apart as a black void appeared before him. Small ripples of residual magic slowly started appearing in the area Kevin was in, as the mana inside of Kevin's body was quickly getting depleted. As more time passed, the ripples became more profound and noticeable, taking on a misty aura. The mist gradually grew into an open vortex filled with darkness. As I was watching, I noticed that small translucent lights filled with different colors started to appear, filling the swirling darkness like a starry sky. With the core in his left hand, Kevin suddenly clenched his left hand into a fist. Crack. Subsequently, as if made of glass, the core shattered into a million pieces, and a tremendous purple hue suddenly engulfed Kevin's body completely. Unbothered by this, as his body shined, Kevin looked at me as he shouted, quick, enter the portal. I can only hold on for 10 seconds. Okay. Solemnly nodding my head, I stared at the black portal that was opened by Kevin with unprecedented solemnness. Glancing at the black ring on my finger for a split second, I exhaled and took a decisive step into the tier. Hooah. This was it, I thought. This was the moment I would leave Earth and enter a completely different planet, Imura. Chapter 165. Ugh. After an unknown period of time, feeling light pierce through the gap of my eyelids stimulating my pupils, I slowly opened my eyes. As I opened my eyes, what met my sight was a blue sky devoid of any clouds. A rich scent of nature invaded my nostrils, causing my groggy mind to slowly clear up. As I lay down on the ground staring at the sky, the first thing that caught my sight was the sight of 3 bright yellow balls floating in the sky. Are those suns? As I stared at the 3 yellow balls in the sky, after a couple of seconds, I had to look away due to the stinging sensation in my eyes. They were indeed 3 suns. I was in Imura, and the 3 suns were confirmation of it. Turning my head left and right, I found myself laying down on an expansive field of grass. In the distance, I spotted large boulders protruding from the ground, and though sparse, trees also appeared in the distance. So far, apart from the 3 suns in the sky, everything looked exactly like Earth. As I tried to lift my hand, I soon noticed that I had to exert a lot more force than I was used to. It felt as though there was a massive weight hanging on my hand. Frowning for a second, I instantly realized what was going on. Ah, right, the gravity here is 3 times stronger than that of Earth. With this planet being a lot bigger than Earth, both in terms of size and mass, the gravity of this place was also thicker. Fortunately, the past few months I had been training in the gravity room provided by the Academy, expecting something like this. Thanks to that, I wasn't overwhelmed by the gravity. You up. As I sat up, I suddenly heard Kevin's voice from my right side. Turning my head in his direction, I saw him leisurely sitting on top of a small rock, cleaning the sheath of his blade with a white cloth. Squinting my eyes to adjust to the bright light coming from the suns, I curiously asked, "How long was I out?" With his eyes fixed on his blade, Kevin responded, "Not much, around 10 minutes since I came here." Massaging my forehead, I nodded my head and slowly stood up. Although I had trained under this gravity before, I still needed time to properly adjust to this planet's gravitational force. Alright, that's not too bad. If I was passed out for a day, then things would have gotten complicated. Fortunately, it wasn't that long. Fwaya. Tapping onto my bracelet twice, I took out a black rectangular box and threw it at Kevin. "Here, go set up a dimensional space." Taking the box, Kevin looked at me in confusion as he looked around the empty grassland. "Dimensional space? Here? Yeah, let's rest first. I mean, look at the state you are in." There was no way I was going to travel with Kevin in the state he was in, especially not with the glaring black circles beneath his eyes. Considering how dangerous this place was, for him to move around in his current state was like asking to get himself killed. Alright. After a bit of thought, Kevin nodded his head. Ren's suggestion did indeed make sense. He was indeed tired. After fighting every day with the students from other academies, Kevin wasn't in his optimal condition. Although his opponents weren't anything special, because he wanted to benefit from the sparring, he had set himself multiple handicaps, which resulted in his current situation. Playing with the black box in his hand for a couple of seconds, Kevin looked at me and asked, "What's the radius on this thing?" 10 meters, anything other than that and I would probably go bankrupt. I wasn't lying about that. A whopping 5 million U, that's how much that thing cost me. In order to buy that thing, I had to slip my hands into the mercenary group's budget. If not for the fact that I swore to Small Snake that I was going to pay the money back in a week's time, I would have never been able to buy that thing. Still, it was a good investment in my opinion. This way I could at least rest without worrying too much about my safety. Alright, I'll get on it now. Putting his sword down, Kevin scanned the surroundings and started setting up the dimensional space around us. Good. Seeing Kevin move around the area we were in to set up a dimensional space, taking out a small black bead from my bracelet, I mumbled, "While you do that, I'll set up a tent." And thus, for the next 10 minutes or so, whilst I set up the tent, Kevin set up a dimensional space. Although there didn't seem to be any beast or demon around the area we were in, it was never a bad idea to be cautious. With the dimensional space around us, we didn't have to worry about any demons spotting us. Exactly 10 minutes after he started setting up the dimensional space, Kevin walked back in my direction. "Alright, I'm done." As he walked back, pressing onto a button, a large transparent dome appeared above our heads covering the area we were in. Fwaya. Nice. Staring at the dome that was forming above our heads, pointing towards the seat next to me, I urged Kevin to sit down. "Good, take a seat." "Alright." Nodding his head, Kevin took a seat and leaned back. Silence prevailed in the surroundings as neither one of us spoke. Taking out an energy bar from my pocket, I opened the wrapper and took a bite out of it as I looked into the distance. This place sure looked peaceful for a world conquered by the demons. However, I knew that this was merely a facade. This place was nothing but peaceful. Danger lurked everywhere, and one wrong move could cost our lives. Knowing this, we had to be especially cautious when moving around. We couldn't be careless. As my thoughts paused there, frowning slightly, I looked at Kevin and broke the silence. "Let's rest up for a couple of hours. After that, we will be moving." "Where are we going?" "Good Cadre." Taken aback, Kevin looked at me and asked, "Good Cadre?" Nodding my head, I slowly said, "Yeah, the last remaining orc city. Good Cadre." That was the name of the last and final orc stronghold in Imra, a massive city that had over 1 million orcs guarding it. Although this planet was currently conquered by the demons, they had only conquered around 80% of it. The last 20% of the land was still under the orcs' control. Although the land that they currently controlled was mostly infertile, by occasionally plundering the demons, the orcs were able to somewhat keep a foothold on this planet. Moreover, because the demons were currently focusing on conquering Earth, they didn't have enough manpower to fully take control of this place. But still, although it wasn't fully conquered, it was only a matter of time before all of the orcs on this planet died. With their limited food supply and lack of reinforcements, they were currently on the verge of being eliminated. This was also part of the reason why this place was so dangerous. With how desperate the orcs were, conflicts between the orcs and the demons were a common sight on this land, with both sides constantly fighting whenever they had a chance. Knowing this, when moving around, Kevin and I had to be extra careful to not get swept into the conflicts, as we could very well die considering the fact that we were only E rank and D rank, something that was equivalent to cannon fodder in this world. And although I knew all of this, going to Good Cadre was the first and most crucial step to my plan. Everything would begin from there. "I see." Frowning, Kevin remained silent for a couple of seconds. With the system helping him, Kevin had a general idea of the circumstances of this place. What shocked him, however, was how Ren was able to know all of this information, considering the fact that not even the people back on Earth knew of this place's existence. This made Ren's image in his mind become even more obscure. Still, Kevin didn't plan on asking him how he knew this information. Everyone had their own secrets, Kevin included. One of the reasons why Kevin liked Ren was because he never questioned his decision, or things that seemed to be out of place. Even if he did something crazy in front of him, Ren would most probably not ask him how he did it. He was someone that respected boundaries, and Kevin liked that. And since Kevin knew this, he also decided to not probe too much. As he said before, everyone had their secrets, and unless they willingly told you their secret, it was better to not probe too much. This was called respect. As his thoughts paused there, Kevin opened up the map of Imra through the system interface and had a good look at it. A couple of minutes after opening the map, turning his head towards Ren, he asked, "But why are we going to the good cadre first? Actually, that aside, you still haven't explained to me why we are here." "Ah, right, I still didn't tell you." Hearing Kevin's question, I nodded my head. It was about time I explained to him my plans. Staring at him directly in the eyes, I slowly said, "We are going to look for the cure for the Mindbreaker curse." "What?" Opening his eyes wide, whilst still seated, Kevin looked at me in disbelief. "The Mindbreaker curse? The one curse that is infamous for being incurable?" How could Kevin not be shocked when he heard that they were looking for a cure for something that was famous for not having a cure? Noticing Kevin's reaction, I nodded my head. "Yeah, you heard correctly, the Mindbreaker curse." "How? I thought that it was incurable." Staring at Kevin, I shook my head. Just because there isn't a cure on Earth doesn't mean that there isn't one somewhere else. The world was just, there was no curse that there was no cure of, and there was no disease that couldn't be cured. It's just that the cure for it wasn't discovered yet. Hugh, taking a deep breath to calm himself down, Kevin tried to regain his composure. Honestly, although shocking, Kevin knew that this trip wasn't going to be a simple vacation, and the fact that they had come here to find the cure for something that wasn't supposed to have a cure made a lot more sense than just coming here to sightsee. Although shocked, he was able to quickly calm himself down. Solemnly looking at me, Kevin asked, "If going to Good Cadre is the first step of the plan, what comes after that? And what are you hoping to achieve?" Hearing Kevin's question, placing my hand on my chin, I thought for a moment. "Ah, well, if we want to put it in simple terms, Pausing for a second to find the right words to say, after a bit of thought, I said, "We're going to shake this place to its core." Chapter 166. Clank. The ground shook, and a loud metallic sound reverberated across a green field filled with rocks and trees. Shortly after the metallic sound was heard, a deep yet powerful voice shook the surroundings. Rangam Lunk Targuel, holding on to a large metallic axe dyed in what seemed to be black blood, was a tall, white, and muscular humanoid figure that had a large scar covering half of his face. His heavy green eyes that were buried beneath his eye sockets looked up towards the sky where a black humanoid creature with black horns and large bat-like wings stood. Similarly looking back at his opponent, the black humanoid creature's blood-red eyes menacingly stared at the orc beneath him. Neither one of them spoke, however. Heavy tension prevailed over the surrounding. "Cut her, cut her." With each breath the orc took, turbid air escaped from his mouth, making him look terrifying. Behind him, over 1,000 or so similar humanoid creatures stood with their backs straight, wearing a thick metal armor that covered most of their facial features apart from their eyes. Every single one of them glared towards the sky where a similar number of demons stood in the air. Kurum, Kurum, Kurum. Stabbing their weapons onto the ground, the earth shook as the orcs repeatedly chanted their war cry. With every cry, they would rhythmically thump their weapons on the ground, resulting in an oppressive feeling to shroud the surroundings. Looking at the orcs beneath him, with a twisted sadistic smile on his face, the leading demon opened his mouth and chuckled. "KKK, Laring Maveltum, Kalum Tetinum Ruveltum Voil." Pointing his thumb towards his neck, the demon sadistically smiled towards the orc legion before him. Thereafter, he slashed his thumb past his neck as he excitedly shouted, "Kantar." Staring at the demon from below, unbothered by his provocation, the pale white orc raised his axe in the air and pointed it towards the demons in the air. Shortly after, his powerful voice once again shook the surroundings as he shouted, "Gondam Buyu." As soon as the white orc's voice traveled across the ear of each member, the orcs behind him raised their voices as they stabbed their weapons on the ground even more fiercely. Kurum, Kurum, Kurum. Not long after, simultaneously lifting their weapons in the air and arching their thick frames back, the orcs threw their weapons in the air. Swoosh, swoosh. With unprecedented speed, the weapons that ranged from axes and hammers to broadswords and all kinds of other heavy weapons hurtled towards the demons in the sky, splitting the air apart. Clank, thump. Screams echoed in the air as the demons used their wings to protect themselves from the sudden attacks from the orcs. Hee. As the weapons collided with the wings of the demons, some of the demons were able to repel the weapons, whilst others found their bodies completely crushed by the gigantic weapons headed in their direction. Black blood spilt from the sky. Kurum, with their hands in the air, as the weapons got repelled by the demons, a dark green hue shrouded the weapons that were still in the air. Suddenly, the weapons that were falling on the ground sped back towards the orcs standing on the ground, perfectly landing in the palm of their hands. Kurum, retrieving the weapons back, the orcs raised the weapons in the air as they chanted their war cry once again. Hee. Enraged by the orcs' sudden attack, with their nails sharply protruding from their fingers, the demons dove down towards where the orcs were. As they dove down on the ground, with each flap of their wings, their speed multiplied several folds, leaving behind after images. Spurt, rumble. Not long after the demons attacked, blood started spilling from both sides as desperate roars and cries echoed across the expanse of land. Holy fuck. Not so far from the confrontation, standing behind a massive boulder, putting my finger on my lips, I quietly whispered to Kevin, who had almost cursed out loud. Don't scream and try to hide your presence as much as possible. Covering his mouth, Kevin nodded his head. Yeah, good. Turning my attention back towards the fight in the distance, a solemn look appeared on my face. As Kevin and I were making our way towards Good Codver, we suddenly heard the loud war cry coming from the orcs. The logical thing for Kevin and I to do once we heard the noise was to obviously move as far away as possible. However, that was not what we did. That was because I suddenly had an idea. Turning my head towards Kevin, I softly whispered, "Can you decipher what they are saying?" To me, what they said made no sense. The language that they were currently using was a language known as Latvia, and was the main language that orcs used. As I did not learn it, I understood nothing. Fortunately, I had a walking translator next to me, Kevin and his system. Frowning, with his eyes fixed towards the fight in the distance, Kevin responded, "Yes, I can. All right, tell me what you managed to understand." Nodding his head, Kevin started speaking. To summarize what I have gathered from their conversation, the orc at the front of the other orcs is called Salug, and he is a legion commander. According to what he said, there are a total of 3,500 orcs in his command. Turning his attention towards the leader of the demons that stood in the air, Kevin continued. On the other hand, the leader for the demon side seems to be a count-rank demon, which is equivalent to an A-rank hero. Although he did not state the number of demons he has with him, it should be about the same. Pausing for a second to gather his thoughts, after a couple of seconds Kevin continued. Regarding why they are fighting, I do not know. By the time we got here, the conflict was already escalating, and so I was not able to get much. Hearing Kevin's evaluation and translation, I nodded my head. That's fine. I did not need to necessarily know why they were fighting. That was not my goal here. Turning his head in my direction, Kevin asked, "So what do we do now?" With my eyes fixed on the battle ahead, I responded, "We wait. Wait. Yeah, the time for us to move is not ripe yet." Not yet? Then what's your plan? What could they possibly gain from this fight? And what was the plan that Ren was talking about? Kevin wanted to know. Here, come closer. Seeing Kevin unsatisfied with my vague answer, sighing and urging for him to come closer, I explained to him my plan. The plan was rather simple. Once everyone was distracted fighting, sneak in and camouflage into an orc by wearing their equipment, and pretend to be one of them. That was it. There was no grand plan behind it or anything like that. Although there were other ways to enter Good Codver, directly entering from the entrance was probably the easiest and safest way to do it, well, at least compared to the other options. Moreover, since orcs were not the brightest creatures, by hiding in the masses, Kevin and I could probably get away with this. Though dangerous, it was the most appropriate plan at the moment. As I slowly explained my plan to Kevin, not long after, he looked at me in disbelief as he said, "You're crazy. If we do it that way, won't we be discovered? Moreover, what if one side loses? If the demons won and all of the orcs died, what was the point of sneaking in? Moreover, what if they got discovered by one of the orcs on the way back? Wouldn't that just spell instant death? I mean, since they were surrounded, they had no other option but to die. A single mistake, and death awaited them. And this plan was extremely risky. Don't worry." Pointing in the distance where the fight was happening, I looked at Kevin and said, "Take a look at the leaders of both sides, and tell me who looks calmer." "What do you mean?" Though doubtful, peeking from the side of the boulder, Kevin observed the leader of both sides. Currently, both sides were at a standstill with the orcs and demons fighting against each other. Casualties started to pile up from both sides. However, although there were casualties on both sides, in terms of numbers it seemed to be even as there were just about the same amount of orc corpses as demon corpses laying on the ground. Taking his eyes off of the main battlefield, Kevin looked towards the respective leaders of both sides, and he soon noticed that neither one of them was moving. Seeing their lack of action despite the fact that their subordinates were dying caused Kevin to frown for a second, but he soon understood why they were not moving. With both sides being a lot stronger than their soldiers, if they moved then the aftershocks of their battle would affect their own troops. It would even be more devastating. Simply put, the two of them could not fight just yet. Recalling Ren's words, staring towards the faces of the two leaders, Kevin soon noticed a peculiar thing. And that was that compared to the orc leader, the count-rank demon had a frown on his face as he spectated the battle from below. Moreover, with each passing minute the battle dragged, the deeper the frown on his face became. This definitely meant something. Suddenly, a certain idea came into his mind as he exclaimed in a small voice, "Ah!" Observing Kevin's reaction from the side, with a faint smile on my face, I looked at him and asked, "Now why would the orc leader be calmer than the count-rank demon?" Taking his eyes off of the battle, and looking back at me, Kevin slowly said, "Reinforcements." Pausing for a second, Kevin repeated in a low voice, "Reinforcements for the orcs are coming." Seeing that Kevin understood, the smile on my face deepened. Bingo. That's exactly it. With reinforcements coming from the orc side, it was only natural that the battle would shift toward the orcs' favor soon. Therefore, after observing this fact, I knew that the plan was feasible. As Kevin too understood this point, he proceeded to nod his head. "All right, if you put it that way it makes sense. That's right." Rumble. Just as I was about to speak, cutting me off mid-sentence was a large rumbling sound coming from where the battlefield was as the ground beneath us shook fiercely. Abruptly turning my head towards the battlefield, I soon realized why. It seems like the count-rank demon can't hold himself back anymore. I guess that's our cue. Solemnly looking at me, Kevin nodded his head and said, "All right. Let's hold on." Just as I was about to sneak into the battlefield, recalling something, and taking out a couple of potions from my pocket, I threw them at Kevin. Swoosh. Take this, you're going to need them. Make sure that once you're in the orc armor you chug all the potions I gave you down. Grabbing onto the potions that I threw at him, a look of confusion appeared on Kevin's face. What are the? Just as he was about to ask about the potions, I had already disappeared from my spot, leaving him standing alone behind the rock we were peeking from. Damn it, at least tell me what I need to use them for. Cursing out loud, Kevin glared at where I used to be and proceeded to head towards the battle as well. How careless. Hearing Kevin's shout from the distance, I could not help but shake my head. Fortunately, the loud sound from the battles had drowned out his shouting, else they would have caught him already. I felt a bit sorry for leaving without explaining what the potions did, but it is just that I really wanted to join in on the fun. Chapter 167. Rumble. Rumble. As I quietly moved around the perimeter of the battlefield, I made sure to hide my presence as much as possible. By hiding behind rocks and trees, I slowly crept my way towards the battlefield. Bam! Explosions rang everywhere, and pained and enraged screams echoed around the battlefield. Both sides continuously fought against each other, with the orcs swinging their massive weapons down, and the demons diving down from the sky, piercing through the gap of the orcs' bulky armor. Black and green blood sprayed everywhere, as both sides relentlessly tried to kill one another. Turning my head to the side, I stared towards the distance where the battle between the two leaders was happening. Standing with his back straight, Salug, the Legion commander, swung his axe downwards. As his axe touched the ground, the air split apart, and a humongous red light quickly approached the Count-rank demon in the air. Kacha, raising his hand, and in a slapping motion, the Count-rank demon's hand made contact with the energy beam. As soon as the Count-rank demon's hand touched the red beam, everything turned deathly quiet. Everything stood at a standstill as, be it orcs or demons, all looked towards the distance. Soon, a bright red light enveloped the surroundings, and a massive explosion rang out. Boom! A massive shockwave swept the surroundings as both orcs and demons in the vicinity were flung away. Not long after, as the light died down and the aftershocks of the explosion settled down, I soon saw the Count-rank demon diving towards Salug with unprecedented speed. His blood-red eyes now were tinged in black as his left hand hung by a few threads. However, if one looked closely, one could see the fiber of his muscles slowly regenerating, reattaching his arm in place. Stoically staring at the demon heading in his direction, Salug raised his axe in the air and screamed out loud. Gray! Boom! Soon the demon and the orc once again came into collision, and another massive shockwave swept the place. Shit! Observing the fight from the distance, I could not but silently curse to myself. How long will it take me to reach their level? Staring at the two leaders fighting in the distance caused my blood to boil. Such power, such overwhelming might, that caused the surroundings to shake with every single one of their moves. I too wanted to become that strong enough to not worry about carefully thinking about every single one of my actions. I knew I was being greedy. Yet, I could not stop myself from wanting that sort of power. And although I knew that the speed of my strength increase could be described as nothing short of a miracle, that did not stop me from seeking that strength. Still, I knew that some things could not be rushed. Staring at the two leaders fighting in the distance, I knew that it was only a matter of time before I surpassed them. Crash! As I was deep into my own thoughts, suddenly out of nowhere, an enormous frame crashed against the trees that were next to me, tearing everything apart and creating a cloud of dirt. Startled, I immediately crouched down and looked towards the direction of where the crash happened. Unfortunately, because of the dirt shrouding the area, I was not able to get a proper look at what it was. Turning my head to look behind me to make sure no one else was coming, I slowly approached the area where the crash happened. Kurar, Kurar. As the dust settled down, an orc appeared laying down on the area next to me. With each breath he took, white air escaped from his mouth. Soon our eyes met. Luton Garen Moven human. As his eyes and my eyes interlocked, after a short pause, the orc lifted his head and shouted out loud. Noticing this, placing my hand on the sheath of my sword, I quickly channeled the mana inside of my body and apologetically said, "Sorry, I do not speak Orcan language or whatever it is called." Click. The first movement of the Keiki style. Quick flash. Spurt. Thereafter, before the orc could defend himself, a bright light illuminated the surroundings, and a streak of light pierced straight through the small gap of the armor the orc was wearing. Green blood sprayed everywhere. Thump. Hiu. Exhaling, I removed my sword from the orc's body, as its body lifelessly slumped on the ground. Staring at the orc on the ground, I forcefully tried to calm my beating heart as I wiped the green blood that had splattered on my face. If I said I was not nervous right now, that would have been a lie. Although I was not sure about my opponent's true strength, I was at least able to infer that he was at least around my level. Fortunately, he was injured, or else the situation might have turned troublesome. Regardless, although nervous, I was able to retain my composure, which proved to me that I was growing. Had this happened to me 5 months back, I would have blanked out and lost some valuable time. It was fine to be nervous, everyone feels nervous. However, if that nervousness affected your judgment, that is when you knew you had a problem. Right now, I no longer blanked out whenever I was nervous. Alright, enough time wasting. Walking towards the now dead orc, I immediately stripped him of all of his armor. Clank. Fucking hell, this crap weighs a crap ton. Throwing the armor to the side, I could not help but curse to myself as I felt the weight of the armor. It felt as though it was a car. Sigh. Beggars cannot be choosers. Sighing inwardly, I looked at the corpse of the orc beside me. Taking out some oil from my dimensional space, I threw it at the orc and snapped my fingers that were coated in flamecions. Swish. Not long after, a raging fire appeared in the area I was in. As this was a common sight on the battlefield, it attracted no attention. Crouching down and carrying the armor away from the fire, I found a somewhat secluded area and put on the armor. To say it was easy would have been a lie. Let us ignore the fact that the armor was too big for me. Just the weight alone made me feel sick. It was already hard enough for me to adjust to 3 times the gravity, and now that I was wearing something that weighted like a truck on me, it felt as though my legs were made out of lead. I could barely stand straight. Fortunately, I had a solution to this. Taking out 3 potions from my dimensional space, opening the lid with my thumb, I tried to down them in one go. Here goes nothing. Rumble, rumble. However, just as I was about to drink the potion, the ground shook even more fiercely than before, causing me to lose my footing slightly. Fortunately, I was able to regain my footing. If not, I might have lost the potions. Rumble, rumble. Staring towards the distance, I slowly muttered, "Reinforcements are here." Seeing that I did not have much time left, quickly chugging down the 3 potions in my hand, I soon found my body expanding rapidly. In a matter of seconds, I was soon able to fill the armor completely. Moreover, the armor was no longer as heavy as it was before. The reason why I was able to do this was because of the 3 potions that I had just consumed. Gigantification Potion. Potion that rapidly expands body. Effects last for 1 day. Strength Magnification Potion. Potions that increase the strength of the user by a factor of 2. Effects last 1 day, and agility decreases as a result of consumption. Voice Changing Potion. Potion that enables the user to change voice as he or she pleases. I did not really need to explain why I needed the first 2 potions, however. The last potion, although it sounded useless, was an extra precaution I took in order to better disguise myself as an orc, as the orcs' voices were loud and powerful. Although I could not speak the language, in case they were chanting their war cry, I would not be exposed. Now I guess it is time for me to go. Taking out the red book for a brief moment, I read through some of the pages. Not long after, closing the book, I slowly made my way out of the forest I was in. Thump, thump. As I walked, with every step I took, the ground shook. Unbothered by this, I soon made my way out of the thin forest, and what I saw next shook me to the core. Kurum, kurum, kurum. On the expansive grassland before me, waves of orcs could be seen marching towards the distance, chanting their war cry and thumping their weapons on the ground. Wherever they went, the ground shook. At the helm of the orcs, standing on top of a large boulder, was Sulug's figure, who was menacingly staring towards the sky where the count-ranked demon stood. Next to him, another orc stood. He had a similar presence to Sulug, however, differently from him. His skin was red and his body was bulkier. He looked terrifying. Staring at the count-ranked demon in the air, the red orc shouted, "Quollum Torn Plizankar." Staring at the red orc below him, still smiling, the count-ranked demon responded, "Vlum Tennessee Lem." As the count-ranked demon and the orc leaders were conversing, I slowly walked towards the legion of orcs in the distance. As I walked, I made sure to not hide my presence as I kept my back straight, and fearlessly walked past the grassland towards where the other orcs were. The reason I was doing this was because I was not the only orc that got separated from their legion when fighting against the demons. Therefore, in order to not look suspicious, I had to approach them head-on. Fortunately, not long after, I was soon standing next to hundreds of other orcs, staring towards the distance where the 2 orc leaders were. Tyralim Valkan to Mad Good Kadr. Silently staring at the leaders in the distance, closing my eyes slightly, I spoke inside of my mind. "Hey, Angelica, are you there?" Calling for Angelica inside of my mind. After a short pause, her voice entered my mind. "Yes." Once again opening my eyes and staring at the leaders of both sides, I asked Angelica inside of my mind. "Angelica, can you understand what they are saying?" After another brief pause, Angelica responded, "Yes." "Can you translate for me?" "Yes, but do not talk too much with me, human. I feel a strong presence near here. If I am slightly careless, I might get exposed. So I will explain to you once you leave." Finally understanding why Angelica was taking so long to respond, I nodded my head in understanding as I looked at the count-ranked demon in the distance. "All right, I will wait once he leaves." Although Angelica was currently hidden, there was no guarantee that she would not get caught. Though the chances were extremely low, that did not mean the chances were not 0. Moreover, with the demon ahead being a count-ranked demon, it was never wrong to be extra cautious. Thankfully, it did not take long for the count-ranked demon to leave. "Kakek, Kalatum, Gaviat." 10 minutes after Angelica stopped speaking to me, with a loud chuckle, the count-ranked demon flapped his wing in the air and disappeared into the distance as a sonic boom resounded across the surroundings. Next to him, the remaining demons too disappeared in the distance with large smiles on their faces. Boom, boom. Although I was not able to make out what had happened, I knew that the demons had succeeded in whatever they were planning. That was because not long after the demons left, an enraged roar swept the surroundings and vegetation. Gundam Buyul. The source of the shout was Sulug, whose chest was rising up and down fiercely. Turning his attention towards the red orc next to him, and the legion behind him, Sulug shouted, "Karum, quick human, thump your weapon on the ground." As soon as Seagull's voice faded and hearing Angelica's warning, Using the axe I got from the previous orc, I rhythmically thumped it on the ground and shouted like the other orcs. Kurum, Kurum, Kurum. Turning around, Seagull headed towards the distance and the troops followed along. His face was incomparably dark. Rumble, rumble. Chapter 168. As dark clouds enveloped the sky and blocked the sunlight from shining down upon the land, rumbling sounds echoed across the mountain range. Rumble, rumble. Marching through the large rocky terrain were over 1,000 orcs wearing thick metallic armor that weighed over a couple of tons. With each step they took, the ground beneath them shook. Random gal. Walking at the front of the army of orcs were two orcs that stood out from the rest. A white orc and a red orc. Presently, both of their faces were incomparably dark as their chests heaved up and down unevenly. The Legion commander, Slug, had an especially terrifying expression as the large scar on his face became even more glaring. As we walked, a boundless bloodlust exuded from his body. The bloodlust was so powerful that the orcs standing next to him were trembling uncontrollably. It was almost as if they were staring at death itself. Watching the scene from further back, with my head straight, I softly said in a deep voice, "How long do we have left?" Walking next to me, wearing a large metallic armor that covered most of my body, was Kevin, who coldly said, 10 more kilometers. Turning my head to the side, and noticing Kevin's attitude, I realized that he was still holding a grudge against me for the potions thing. Rolling my eyes inside of the large metal mask, I apologized. "Alright, I'm sorry about the potions thing. You don't need to be so mad about it. I do understand that I was at fault here, but it's not like something would have happened. Let's exclude his perks as the protagonist. I also had the book with me. With it, I knew Kevin was going to be fine. I wasn't dumb enough to make him do something that would end up killing him. Not mad? I was almost caught because you didn't tell me what they did. No, you weren't. Stop exaggerating. He only startled a nearby orc. Nothing much happened. Since the orc was too busy fighting a demon, there was no follow-up. Turning his attention towards me, Kevin frowned inside of his mask and said, "And how do you know that?" From what Kevin remembered, Ren left on the opposite side of him. He shouldn't have seen him. Without skipping a beat, I responded. "Since I got lucky, and an orc died next to me, I was able to quickly change, and thus saw you on the way." Squinting his eyes, Kevin proceeded to nod his head. "I see. Nope, I was actually quite far from him, but he didn't need to know that." That aside, I finally found out why the orcs and the demons were fighting. After the count-ranked demon left, Angelica finally told me what had happened. To summarize it in short, the demons ambushed the orcs. Normally this wouldn't have been that much of a surprising event considering the fact the orcs and demons fought all of the time. However, this time, things weren't the same as usual. In fact, a big problem happened. The problem was that the food supply the orcs were carrying was directly targeted by the demons and, as a result, were destroyed. This was a massive blow to the orcs. With how scarce food was, any loss dealt towards their food supply meant that they were dealt a devastating blow, especially since food was what kept their soldiers alive until now. The less food the orcs had, the lower the chances of them surviving were. Kevin also understood this, and so as we marched with the other orcs, we discussed what happened. Although Kevin somewhat had gotten the gist of what had happened since he could understand their language, only after I relayed to him what Angelica told me did he fully understand what was going on. He was a bit surprised about how I was able to know this information since I couldn't speak the language before. Fortunately, he didn't pry too much. In the end, as he found out what had happened, he couldn't help but sigh and say, "What a pity." Glancing at Kevin for a brief moment, I softly said in a low voice, "What is?" "The fact that orcs can't use dimensional storages, else this situation would have never happened." Pausing for a second, I scratched the back of my head and nodded. I guess you're right. What Kevin said wasn't wrong. Orcs couldn't use dimensional storages like humans could, and that was because of one specific reason. Orcs couldn't use mana. More specifically, because orcs couldn't use mana, they weren't able to use dimensional storages, as they required mana to activate them. Had they been able to use dimensional storage, protecting the food supplies would have been a breeze, as Slug alone could have done the job. Unfortunately, this was not the case as orcs didn't use mana, but instead used something called aura, a completely different energy system compared to mana. It was only unique to orcs, like demonic energy for demons. The reason orcs used aura instead of mana had to do with how they evolved, and how they mainly focused on brute strength and their bodies. Unlike mana, which enabled users to channel elements, aura was a force that was hidden within the bodies of the orcs, and allowed them to stimulate every single muscle and fiber of their bodies. In doing so, it helped them grow stronger by regrowing their muscle fibers to be stronger and more durable. The end result was their massive bodies that contained boundless raw power hidden within. I didn't need to elaborate on how strong they were, as I had seen Slug's power firsthand. Terrifying. Therefore, because of how they were biologically designed, orcs couldn't use mana. This also explained why the orcs wore crude and heavy armor. It was simply because artifacts were useless to them as they couldn't use mana. Going back to Slug, the reason why he was especially furious was quite obvious. Since he was the leader of the expedition, all responsibilities were going to fall on him for the failure. Thump, thump. Suddenly, snapping me out of my thoughts were the sounds of footsteps halting as every soldier stopped moving. Standing on top of a rock, overlooking the orcs below him, Slug's powerful voice resounded across the area. "Laura Lon Saayik, Kumi Tun Larian Vaughn." Listening to Slug's voice echoing across the surroundings, frowning, I called for Angelica inside of my mind. Hey Angelica, is there a way for you to make me understand? After a brief moment, Angelica's voice entered my head as she said, yes, I didn't use this before because my brethren was there, but now that I no longer feel his presence, I can share a bit of my power. Seeing that Angelica could help me understand, I grew excited. Alright, perfect. Honestly, I found the fact that I couldn't understand a thing quite troublesome. Fortunately, I had Angelica with me who knew how to speak the language. Actually, Angelica, how many languages can you speak? I was genuinely curious, since she knew Latvian, which was the orc's main language, she definitely knew other languages. All of them. Taken aback by her response, I couldn't help but ask once again to make sure I didn't hear incorrectly. All of them? Yes, we demons are born with the ability to know every language out there. Listening to this fact, I was slightly taken aback. Interesting. I never knew this, especially since I was the creator of the novel. I guess there were still some technical things I didn't know as the author of the novel. Interesting indeed. Focus your mind. Hearing Angelica's voice in my mind, snapping me out of my thoughts, I closed my eyes and concentrated as Angelica told me. Though I was surprised with what Angelica told me, my mind was more preoccupied with other things like wanting to understand what Salug was saying. Alright, I'm about to share with you my skill, so try to not lose focus. Nodding my head, I solemnly said, alright, good. Fu-wa. As soon as Angelica's voice faded from my mind, I suddenly felt a stabbing sensation hit my brain, resulting in my face winching in pain. Kaha. A small groan escaped from my lips, but because it was faint, no one heard it. Moreover, I had a mask covering my face, which helped quite a bit. After a couple of seconds, feeling the pain in my brain disappear, opening my eyes, I looked towards Salug in the distance. Hopefully, I could now understand. Fiercely staring at the sea of orcs beneath him, Salug shouted as his powerful voice echoed across the surroundings. The flames of war are upon us. Kahur. By igniting the first sparks, the inevitable clash for the sovereignty of this planet has been pushed forward. Pausing for a second as he stared at the orcs beneath him, extending his hand forward and clenching it into a fist, Salug shouted. And I swear upon my name Salug, 3rd Legion commander of Good Kodver, that I will personally end them in the war that they so seek. Kahur. Only upon the smell of those vermin's blood blanketing this world, will I finally be able to rest in peace. Thump, thump, kurum, kurum, kurum. Hearing Salug's speech, the orcs listening to the speech felt their blood boil as they chanted their war cry, and thumped their weapons onto the ground. Satisfied with the reaction, with his face becoming incomparably serious, Salug shouted, so, now that we are about to enter Good Kodver, I want to know, who will stand by my side, and who will leave me? Instantly the surroundings became quiet. Listening to the speech thanks to Angelica's skill, I instantly realized what was going on. Salug, the orc leader, was trying to unite the troops by making them take his side so that when we arrived at Good Kodver, he would face a lighter punishment due to his failure. If he had substantial backing, his death or punishment would have an adverse effect on the orcs overall. By taking full command of this legion, Salug was trying his best to make himself more important in the eyes of the higher-ups. He wanted to exert dominance over everyone here before going back to Good Kodver. Moreover, judging from the fluctuations in the air, it seems as though he was using a skill that forcefully exposed people that were planning on betraying him. Fortunately, Kevin and I were not affected by this as we didn't use aura. I couldn't say this for the rest of the orcs. I was right. After a couple of seconds, seeing that no one had responded yet, Salug shouted out loud once again as the fluctuations in the air intensified. Say it now. Suddenly, an orc stepped out of the line and shouted, I would like to leave. As soon as his words came out, silence prevailed in the surroundings as everyone stared at the orc that stepped out. Oh, jumping off of the small cliff, walking towards the orc that had just shouted, Salug asked, why are you leaving me? Trembling all over, the orc responded, I just feel like there isn't much to do. We were ambushed by the demons, and yet we weren't able to even defend the food supply, which we desperately needed to death. Cutting the orc off mid-sentence, Salug's deep voice once again resounded across the area. I don't want excuses. Looking at Salug directly in the eyes, the orc pleaded as he said, I fought with my life on the line. I almost died multiple times during the fight. I've served you for over 30 years. Please let me go. I've served you faithfully for so long. I don't want to do this anymore. Staring at the orc before him for a couple of seconds, Salug nodded his head. I understand. Don't worry. Patting the orc by his shoulder, Salug smiled. However, the smile soon disappeared, and Salug grabbed the orc by his neck and lifted him in the air as a pained scream resounded across the area. Keek. Staring at the orc in his hands, Salug apathetically clenched it, and the loud sound of bones breaking resounded across the surroundings. Crack. Thump. Anybody else? Flinging the lifeless body of the orc to the side, Salug looked towards the orcs before him. After seeing that no one was daring enough to leave, Salug smiled and said, good, let's go. Kurum, kurum, kurum. Subsequently, as he turned around, the orcs all once again chanted their war cry as they followed along. This time, everyone stood with their back straight without daring to be negligent. It was evident that his display of power had won them over. Not long after, turning right of the mountain path, my footsteps halted for a moment as I stared at the enormous city in the distance. After a while, as I regained from my stupor, I couldn't help but mutter, we're here. We're finally at Good Kodver. It was the place where everything would begin. Chapter 169. Good Qadr was located 3,000 meters above sea level, on top of a large desolate mountain on the southern hemisphere of Imra. After the demons invaded Imra, the orcs had no other choice but to migrate to the south of Imra. The land there was drier, and the soil was more infertile. The orcs were not a united race, as they would always tend to fight against one another due to their personalities. However, with their race on the verge of extinction, they had no other choice but to unite. As a result of this, after searching for a while, the orcs managed to find the perfect spot to set up a city. They created Good Qadr, the last remaining orc city in Imra. It was an impenetrable fortress that hid between a cluster of large mountains. Rumbly, rumbly, marching with the other orcs, lifting his head up and staring into the distance, Kevin's voice softened a little bit. So that's Good Qadr. Yeah. From the way he was speaking, it was evident that he was overwhelmed by the sight before him. However, I could not blame him, as I too was overwhelmed by what I saw. On a different mountain than the one we were currently marching on, another enormous mountain appeared in the distance. Its peak was majestic, and the mountain's topography seemed steep and perilous. From a distance, the mountain appeared to have 3 sides that stretched upward vertically. This formed a semicircular natural barrier that stretched all the way to the sky. An ocean of clouds drifted above the mountain ridges, making the place look even more majestic and mysterious. Reaching 1/5 of the height of the mountain ridges, enclosing the natural semicircular mountain barrier, was an enormous artificial wall. It blocked anything from passing through. By the side of the gates stood 2 enormous statues. They depicted 2 orcs looking down towards the ground beneath them, holding onto 2 large axes that interlocked with one another. The statues looked extremely intimidating, creating an oppressive and menacing feeling. In the middle of the wall stood a large wooden gate connected to a long and wide flat bridge. It linked 2 mountains together. The one Good Qadr was on, and the one we were currently marching on to get there. Thump, thump. As we marched across the stone bridge, looking below the bridge, I could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. How deep is that? It was utter darkness. What was below the bridge was utter darkness that I could see no end of. If I dropped a rock down the bridge, I would estimate that I still would not be able to hear the sound of the rock reaching the bottom a couple of minutes after dropping it. It looked bottomless. Hoo-oh-oh. As we neared the gates, taking a deep breath, I tried to calm my heart down. At the moment, my heart was beating faster. That was due to the 2 statues at the front of the gate. Those 2 statues created a natural sense of fear towards anyone that looked at them for too long. It felt as though the real orc was standing and looking down on me. When I meant orc, I did not mean a regular orc, but one that was at a league of his own. Open the gates. Arriving before the large gates, walking out was Salug's figure. Glancing left and right and raising his large axe in the air, he shouted, "I, Salug, 3rd Legion Commander of Good Qadr, am waiting to report. Open the gates and let us in." As he spoke, his powerful voice echoed across the mountain range. Clang, clang. Not long after Salug's voice faded, the loud sound of chains falling resounded across the mountain range. The enormous doors slowly opened up, revealing the insides of the city. Kaamp. As the gate reached the top, staring at the vast city before me, I could not help but mutter in a low voice. So this is the true Good Qadr. It was the last orc stronghold in Imra. As I looked at the city from behind the gates, I noticed that the city itself looked somewhat crude. The infrastructures were not created with the finest craftsmanship. With its black wooden rooftops, faded marble walls, and what seemed to be the bones of fallen comrades and demons, Good Qadr had a frightening atmosphere. The atmosphere was especially stifling, as bones could be seen everywhere around the city. They were either out as decoration, or as materials themselves for the houses. "Hey Ren, look over there." As I was observing the buildings around us, feeling a slight bump next to me and hearing Kevin's voice, I turned my head around. I noticed Kevin staring towards the distance. "What? Check out that building." Looking in the direction of where Kevin was looking at, I soon spotted an enormous infrastructure standing in the middle of the city. As I was too busy admiring the area around me, I only noticed the enormous building now. 7 lean, circular towers made out of black stone surrounded the building that Kevin was pointing at. The infrastructure was twice as tall as the towers. It was the tallest building that I could see, overlooking the whole city. Similarly made out of black stone, the tall infrastructure resembled a pyramid, as its peak reached all the way towards the clouds in the sky. However, contrary to a regular pyramid, its infrastructure was circular rather than squared. By the side of the circular pyramid-like structure, enormous blood-red flags fluttered in the air. This added further grandeur to the infrastructure. "Move along." Entering the city, Salug once again shouted towards his army. Next to him, 2 more orcs appeared, leading him towards the distance. More specifically, they went toward the tall building in the distance. Rumbly, rumbly. As we marched forwards, standing next to me, Kevin frowned. Thinking of something, looking at me, he asked, So how do we get out of this situation? Now that they were in the city, how were they going to get out of the army? This was especially so considering the fact that they were basically stuck in between hundreds of orcs. Hearing Kevin's question, I did not answer immediately as I hesitated. I soon took out my red book and opened it. Well, I did in fact have a plan, but it would probably piss someone off. Not hearing my response, repeating again, Kevin said, "Hey, how are we supposed to separate ourselves from the other orcs?" Still looking at the red book, I vaguely said, That, we just do it." Seeing how vague I was being and looking at me incredulously, Kevin exclaimed, "Don't tell me that you still haven't thought about it." Shaking my head and closing the book, I immediately responded. No, I do have a plan. And, well, you're probably not going to like it. Pausing for a second as he squinted his eyes beneath his mask, Kevin had an ominous premonition. He carefully asked, how am I not going to, Sorry. Smiling beneath my mask, I put both of my hands on Kevin's metal armor, and I pushed him. As I pushed him, I made sure to apologize to him. You, clank, who dares? Crashing against a nearby orc, carrying the momentum with him, Kevin crashed against multiple other orcs. Without looking at what was happening, turning around, with a couple of rocks on my finger, I flicked them towards a couple of more orcs standing before me. Plack, plack, who dares? As the rocks hit the two orcs I aimed it on their helmet, turning around, the orcs shouted out loud. They glared at their surroundings. Shortly after, the two orcs that I hit looked at each other. Pointing towards each other they shouted, was it you? You disgusting bastard. So it was you? You want to have a go? I will fight you. Within a minute, both sides raised their weapons and slashed towards one another. A small shockwave appeared as a result of their clash. Bam. How dare you? Pushed back by the collision of the two orcs, another orc shouted out loud as he raised his axe and slashed down. Bam. I will kill you. Soon, a massive brawl ensued as more and more orcs joined in on the fight. This created massive mayhem. Fortunately, by the time the fight got serious, I had already left. Else, I might have found myself in a pickle. OOF. If I had to be honest, this strategy was not something I had come up with on the spot. I remember seeing this in a movie, so I just tried to imitate it. Create chaos amongst the orcs and use the opportunity to slip out whilst everyone was distracted. Since orcs were not the brightest creatures and were easily provoked, this strategy proved to be rather effective. Had they been even a little bit smarter, this plan would have never worked. Plus, I knew everything was going to be fine. Staring at the book in my hands, which no one else could see, I leisurely walked away from the orc army. Fortunately, I had the book with me. With it, I could pretty much see if my plan would have failed or not. Of course, even though I saw that the plan I was planning on using worked, it didn't mean that the future depicted in the book was correct. Had I missed my shot towards the two orcs, everything would not have gone as the book had depicted. Therefore, even if the book showed me that everything was going to be fine, it didn't mean that it was going to guarantee success. There was always a chance of failure. Had I messed up, none of what the book showed me would have happened. Well, since everything is fine now, I shouldn't dwell too deeply into it. Putting the book away and turning around, I soon saw Kevin sneaking out from the army of orcs. Soon, his eyes interlocked with mine. Well, someone doesn't look too pleased. Staring at him for a couple of seconds, I lightly waved at him as I sneaked my way into the depths of the city. As I moved, recalling Kevin's angry face, a smile appeared on my face, and I softly mumbled to myself. Sometimes I can't help but marvel at how trashy I can be. Though not often it happens. And when it does, well, I couldn't say I was the most pleasant person. Melissa and Small Snake probably knew best. Chapter 170. Thump, thump. Inside of a dark hall, a tall orc slowly walked forward. With each step he took, the ground beneath him would tremble slightly. Halting his steps in front of the entrance of the hall, Sulug knelt down on one knee. He proceeded to look down on the ground as his powerful voice resounded across the hall. Sulug is here. As Sulug's voice echoed across the surroundings, he was only met with silence. However, Sulug did not mind it as he remained kneeling on the ground. Enter. Exactly 5 minutes after Sulug made his presence known, a dark and raspy voice shook the whole building. A humongous pressure engulfed Sulug's body completely. Cover, yes. Forcefully bearing the pressure and standing up, Sulug sluggishly walked towards the hall before him. As he entered the hall, the first thing Sulug saw were tremendous braziers, hanging from 10 ivory columns by the side of the hall. They were lighting up every part of the hall, including the dark brown oaken floor that was covered by a black rug, comprised of the skin of some sort of beast. The rug ran from the throne down at the center of the hall all the way towards the entrance where Sulug was walking. Rectangular banners with black and red sigils hung from the side of the walls. Between each banner sat a small altar full of candles, illuminating the statuettes of powerful creatures, depicting either orcs or other fantastical creatures, such as dragons and gargoyles. In the middle of the hall sat a magnificent throne made out of bones, with 2 imposing statues depicting 2 large orcs holding onto their weapons. The throne was covered in sacred etchings, and fixed on each of the front legs was a red ruby that pulsated a red hue continuously like a heart. Sitting on top of the throne was a figure whose features were obscured by a large shadow cast by the 2 statues next to the throne. However, despite the fact that his features could not be seen, his majestic presence enveloped the whole hall, causing anyone that saw him to subconsciously feel inferior. Thud. Arriving a couple of meters before the obscure figure, taking a knee, Sulug once again spoke. Sulug is here to report. Silence once again prevailed over the surroundings as the figure sitting on the throne observed Sulug from his throne. Cuh. With each breath the figure took, the hall would shake slightly. Turning his head to the side, the figure coldly spoke. Zorn you? Yes, father. Standing next to the throne was a rather young-looking orc. He was only half as tall as Sulug, and his muscles were not as pronounced. However, a regal and majestic presence exuded from his body that was only slightly inferior to the orc sitting on the throne. Zorn you? That was the name of the young orc standing next to the orc chief sitting on the throne. Birthed 16 years ago by the current chief of Good Kadr, Zornuryu was exposed to the best resources and best education possible, making him the orc with the greatest potential. The young chief. That was what everyone in the city called him, as the elders and the chief unanimously decided on making him the next chief. Aside from the current chief, no other figure was as important as Zornuryu, who was the next chief in line. He was the last hope the orcs had at reclaiming the lost land of Imra. Presently, the reason why he was attending the meeting was because his father, the current chief, wanted for him to observe and understand what his job consisted of. He wanted him to learn from him, and Zornuryu naturally understood this. Pointing towards Salug kneeling down on the ground, the figure sitting on the throne, the current orc chief of Good Qadr, asked, "What do you think?" Turning his head towards his father, who was imposingly sitting on the throne, Zornuryu slowly said, "Father, Salug's sin is undeniable, he should be punished." Breathing out loud, the orc chief nodded his head as he asked, "Qadr, yes, Zornuryu, what do you think is the appropriate punishment for his failure?" Without hesitation, Zornuryu responded, "Death." "Are you sure?" Nodding his head resolutely, Zornuryu stared at Salug kneeling on the ground, whose face was expressionless. With a trace of disgust on his face, Zornuryu said, "Yes, we orcs do not need failures like him. Why must we keep him?" Staring at Zornuryu for a couple of seconds, turning his attention back towards Salug, the orc chief's powerful voice resounded across the hall as he asked, "Salug, do you have anything to say against Zornuryu's decision?" Hearing his name being called, lifting his head up, and staring deeply into Zornuryu's eyes, Salug nodded his head. "Yes." Hearing Salug's response and feeling challenged, Zornuryu raised his voice as he shouted at Salug, "You dare!" Raising his hand from the armrest of the throne, the orc chief glared at Zornuryu. "Shut up. Only talk when it is your turn to talk. Do not interrupt otherwise." As soon as his voice left his mouth, the whole room shook violently. Dreadful energy propagated outwards of the chief's body like a turbulent wave as it engulfed the entire hall. Rumble. Realizing his mistake and lowering his head, Zornuryu nodded his head. "Yes, father. As the next chief in line, you need to think long-term instead of short-term. As a leader, you must always be composed and must not let our primal instinct cloud our decision-making." Enlightened, Zornuryu nodded his head in understanding. "Understood, father." "Good." Seeing that Zornuryu had understood, turning his attention back to Salug, the orc chief's voice once again resounded across the hall. "So, Salug, since you are so dissatisfied with my son's decision, tell me why we should keep you." Respectfully looking at the orc chief before him, Salug raised his voice as he said, "I, Salug, 3rd Legion Commander of Good Qadr, have a lot to offer." "Oh, like what?" "You better sound convincing, or I might just do what my son has proposed." Punching his chest once, Salug said, "My strength, my loyalty, my blood, and my troops." Raising his brow, the orc chief snorted, "Your troops? The ones that were just battling outside a moment ago?" Hearing the orc chief's statement, Salug's voice remained stoic as he continued, "Yes, they are faithfully loyal to me. Killing me would have a detrimental effect on the morale of the troops, which you cannot afford to do at the moment. Killing me would also negatively affect the overall power of us orcs, as killing me would mean killing an important asset to the orcs." Pausing for a second, Salug loudly said, "Killing me would result in your position shaking." Gripping onto the armrest of his throne, the orc chief squinted his eyes. "Oh, are you threatening me?" Be it humans, elves, demons, or dwarfs, power struggles were normal. It would have been strange if the current orc chief had no other people vying for his position. Salug's point was quite a valid one, as his death would mean that the current chief would have his power considerably weakened. Not only would he lose a powerful commander, he would also lose a lot of the soldiers that are loyal to Salug. Normally, the current orc chief would have taken notice of the small threat, as his position was solidified. However, glancing at Zornuryu next to him, he had to make his decision carefully. Though his position was solidified, Zornuryu's position still was not. If he lost Salug's support, then his ascension as next chief would become much harder. Simply put, this would do more harm than good for Zornuryu, as it would allow for rivals to gain valuable time to grow. This could not happen, and Salug knew this. Noticing the orc chief falling into deep contemplation, shaking his head, Salug raised his head and stared at the orc chief straight into his eyes as he coldly said, "No, I am not threatening you. I just know my worth." Silence soon prevailed over the surroundings. Deeply staring at Salug's eyes for a couple of seconds, the orc chief tapped on the armrest of his throne for a couple of seconds before opening his mouth. Cut her, very well." Nodding his head, the orc chief looked at Zornuryu as he mumbled, "You still have a long way to go, Zornuryu." Turning his attention back towards Salug, the orc chief's powerful voice shook the whole hall as he spoke out loud. "From henceforth, Salug, 3rd Legion Commander of Good Qadr, will be dismissed from his duties and will guard the food storage for the next 3 years. Until then, he will no longer have anything to do with the 3rd Legion, and will only be responsible for safeguarding the main food supply." Deeply staring at Salug as he released his pressure, the orc chief said, "Do you have any problems?" With an incomparably dark face, Salug stood up and shook his head. "Cut her, no, I will comply." Turning around, Salug soon left the hall. As he turned around, his face became especially terrifying. If looks could kill, then right now Salug could slaughter a whole army. Although his punishment was on the lighter side, Salug knew that it was merely a mask. By separating him and his troops for 3 years, the orc chief was trying to diminish the loyalty they had towards him, so that in the future, he would have been able to pull off the same stunt. As his thoughts paused there, Slug clenched his teeth tightly as he walked out of the building. Don't think that I will let your plan succeed that easily. Not so far from where Slug was, in a rather secluded spot in good cover, with Kevin still glaring daggers at me, I leisurely sat down on the ground and took off the bulky armor. Clank, clank. Ha, this was hella stuffy. As I threw the armor to the side, I could not help but take a big breath of fresh air as I rejoiced at the fact that I no longer needed to wear the armor. It felt as though I was staying inside of a sauna. Are you seriously not going to address the fact that you literally pushed me towards the orcs and abandoned me? Staring at me from above, Kevin's mouth twitched. That, yes. Turning my attention back to Kevin, I dully said. Well, we did manage to get out, did we not? Moreover, you are not hurt either, right? No, Baw. Enough of that, we've got more important things to talk about. Cutting Kevin off before he could finish speaking, I diverted the conversation. No use crying over spilled milk. Helpless, Kevin nodded his head as he asked. So, what are you planning on doing? What am I planning on doing? Taking off the metal pads from my arms, a faint smile appeared on my lips. Channeling flame scenes towards the tip of my fingers, I proceeded to snap my fingers. Snap. Fwaya. As soon as I snapped my fingers, a small red flame appeared on my hand. Deeply staring at the flame in my hand, I said, we're going to ignite the flame that will rage upon Imra, and leave nothing but devastation in its wake. Pausing for a second as the smile on my face deepened, glancing towards Kevin for a couple of seconds, I clenched my fist and said, we're going to start a war. Chapter 171. Opening his eyes wide, Kevin exclaimed in disbelief. You're planning on starting a war? Putting my finger on my lips as I gestured for Kevin to quiet down, I shook my head. No, don't misunderstand. The war was always going to happen regardless of past, present, and future. All I'm doing is just pushing up the date of when the war will happen. Frowning, after a bit of thought, Kevin nodded his head. I guess you're right. Judging from what he saw the past few days, it did indeed seem like a war was inevitable. From the way that the orcs desperately sought food every day in order to survive, to how they were forced to live in a completely desolate place, a war was indeed inevitable. Yeah. Staring at Kevin, who seemed to have bought what I said, I secretly shook my head. Naive. Actually, what I said was total bullshit. The war that seemed to be fast approaching will never happen. In the novel, a couple of years from now, by the time Kevin arrived in Imra, the war that was supposed to happen never happened. In fact, when he arrived, the situation in Imra was vastly different compared to now as the orcs conquered back 40% of the land in Imra. The reason for how the orcs were able to reclaim the land was mostly due to the fact that the demons were forced to send some of their forces away due to a certain event happening in the near future, which could more or less be linked to Kevin being the source. That aside, the war that seemed to be looming over this world was never going to happen. But Kevin didn't need to know this fact. Had he known that we were going to start a war that was never going to happen, Kevin would have probably never agreed to my plans. I guess it was just against his morals as someone who had a hero complex, but I honestly didn't care. To me, aside from the people close to me, nothing else mattered. If I had to start a war in order to achieve my goals, then so be it. I'll make it happen, especially since my goal was to infiltrate Seton. The city that once used to be the capital of Imra was now under the demon's rule. Going to Seton was a must as everything that I wanted was there, be it the Mind Breaker Curse Cure, the Flute of Artemis, Angelica's item, and a few other things I wanted. Everything was located there. By starting a war, I was essentially trying to divert the demons' attention away from that city so that I could sneak in and take everything that I wanted when the stronger demons were out fighting. Once I took everything, I didn't need to look for ways to escape, as I would have Kevin directly create a portal back to Earth in order to escape. Knowing this, I knew that all I needed to do was sneak into the city. With me not needing to think about an escape plan, it meant that I could now fully focus on igniting the flames of war. Turning my attention back to Kevin, I started explaining to him the current plan. Listen up, Kevin, as you probably already know, in order for me to achieve my goal, I need to start a war. And the thing you're about to do next is extremely important. Nodding his head, Kevin's face turned serious as he perked up his ears. Okay. Pausing and staring at Kevin straight into his eyes, I softly said, your goal is simple. Destroy their food storage. This point was self-explanatory. With the orcs no longer having food storage, they will be forced to venture outside of the city to look for food. The only way they could do so at the moment would be through plundering and attacking the demon cities in the northern hemisphere of the world. This would obviously enrage the demons and create more conflicts between them. But hold on, would this really be enough to start an all-out war with the demons? The answer was no. Just destroying their food storage wasn't enough. Although this would definitely escalate the conflict between the two parties, this was not the trigger that would start the war. Destroying the food supply was merely like moving a pawn. It just moved the game forward. It didn't end the game. What would really start the war was up to me. Fortunately, I had already thought of this before coming here, as all my preparations were ready. Glancing at the black ring on my finger, a faint smile appeared on my lips. You're soon going to come into play. Where is their food storage? As I was looking at the black ring on my finger, snapping me out of my thoughts was Kevin's voice as he asked about the location of the food storage. Listening to Kevin's question, my mind stopped working for a second as I responded. No idea. Frowning, Kevin was taken aback as he asked, then how are we supposed to do this? What was the point of destroying the food storage if they had no idea of where it was? Moreover, considering how important it was, it was definitely hidden somewhere within the city. It's not like they were going to make its location known, as that would basically be revealing their weakness for everyone to see. Although the orcs were stupid, they weren't that stupid. Looking at the city and seeing how big it was, Kevin estimated it would take a long time for both of them to even get a clue on where the food storage was. Moreover, since they only had 1 month here, wasting time looking for the food supply wasn't the most ideal thing. Understanding Kevin's worries, I reassured him. Don't worry, although I may not know where the food storage is, I know someone who does. Taken aback, Kevin asked who. Smiling mysteriously, I looked towards the large circular pyramid-like structure in the distance. You've already met him. Thinking for a moment and finally realizing something, opening his eyes wide, Kevin said, wait, you don't mean. Nodding my head, I confirmed Kevin's assumption. Yeah, our very own Commander Salug. Pausing for a second as I admired the black tower at the center of the city, I slowly continued. It's just my guess, but because of the fiasco with the food supply thing, he is probably going to get demoted. And considering how influential he is in the army, as we had just seen a while back, the orc chief will most probably not allow him to enter the army again to try to decrease his influence in it. Meaning that there is only one option left. Interrupting me, Kevin said, guarding the food supply. Staring at Kevin and seeing that he had understood, I nodded my head. Yes, considering his strength and status, if he's not going to be part of the army, the most logical thing would be for him to guard the food supply. Any other role, and it would be a waste of his talent. Pausing for a second, I looked at Kevin and continued. So, if you follow him discreetly, you will know the location of the food supply. Placing his hand on his chin as he closed his eyes and thought for a moment. After a couple of seconds, Kevin proceeded to nod his head. That makes sense. Moreover, spying on him shouldn't be too hard, considering the fact that the orcs here aren't well versed in detecting mana. Yeah. Hearing Kevin's comment, I nodded my head. Fortunately, he was smart enough to understand my train of thought. Because Kevin and I were human, it was much easier for us to sneak around in good cover. The reason was because orcs here had zero self-awareness towards humans, more specifically, mana. That was because mana and humans weren't a thing that was supposed to exist in Imra. It was a planet only inhabited by orcs and demons. Naturally, because humans weren't supposed to exist here, it came as no surprise as to why the orcs couldn't detect mana fluctuations that come from humans. They simply weren't aware of it. Even if they were aware of it, they would have been wary of it, as humans weren't supposed to exist on this planet. In short, this made it a lot easier for Kevin and me to sneak around the city without getting caught. Still, just because it was harder for them to detect us, it didn't mean that they couldn't. If we came too close to them, we could easily be detected by the sound of our breathing and heartbeat. With orcs mainly focusing on their body, their senses were far more evolved than ours. It wouldn't be strange for them to detect us just through our sense of smell, but that was fine. If we stood far enough, we would easily be able to spy on the orcs. Moreover, as I've said before, Kevin and I were human. Our smell wasn't something that the orcs could understand, not unless they saw humans firsthand, which they shouldn't have. So, although possible, the chances of them sensing us through smell wasn't very high. This was proven on our way towards the city with the orc army. Alright. The more he thought about it, the more Kevin was convinced with the plan. He shared a similar thought process and instantly understood the crux of the plan. It could definitely work. Glancing at me, he asked, I can do that, but what will you do? Pointing towards myself, I asked me. Yeah, are you coming with me? Shaking my head, I immediately refused. No, I won't. Then what will you be doing? Well, you'll know soon enough. If I told him now, it would ruin the whole surprise. My plan needed Angelica, therefore I couldn't disclose too much, or things might become complicated. After all, the two had already met. Just thinking of the conversation we would have once he found out about Angelica gave me headaches. Let's not have the two meet. That aside, now that I explained everything to Kevin, it was about time to enact the plan. Glancing at Kevin, I said, let's split up for now. Come back to me in 2 days' time once you find something out. Staring me in the eyes, Kevin proceeded to nod his head as he turned around and headed towards the center of Good Cotter. Alright, I'll meet you once I find something. Swoosh. Watching Kevin's figure leaving in the distance, my eyes drifted towards the large tower in the middle of the city. Soon the corner of my lips curled upwards as I softly mumbled, I'm genuinely curious as to how an all-out war between orcs and demons looks like. Shrugging my shoulder as I turned around, I knew that I wouldn't need to wait for long to get my answer. Chapter 172. I think I've got it. Standing on top of a tall flat house, with binoculars in his hands, Kevin stared towards the distance. He looked towards a rather inconspicuous house that looked like any other one present in the city. As he looked at the house in the distance, Kevin tried his best to hide his presence. Although he was far from it, it was never wrong to be extra cautious. The reason why he was being especially cautious was because he had finally found where the food supply was located. Squinting his eyes as he looked through the binoculars in his hands, slightly lowering his head, Kevin whispered towards his watch. I've found the food storage. Just like Ren had told him 2 days ago, Salug was indeed demoted and made to guard the food storage supply. Thus, following Salug from the distance, Kevin was quickly able to find the location of the food storage. From there, he spent the last few days observing. He observed everything from Salug's behavioral pattern to the time he spent guarding the storage space. He also noted how long his break took and who replaced him when taking breaks. He knew everything. As his thoughts paused there, Thinking of Salug, Kevin couldn't help but be impressed by Ren's analytical skills. Just from a couple of clues, he was able to figure out Salug's demotion. From there, he basically deduced the location of the hidden food supply that was supposed to be unknown by almost everyone. It was honestly really impressive. Kevin knew that compared to Ren, he was far inferior to him in that aspect. After a short pause, snapping Kevin out of his thoughts, Ren's voice echoed from the speaker of the watch. "Oh, where exactly is the food storage?" "Southern area." "Southern area? I see." Still staring at the house in the distance with the binoculars in between his hands, Kevin asked, "When should I proceed?" After a short pause, Ren's voice once again echoed from the speaker of the watch. "You can do so now maybe? I'm pretty much done on my side as well, or do you need more time? We must act together or this might not work." "Yes, my preparations are almost ready." Pausing for a second, Kevin carefully asked to make sure he understood what he had to do. "You only need me to destroy the food storage, right? Not sneak in and take something?" "No, just destroy the food storage." Nodding his head, Kevin responded, "All right, I'll start operating in 2 hours. I'll give you a heads up when I do." 2 hours. Staring at the building in the distance, Kevin decided to act after 2 more hours passed. The reason for this was because that was the time he estimated Salug would take a break. Having seen Salug's strength firsthand, Kevin knew it was best to operate once he was gone, as he was simply too powerful. Once Salug was out, Kevin had about 15 to 30 minutes to operate. Any more than that, and he would risk having Salug discover him, which he couldn't afford to do. Ren specifically told him that he couldn't be seen, as that would pretty much ruin all of the plans. Although Kevin didn't know what he meant by that, he knew that he had to complete this mission without leaving a trace of himself behind. Taking note of when Kevin was going to take action, Ren's voice once again echoed through the speakers of the watch. "Great, 2 hours sounds good. Good luck." "All right, I'll message you soon." Tack. Turning off his watch, Kevin slowly closed his eyes and took out a small black drone from his dimensional space. Thereafter, putting the binoculars down, Kevin activated his skill, F-grade mind cleansing. He threw the drone in the air. Fueo. Shortly after the drone left his hand, it disappeared into the distance. Staring at the area where the drone used to be, Kevin softly muttered, "It's about time I moved." On the northern side of Good Codver, quietly resting on the rooftop of a building, I looked towards a certain building in the distance. With black being the most prominent color, a rather unique-looking infrastructure appeared in my vision. From the outside, the house looked grandiose and intimidating. Using dark oak wood to build the frame of the house, sharp bone tusks protruded from the side of the house. Large red banners fluttered in the air, further adding to the intimidating feeling. Hooah! Staring at the building before me, I took a deep breath. The building I was currently looking at was the place where the young chief, Zornryu, lived. It was probably the last place he'll live in. That's right. The next part of my plan consisted of the assassination of Zornryu, the next orc chief. Only by assassinating him will everything go as I envisioned. After they realized that their young chief had died, the orcs would naturally not stand still. Perhaps the orc chief may be able to remain rational after his son's death, as he couldn't wage war with the demons because of his personal feelings. However, that was only if his son's death was the only thing that happened. Unfortunately for them, Zornryu's death wasn't the only thing that will happen today. Staring towards the southern side of Good Codver, a faint smile appeared on my lips as I softly muttered, "I'll leave it up to you, Kevin." With Kevin taking care of the supply storage and me assassinating Zornryu at the same time, all the pieces that I had set in motion would slowly come together. I was looking for one play, an all-out war between the orcs and the demons. As my thoughts paused there, staring at the ring in my hand, I softly said, "Are you ready, Angelica?" "Yes. You know what you have to do, right?" After a short pause, Angelica responded, "Kill the young orc using my powers." Nodding my head, I reminded her, "Yeah. Make sure you expose yourself once you are going for the kill. Only once they know that it was a demon that killed Zornryu would everything start to make sense. In order to do that, what better way than to have a demon actually kill him?" After a brief second of silence, Angelica asked, "Does killing him mean that I've held my end of the deal?" Shaking my head, I responded, 80% there. I'll need you for one more thing after that." She still had one more role to play. After that, she would pretty much no longer be of use to me, but that was fine. Once she finished with her parts, Imra would be engulfed by the raging flames of war. For that to happen, I needed Zornryu to die. Hearing my response, Angelica agreed, all right. As long as she could reach Viscount rank, Angelica didn't mind killing an orc, or even demons. What mattered to her the most at the moment was her strength. Anything else was secondary. Good. Seeing Angelica agree, the smile on my face deepened. Naturally, killing Zornryu was the main reason why I had brought Angelica with me. With her killing Zornryu through her demonic power, everything would be traced towards the demons. Although orcs couldn't detect mana, if I were the person responsible for killing Zornryu, the chances of them pinning the blame on the demons were low. They might assume that it was another orc who did it out of spite, or in order to become the next chief. The reason why they wouldn't link it to the demons was because when demons killed, they often left a distinct residual demonic energy in the air. It was almost like a signature, making it easier to understand that they were indeed the ones who were responsible for the incident. If I were the one to kill Zornryu, then the orcs might have trouble connecting this to the demons specifically, because I couldn't leave any demonic energy. As I was in the middle of my thoughts, I suddenly sensed something in the distance. Soon a smile appeared on my face as I said, "Oh, he's coming. Get ready, Angelica. We're about to move." Walking towards the house that I was observing from the building I was on, I saw the figure of a young orc accompanied by another orc slowly making their way towards the house. It was Zornoryu and his bodyguard. After having observed Zornoryu's behavioral pattern as well as routines for the past 2 days, I pretty much got the gist of the situation. I had to say, I was rather disappointed. This was mostly due to the fact that Zornoryu only had one bodyguard with him at all times. Yeah, just one bodyguard. The fact that Zornoryu, the next orc chief, only had one bodyguard with him was rather shocking. Was he that confident in the fact that no one would target him? Although his strength ranged around D rank, which was amazing for someone his age, in the grand spectrum of things, he was amongst the weakest individuals residing in the city. Regarding his guard, from what I've observed, I'd estimate his strength to be around C+ to B rank, which was honestly really low. It did not benefit the status of the person he was protecting, the next chief. To make matters worse, the bodyguard didn't actually even enter Zornoryu's house as he waited outside. It was as though Zornoryu didn't care at all about people assassinating him. Was he that confident in his strength and background? Thinking thus far, I shook my head. He was still a newborn chick after all. Prideful and arrogant. These are the 2 recipes for disaster. Though it sounded like a rant on my side, I was genuinely quite happy with this development, as it made my life easier. I had originally made a lot of preparations for this, only to be left speechless by how uncautious they were. Hooah! Looking at the ring on my finger for a couple of seconds, I exhaled. I guess it's time for me to make a move. Ding. Feeling a slight vibration on my wrist, I stared at my watch. I knew that it was time for me to move. Seems like Kevin feels the same way. This was the most crucial step to my plans. I couldn't afford to mess up. Zornoryu's death was the first and most important piece of my plan. Once he died, everything would start falling into place. Closing my eyes, a white hue shrouded my body for a split second before it slowly disappeared as if nothing had ever happened. Standing still for a couple of seconds, as I opened my eyes, the world around me gradually lost its color. My heart rate decreased, and all the distracting thoughts inside of my mind disappeared. Only one goal imprinted itself inside of my mind: ensuring Zornoryu's death. Taking a step forward, I softly mumbled, "Monarch's Indifference." Chapter 173. Swoosh. 2 hours since last contacting Ren. Putting away the binoculars in his hand, Kevin jumped off the building he was on. The time was right. Tap. As his feet softly landed on the ground, Kevin quickly turned around and swiftly moved through the narrow streets of the Good Cotter. Fortunately for Kevin, as he was no longer the size of an orc, and thus no longer wearing the heavy armor that weighed like a truck, he was now able to move around the city fast and stealthily. This should be the place. Stopping in front of an inconspicuous-looking house, glancing at his watch, Kevin softly mumbled, 15 minutes. 15 minutes. That is how much time Kevin had at his disposal. After he noticed that Salug was taking a break, Kevin immediately sprung into action, as he quickly arrived before the place where he observed the food storage was located. 2 orcs. Glancing left and right, Kevin spotted 2 orcs walking around the perimeter of the house. Although they looked nothing special as they wore no armor nor did they seem strong, Kevin was not fooled. Using his drone to scout the perimeter, Kevin had a general idea of the location of every guard in the vicinity, including Salug, who had gone to a nearby tavern to eat. Regarding Salug, from what he had collected these past few days, Salug's breaks were all around 15 to 20 minutes long, as he would quickly come back to his post. Although he hated his job, he was a diligent orc. Still, if there was one thing Kevin managed to observe, it was that whenever he had a break, he had to inform the other guards of his absence. Because of this rule, Kevin was quickly able to figure out who the other guards were. That is why he knew that the 2 orcs before him were guards. Although Kevin was most wary of Salug, the strength of the 2 orcs before him was not something to scoff at. From what he observed, in terms of strength, they were all within the C rank to B rank range, which was something that the present Kevin could not handle. Regardless of the fact that he had a system, there was no way he could fight the orcs with his current strength. But that was fine. Since his goal was to destroy the warehouse, Kevin did not need to be close to them nor did he have to fight them. Staring up towards the dark gray sky covered in clouds, Kevin softly mumbled, "It's about time it rained. Pita, pita." Not long after the words escaped from his mouth, a droplet of water fell towards the ground. Following the first droplet, soon came another, and from there, more and more droplets of water came crashing towards the ground. Extending his hand and feeling the rain falling down from the sky, from his dimensional space, Kevin took out a black cylindrical object that had a red button on the top. Ding. Pressing the red button, Kevin glanced at his watch and remained still. 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. All right. Fuao. Exactly 5 minutes after he pressed the button, Kevin took out a black square-shaped device that looked like a small vehicle from his dimensional space and threw it on the ground. Plam. Glancing at his watch, Kevin tapped on the screen, and the vehicle-like device before him moved forward a couple of meters. It's working, good. Seeing that the device worked, Kevin nodded his head in satisfaction. The device he was currently using was one of the newest ground drones available on the market back on Earth. Equipped with the most up-to-date cloaking function and sound dampening system, the product was something that could easily infiltrate secured locations without getting noticed. Although it would not work on the truly powerful people, it could more or less evade the perception of most people, unless they were actively seeking the device, and that would be a different story. If they were unaware of its presence, most people would not be able to detect it, which was enough. Thankfully, before coming to Imura, Kevin had brought the equipment with him. Since he loved using these kinds of devices and gadgets as they made his life easier, Kevin naturally brought the devices with him. Although he liked to fight with his sword, if he was presented with another easier option that did not involve him risking his life, Kevin would much rather take that option. He was no battle junkie, after all. Licking his lips and controlling the drone through his watch, the device quickly moved towards where the guards were standing. Pita, pita, pita. As the drone moved, the rain became even more aggressive, masking the already little sound the drone made. As he watched the drone move forward, staring towards the sky, Kevin softly mumbled, "I guess the effects of the sleeping ivy are starting to work." Although the drone he was using had very good cloaking and dampening devices, it was not completely foolproof. Had the guards been in the right state of mind, they would have instantly noticed the small trail that the drone left behind as it moved across the puddles of water on the ground. But that only applied if they were in their right state of mind. However, they were not, and that was because currently, another factor was at play. Sleeping ivy. That was the name of the poison Kevin had put on the air drone that was levitating up in the air. Using the rain as a way to camouflage the poison, Kevin released the poison in the air through his drone. Originally, he had planned on directly feeding the poison to the orcs through the food they ate at the tavern they frequented. However, after noticing the erratic climate, Kevin opted to directly spread the poison through the rain. The poison was rather weak, and a non-lethal one however. It was because of how mild the poison was that Kevin chose it. With the poison being extremely weak, once it entered their system, the orcs would have no idea they were poisoned. Normally, orcs would have been able to tell whether a poison had entered their system thanks to their strong constitution. However, that only applied to strong poisons. If they found themselves poisoned by a weak poison, their bodies would not react to it, and thus they were unable to know that they had been poisoned, which was exactly what Kevin was aiming for, as the poison he gave them was a poison that caused their senses to slightly decrease for a short period of time. The reason he chose this poison was self-explanatory. He wanted to increase the chances of his ground vehicle making it past them. Kevin did not want to make any mistakes. As long as he could reduce the chances of his plan failing, he would take it. It was never wrong to be cautious, and the result paid off. Not long after the poison fell on the orcs' faces, they suddenly seemed to be more lethargic. Although their backs were straight, their eyes were not as clear and lucid as they were before, making Kevin understand that they had been successfully poisoned. Therefore, not long after the drone moved, Kevin slowly drove it past the orcs, right towards the door that led to the warehouse. Tensely staring at the camera view from his watch, Kevin tapped on the screen of his watch. Initiate drop. As soon as Kevin tapped on the screen, the vehicle stopped moving. Shortly after, a small compartment of the drone opened up, revealing multiple thumb-sized devices, each about the size of a spider. Flick, flick, flick. Not long after the doors of the compartment opened up, the spider-like devices lit up with a red dot in the middle. Shortly after, the spider-like devices quickly moved away from the large vehicle and entered the door leading to the food warehouse through the narrow gap at the bottom. Good. The plan was almost completed. Staring at the spider-like devices entering the door from the distance, Kevin felt a slight pang in his heart as he recalled the fact that each of them was worth around 10,000 U. The reason why he was looking at them like that was that they were all going to explode soon. Yes, they were all loaded with explosives. Although their power was weaker than that of a regular grenade, when piled up together, they would without a doubt be able to create a massive explosion, especially since there were over 100 of them. Knowing this, Kevin knew that once they exploded, his money would also go along with the explosion, but in the end, he could only grit his teeth and endure it, as the 5-star sword manual was worth far more than that. In fact, comparing the value of the two was like comparing a Ferrari to a Fiat. Huge difference. All right, everything is set. Shortly after all of the small drones entered the house through the narrow gap of the door, using his watch, Kevin quietly recalled the main drone back. 3 minutes. Staring at the time of his watch, Kevin knew he was running low on time. In 3 minutes, he estimated that Salug would arrive. Increasing the speed of the ground vehicle, as soon as it arrived before Kevin, he quickly picked it up and ran as far away as possible from the warehouse. He could not allow himself to be too close to Salug, as he might actually be able to detect something. Huo. After stealthily running away in the distance, making sure that he was far enough, Kevin sighed in relief. This should be far enough. With a solemn look on his face, Kevin stared at the warehouse in the distance. After a couple of seconds, bringing his watch next to his mouth, Kevin tapped on the screen and softly mumbled, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. On the opposite side of where Kevin was, coldly glancing at the orc that stood in front of Zornoryua's house, Ren hid himself a couple of blocks away from him. He just stood still and observed the house before him. He was waiting for something. Ding. 10, 9, 8. Suddenly, Ren felt his watch vibrate and Kevin's voice entered his ears. Hearing the countdown, placing his hand on the sheath of his new sword, Bleak Star, Ren channeled his wind and fire scenes simultaneously, as blue streaks of light started appearing on the guard of the sword. Kraka, kraka, 7, 6, 5. With each passing second, the electricity revolving around the sheath of the sword became more and more glaring as the low muffled sound of thunder rumbling became more and more discernible. 4-3. Glancing at his watch indifferently, Ren remained still. 2, 1, 0. Then the countdown hit 0. Once it did, silence prevailed over the surroundings. However, the silence only lasted for a split second as an enormous explosion soon resounded in the distance. Boom. Good Kadrashuk. Chapter 174. Boom. What is going on? Feeling the tremendous explosion in the distance, the orc guarding Zornoryu house looked towards the direction where the explosion originated from. Because of the heavy rain, it was hard to discern what had happened. Glancing left and right, the orc suddenly took a step forward to get a better look at what had happened. Ha, who are you? Step. However, before he could find out what had happened, an obscure figure appeared a couple of meters from where he was standing in a slow and steady manner. Repeating once again, the orc shouted, I said who are you? He was once again met with total silence. Feeling that something was wrong, raising his weapon, a large double-edged axe, in the air, the orc once again shouted as his voice shook the nearby surroundings, and a powerful pressure exuded from his body. I've warned you already, state your name. Kraka, kraka. Stopping 10 meters away from the orc, the figure took a stance as blue streaks of light appeared on the tip of his sword. Ha, E- rank? As he stared at the figure before him, the orc was taken aback. That was because he was able to sense the person's strength. And what he found out shocked him, but not in a negative way. He found out that the figure before him was only E- rank. Something that was almost on the level of cannon fodder in this world, especially for him since he was already C+ rank borderline B rank. To him, E rank was like swatting a fly. How could someone as weak as him actually think he could harm him? You think you can harm me with that pitiful amount of strength? Lifting his double-edged axe and pointing it towards Ren, the orc glared at him, who remained still throughout the whole time as he gathered energy towards his sword. Annoyed by the fact that he was once again being ignored, the orc decided to make a move. Since you won't talk, I'll make you talk. Boom. Tensing his muscles, the ground beneath the orc cracked as his body propelled forwards towards Ren's direction. In a swinging motion, the orc swung the heavy axe towards where Ren was standing. Die. Apathetically staring at the orc that was approaching him at extreme speeds. Raising his left hand, Ren suddenly snapped his finger. Snap. Kaha-hu. As soon as Ren's finger snapped, the orc suddenly found his body, abruptly halting for a split second. Following that, the world around him became dyed in white, and the figure he was looking at disappeared. A subtle clicking sound followed his disappearance. Click. The third movement of the keiki-style void step. Appearing on the opposite side of the orc was Ren's cold figure. Behind him, a blue trail of light appeared as the muffled sound of thunderbolts continuously resounded across the area. Kraka, kraka, spurt. A couple of seconds after the exchange, an arm suddenly flew in the distance as blood spilled everywhere. Thud. At the same time the arm flew in the air, taking a knee, the orc supported his body with his axe. Kaha, how could someone as weak as you harm me? He, a C+ rank orc, actually got injured from someone that had just entered E rank. Humiliating. If the others found out what had happened, he would become the laughingstock of the city. Thinking along those lines, his deep voice resounded across the area as he shouted. Unacceptable. He couldn't allow such a situation to happen. He must kill the weakling that was before him in order to wash the shame away. Who you? Unaware of the orc's thoughts, exhaling as turbid air escaped from his mouth, feeling a slight stinging sensation on the left side of his body, Ren's cold eyes looked towards where the pain was coming from, and he soon noticed his left hand missing. No anger, pain, resentment, or any emotions were displayed on his face as he looked at the left side of his body, which was bleeding profoundly. Ignoring the missing arm and turning his attention back towards the orc in the distance, Ren softly mumbled, pity. This was the first time he couldn't one-shot his opponent. Although the orc before him had a small hole on the right side of his body, and was somewhat injured, he had still not killed his opponent in one shot. In order to kill the orc, Ren had made ample preparations with the twin gargoyle artifact and his strongest move, the third movement of the keiki. This was supposed to be his strongest combo, and yet his opponent was still not dead. He had failed. But this was within Ren's estimation. His opponent was an orc, and was around 2 ranks higher than him. Their skin and defense were far stronger than that of a human. Had his opponent been a human, they might have died in one move. However, sadly his opponent wasn't, as they specialized in defense and raw power. Fortunately, although he hadn't killed him in one shot, he had still injured him. This was enough for Ren. Clenching the right part of his chest, the orc glared towards Ren's direction as his deep voice echoed across the surroundings. Shortly after, as the features of his aggressor became more discernible, the orc was taken aback as his deep voice resounded across the space. Human? A human? What is a human doing here? As he looked at the feature of the individual that had attacked him, the orc was able to identify the fact that it was a human. Although he had never seen a human before, he was aware of their existence. Therefore, he was able to quickly identify the fact that his aggressor was human due to the fact that they weren't short and had no pointy ears. Staring at Ren's figure in the distance whose arm was missing, the orc slowly stood up. I thought humans were smart, but it looks like you're stupid. I can tell that you're weak. How dare the likes of you try to kill me with that pitiful amount of strength? Pausing for a second, lifting his axe in the air, and putting it on his shoulder, the orc continued. I don't understand why you would try to fight me, but soon reinforcement will come, and if you're not dead by the time I am finished with you, you will die by the hands of the others. Coldly staring at the orc before him, Ren slowly said, You talk too much, but your thoughts are unnecessary. The perimeter around us is sealed. No one saw nor heard anything. Having set up the dimensional space around them beforehand, no one knew of what happened here. Although dimensional spaces weren't hard to discover, now that everyone's attention was towards the explosion in the distance, Ren knew that he didn't have to worry about people discovering what had happened. At least not for a short period of time. Glancing around and noticing a transparent membrane covering the area he was in, the orc glared at Ren as he shouted, You think it matters? With your strength, what does that pitiful trick of yours matter? Picking up his weapon, the double-edged axe, the orc was about to once again attack Ren. Spurt. However, before he was about to move, to his horror, he suddenly found himself unable to move his body. Kaha, what? Weakly looking down on his body, the orc soon found a hand piercing through his chest as green blood splattered on the ground. Using the last remaining energy he could muster, turning his head to the side to see who was responsible for killing him, the orc soon saw two eyes coldly looking at him. Demon? Those were the last words that escaped from his mouth as he found himself slowly losing consciousness. Thud. Staring at the orc that had just died, Angelica had a complicated expression on her face as she looked at Ren in the distance. Did you really have to sacrifice your arm to kill him? Staring at the pool of blood that was leaking from where his left hand was supposed to be, Ren watched as the rain carried his blood away, removing all evidence of his presence. Glancing at Angelica, Ren indifferently said, Yes, this was the fastest and quietest scenario that I had envisioned. Any other plan would have taken too long. Hearing Ren's response, Angelica only had one word in her mind. Ruthless. In Angelica's eyes, the current Ren was absolutely ruthless. In order to have her appear behind the orc to sneak attack him, Ren had purposefully sacrificed his arm, the one that had her in her ring form. Taking advantage of the moment, when the orc was busy looking at Ren, Angelica turned into her original form and snuck up from behind him. With him unaware of her existence, she stealthily killed him without causing too much of a commotion. Fast and swiftly. This was the first time Angelica had killed someone whose rank matched her so swiftly and quietly. Ren's plan was indeed the fastest and most efficient plan, however. It came at a cost of an arm. What about your arm? Hearing Angelica's question, staring at his severed arm in the distance, Ren indifferently said, I can reattach it. Frowning, Angelica nodded her head. She understood this part as there were methods out there that could help regrow limbs. But what really baffled her was the fact that Ren was showing no signs of pain despite the fact that his arm was missing. Okay. Plank. Turning around, sensing something, Ren looked towards the door of the house opposite to him, which shortly after abruptly opened, revealing the features of a young orc. Ortis, what happened? Opening the door of his house, Zornoryu called out for his bodyguard. However, he was soon left speechless by the sight before him. First, a massive explosion resounded across the distance. Shortly after, he suddenly heard noises coming from outside the house. Not even a minute after he heard the noises, as he went out to check out what had happened, he found his bodyguard dead, coldly lying on the floor. Standing on top of its corpse was a slim pale figure with deep blue eyes, whose arm was missing. Next to him, a beautiful woman with two horns on her head appeared. What's going on? Coldly staring at Zornoryu, who was in a daze, Ren glanced at Angelica and indifferently said, Angelica, it's your turn. Yes. Fayua. Suddenly appearing before Zornoryu, Angelica's enchanting figure coldly looked at him. A majestic red hue shrouded her body as Zornoryu suddenly found himself unable to move. Finally realizing that Angelica was a demon, Zornoryu shouted incredulously, What? A demon? Ignoring Zornoryu, turning around and looking at Ren, Angelica asked. Him. Apathetically looking between Zornoryu and Angelica, Ren nodded his head. Yes, kill him. With Angelica having regained most of her powers back, Zornoryu was as good as dead, especially since she was a rank higher than him. Even if he was a genius, without preparations, bridging the gap in rank was something that couldn't be done. Not even Ren could do it. Unless he had planned a lot beforehand, Ren couldn't defeat someone whose rank was higher than his. Just wasn't possible. Turning around as he walked towards the direction of where his hand was located, Ren coldly said, Kill him. Pausing for a second, picking up his arm from the ground, Ren took out a green potion from his pocket. Uncapping the lid of the potion, Ren placed the arm back towards where it was supposed to be, and downed the potion. Once again staring at Angelica, Ren indifferently said, Kill him, and let the world know of your existence and your presence. Kill him and let Imra be engulfed in the flames of war. Yes. Nodding her head, turning her attention back towards Zornoryu, who was paralyzed on the spot due to her skill, Angelica raised her hand and channeled her demonic powers. Shua. Soon the surroundings shook as a reddish-black hue emanated from Angelica's body. Who are you? Kaha. Reaching her hand forward and grabbing Zornoryu by the face, Angelica channeled her powers, and soon, to Zornoryu's horror, he found his body rapidly shrinking as his energy was quickly getting sapped away from his body. Struggling with all his might, Zornoryu shouted, Nua, release me. Do you not know who I am? I am the next. Shut up and die. Increasing the intensity of her absorption, Zornoryu soon found himself unable to speak as his resistance decreased with each passing second. Soon his body shrunk completely as he started looking more and more like a mummy. Not long after, taking one last breath, Zornoryu died. Kaha. Throughout the whole time, he couldn't even put up a fight. Thud. Throwing Zornoryu's body away, Angelica knew. She knew that today marked the beginning of the end. On this day, the flames of war shall envelop him, leaving nothing but devastation in its wake. And this was all due to one man. Ren Dover. Chapter 175. It has been about 10 days since Kevin destroyed the food warehouse, and I killed Zornoryu. A lot has happened since then. Rumbly, rumbly, rumbly. Staring towards the distance, thousands upon thousands of orcs, all equipped with heavy armor and weapons, marched towards the gates of Gudkotr. An oppressive aura enveloped the whole of the city as bloodlust exuded from the bodies of each of the orcs in the distance. Watching the spectacle from afar, a faint smile appeared on my lips. The plan was a success. After I had Angelica kill Zornoryu directly, everything went as I envisioned. The orcs traced everything to the demons, due to Angelica's residual demonic energy lingering on the corpses of Zornoryu and the bodyguard. Prior to killing Zornoryu, I had specifically asked Angelica to do that so that the orcs wouldn't question who killed Zornoryu. Moreover, with the fact that Zornoryu was killed at the same time that the food supplies were destroyed, the orcs came to the conclusion that the demons were responsible for the incident despite the fact that there was no evidence to support that conclusion. Everything was perfect. Well, almost everything. If I had to be honest, these past few days have been quite scary. Naturally, because of the incident, the orc chief was beyond enraged. The aura he exuded the past few days was something beyond frightening, as every time I glanced towards the tower in the middle of Gudkotr, it felt as though I was staring at death itself. Because of this, Kevin and I had no choice but to lay low for that period of time. Every day felt as though there was barely any oxygen in the air. Suffocating. Staring at the army of orcs from afar, Kevin, who was standing next to me, glanced towards my arm which was currently bandaged, and asked, "Is your arm really okay?" Ever since Ren had come back from his mission, Kevin noticed the state of his arm. Although he wasn't particularly concerned as arms could be regrown with modern potions, Kevin was concerned that it might affect their future plans, as he was now injured. Glancing at Kevin, I shook my head. Honestly, it hurts like hell. I wasn't lying. The pain I experienced right after Monarch's indifference deactivated almost caused me to pass out. It was mortifying. It was so painful that I couldn't even describe the feeling in words. What made matters worse was that even after 10 days had passed, I could still not move my arm properly. I think it may be due to something like the nerve endings of my arms not being fully connected, but I wasn't too sure. I wasn't an expert in this kind of stuff. Frowning slightly, Kevin curiously asked, "How long do you think it will take before you can use your arm like normal again?" Staring at my left arm for a couple of seconds, I mused. Maybe a couple of days? No, that was unrealistic. Unless I consumed an advanced potion, I wouldn't be able to have the same degree of control as before. Although my arm was in fact healing, every time I moved it, it felt as though electricity was coursing through it. The feeling was almost the same as when you accidentally hit your funny bone. Not very pleasant. Staring at my arm for a couple of more seconds, Kevin nodded his head. Turning his head around, Kevin proceeded to look towards the orcs in the distance. "What do you think the chances of the orcs winning are?" Without hesitation, I responded. "Slim to none, honestly." Sharing a similar thought, Kevin nodded his head. "I think so too. Although the orcs were strong and fierce, their chances of winning the fight weren't that high, especially since their numbers were far lower than that of the demons. If they were going to have an all-out war against the demons, the chances of them winning were practically null. They may be able to reclaim some land, but that was the most they could accomplish, and that would be at the sacrifice of countless orcs." Thinking thus far, shaking his head and glancing at Ren next to him, Kevin asked, "So what's next?" Placing my hand on my chin as I fell into deep thought, I frowned. "Well, now that we've pretty much accomplished the hardest part of the plan, all that we have to do next is reap our rewards." Well, still not quite there, but almost there. Although this was indeed the hardest part of the mission, infiltrating Seton was going to pose quite a challenge. Even though most of the demon forces would be sent out to face the orcs, they would still leave behind some of the stronger demons. The reason I was saying it was easier than what I had just done was because there was a high chance that the strongest demons residing in Seton were not going to be there. With the orc chief Omogld leading the battle, the leader of the demons in charge of Seton would have no choice but to move out as well. Otherwise, they were bound to lose as he was the only demon nearby that could fight on equal terms with Omogld. Hearing the word rewards being mentioned, Kevin looked at me with a look of surprise. "Rewards? Seeing the surprise in Kevin's face, whilst still staring at the army of orcs in the distance, I proceeded to add, "Mind Breaker Curse Cure of course, and a couple of other things. Don't worry, there are things for you too." Taken aback, Kevin pointed towards himself. "Me? Yeah." Seeing me confirm, frowning, Kevin said, "But I've already gotten my 5-star sword manual. It wouldn't be an even deal if I took something." He had already gotten a 5-star sword art. If he took rewards, wouldn't that mean that their deal was unfair? Although Kevin trusted Ren, he was apprehensive at the thought of owing someone, as it could lead to complicated situations arising in the future. Glancing at Kevin from the corner of my eyes, understanding his thoughts, I shook my head. "Well, if you're not going to take it then suit yourself. I'll just leave it there since it has no use for me." "No use for you?" "Yep, that's why I thought you could use it. You don't have to owe me anything if you take it." It was true. The item I was giving Kevin was something that I couldn't use, so there was no point in me keeping it. Just take it as me giving a friend a gift. Taken aback, Kevin asked. We're friends. Smiling at Kevin, a chuckle escaped from my lips. Well, we've pretty much been through life and death situations. It wouldn't be strange to call ourselves friends, or is it just me? I wasn't lying when I said this. Having spent a lot of time with Kevin and going through a lot of life and death situations, I pretty much considered him a friend. Staring at me deeply, Kevin proceeded to nod his head. No, you're right. He also felt the same way as Ren, but he never really dwelled too deeply into it, as he thought perhaps it was just him, and Ren only thought of him as someone with whom he had made a deal. Honestly, Kevin was secretly glad Ren felt the same way as him, as despite his popularity, he had never had a proper friend in the academy. He was quite happy, unaware of Kevin's thoughts. Smiling as I glanced at him on my right, I teased. So, are you going to take the reward, or not? Smiling bitterly, Kevin shook his head. I will take it. Good. To be honest, the item was supposed to belong to him anyway, so it was only natural that he got it. After all, the stronger he got, the happier I was. He was the one with the highest chance of defeating the Demon King after all. Although I acknowledged the fact that if I continued this way there was a chance for me to be able to be on par with the Demon King. With Kevin as reassurance, I wouldn't have to worry too much. That was as long as we had enough time to grow. But if there was one thing I learned from being in this world for the past 7 months, it was that life was a bitch. When you expect something to happen, the world would suddenly flip its middle finger at you and present you with a scenario outside of your prediction, catching you off guard. Therefore, I stopped expecting. If the world will throw something that does not match what I envisioned, I'll just get strong enough so that I could retaliate in kind. I was no longer planning on being passive like before, staring at the army that had started moving out of the city, recalling something as I glanced at Kevin who was standing next to me similarly looking at the army in the distance. I said, wait here, I've still got something to do. I'll be back shortly. Taken aback, Kevin asked, what? Where are you going? They are about to leave. Glancing at the army below us, I rolled my eyes. So, it's not like they are running. We were talking about an army of thousands upon thousands of orcs each wearing large, bulky metallic armor. They weren't going to be the hardest people to follow. Although yes, their strong bodies allowed them to move fast despite the fact that they were in large armor, it still took time for them to go out, so we still had half a day. Realizing this, Kevin scratched his head in embarrassment as he said, I guess you're right. How long will it take? About an hour. Maybe less, who knows? Alright, I'll wait for you. Cool, see ya soon. Moving out of the area we were in, I stared towards the distance as a faint smile appeared on my lips and thought to myself, hopefully, what I'm about to do next plays out nicely. Inside of a dark confined location, kneeling on the ground was a figure whose hands and legs were bound by thick metal chains that connected all the way towards the ceiling. The figure had its eyes closed, and if not for the faint movement of his chest, someone would have easily mistaken him for dead. In the dark world, silence prevailed over the surroundings. Clank. Suddenly, the silence was disrupted as a hooded figure calmly walked in and stopped right before the figure that was kneeling. Staring at the figure kneeling down on the ground, the hooded figure whose features were obscure called out, Silug, Kurar. A minute after his name was called out by the hooded figure, slowly raising his head, the features of the figure kneeling on the ground became more apparent, revealing a white orc with a massive scar tracing over half of his face. His deeply sunken green eyes were rather hazy as a result of the isolated confinement, however, the boundless bloodlust hidden within them could not be masked. Staring at the hooded figure before him, Silug's deep yet groggy voice resounded across the space. Who are you? Who am I? Raising his head, the hooded figure slowly said, someone who can help you. Help me? Nodding his head, the hooded figure slowly said, yes, I can grant you freedom. Freedom? Taking a couple of seconds to understand what the hooded figure was talking about. After a couple of seconds, lowering his head, Silug responded, no, I do not wish for freedom. Unbothered by the denial, the hooded figure once again spoke. Revenge. I can grant you revenge. Raising his head once more, Silug weakly asked, revenge? Nodding his head, the hooded figure once again said, yes, I can grant you revenge. Grant me revenge? Yes, I can help you get revenge on Omagulg, the orc chief. Hearing the name Omagulg being mentioned, as if some life returned in his eyes, Silug asked, is what you said true? Weakly clenching his fists, Silug deeply stared at the hooded figure before him. What do you want in exchange? What do I want? Smiling behind the hood, the figure slowly spoke. In exchange, I want your loyalty. No, that doesn't sound right. Raising his head, the features of the hooded figure became more discernible, revealing a pale youth with deep blue eyes. A human? Staring at Silug, who was looking back at him with a trace of shock in his eyes, the youth extended his hand forward and slowly clenched it. All you need to do is be my piece. To be continued. Hope you liked today's video. Join the community by subscribing and dropping a like. I'll be back with another update as soon as possible. See you then.